Rise of the European Emperor by Taishan Laonyo.
Chapter 1881, Making a Feint to the East and Attacking the West. The strength of the Ming dynasty is beyond doubt. In this era, I am afraid that no country can surpass the Ming dynasty in power. Once the Ming dynasty court realizes the usefulness of oil and mobilizes the power of the court to develop oil, it will be a small matter to produce hundreds of thousands of caddies or even millions of caddies per year. What Marin didn't know was that his inadvertent means of cheating oil from the Ming dynasty also brought about major changes in the history of the Ming dynasty. Because the Ming army fell in love with using incendiary bombs. In a later battle, the Ming army guarding the northern border city used a large amount of fierce oil to burn the siege grassland army so that they could not take care of themselves. Then, history changed. From then on, if the soldiers defending the city had enough fierce oil, the enemy would never dare to attach to the city. Because it was clearly given to the other side to burn. The wall of fire created by the fierce oil at the base of the city wall is enough to withstand any fierce siege force. However, a large amount of fierce oil is used in the defense of the city, and a large amount of oil is needed to extract it. Therefore, the Ming dynasty later developed a complete set of technologies for drilling oil wells using the Zuotongjing technology, which increased the annual oil production of the Ming dynasty to more than 1 million jin. Later, the Ming dynasty's wine master accidentally discovered the method of distilling and refining gasoline, and got rid of his dependence on the North Sea Kingdom and began to produce gasoline and kerosene on his own. However, he did not know how to use the remaining scrap, such as diesel. Then, the North Sea Kingdom continued to purchase these scrap, took them back to refine diesel, and provided fuel for its own diesel engines. Of course, that was all in the future. For now, everything is just the beginning. After the Gama's fleet discovered that the entire coastal area of the Daming Hujian began to impose martial law, they saw that there was no benefit to be gained. In addition, the fleet was later troubled by shipworms, and several ships needed major repairs. So the Gama ordered the fleet to return to Hong Kong Island temporarily. Then, return to Malacca for a comprehensive repair. When he comes next time, he will bring a large number of craftsmen to find a port on the coast of Daming, establish a permanent base and dock, and strengthen the fleet's ability to fight persistently along the coast of Daming. However, the Gama did not know that this time he would have a terrible ending waiting for him. Not to mention the situation in the Far East, a large rescue operation was in full swing in the distant Atlantic Ocean. This large rescue operation was specially arranged by Marin to rescue the 38 living sailors of the hijacked Sire. They were sent by Rui Silva, the governor of the Azores Islands of Portugal, to a sugarcane plantation 10 kilometers west of Heroes Port to serve as slaves to grow sugarcane. Marin felt that these unfortunate people should not be ignored. Moreover, rescuing them would also help to win the hearts of the crew and sailors under his command. So, a well-planned large rescue operation was launched in the Atlantic Ocean. Because he did not want to fall out with the Kingdom of Portugal, Marin did not directly dispatch his own warships, but deliberately modified several British-style cog sailing ships to pretend to be British pirates to do this. Marin even hired a group of real British pirates to get involved in this matter to confuse the Portuguese. Although the Portuguese could definitely guess that it was him who did it, Marin didn't care. In addition to avoiding leaving a handle for the Portuguese to catch, he did this as a warning: I can play dirty too. Although the North Sea Kingdom has a small number of seafaring people, England has a lot. Moreover, Marin is a very large vassal of the Kingdom of England and is fully capable of calling on English sailors and pirates. If the Portuguese don't want to be harassed and have no peace in the future, they can only endure it. Because, on the surface, Marin is the barefoot and Portugal is the shoe-wearing nobleman. There is no need to fight porcelain with broken bricks. Moreover, Marin also saved face for Portugal. He did not tear his face and use warships, but used English pirates in a roundabout way, which also left a way out for the Portuguese. As long as they are not fools, the Portuguese will know how to choose. The Azores are not very important to Portugal, because there is no historical occupation and development of Brazilian colonies, so the Azores have not become a maritime transportation hub, and there is not much value. The only value here is probably the sugarcane plantations owned by the great nobles on the archipelago. The Azores are known as an important sugar-producing area in Portugal because of their warm climate and the ability to grow sugarcane. However, Portugal also has the Madeira Islands and the São Tomé Island on the coast of West Africa as sugarcane planting bases. Therefore, the relatively remote Azores are not unimportant, but they are not particularly important either. Portugal stationed 7 warships here, but they were all small warships of 1 or 200 tons. However, the British cog sailing ship, which had not yet been improved into a galleon, still could not beat the Portuguese carrack and caravel. After all, artillery has become an important combat weapon for Portuguese warships of this era. And the British cog sailing ship is still a ship platform for boarding battles. Therefore, despite the modification, Marin still did not intend to use the British cog sailing ship to confront the Portuguese head-on, but planned to use a strategy. This strategy is to make a feint to the east and attack the west, and lure the tiger away from the mountain. The Azores is an archipelago, but the islands are not particularly concentrated, but scattered on a 640-kilometer-long ocean. Among them, Terceira Island, where the capital Angra do Hero is located in the middle of the archipelago. In fact, Terceira Island is not the largest island in the Azores, but the third largest island. Ahead of it are São Miguel Island and Pico Island. However, because it is located in the middle, it is convenient to manage all nearby islands. In addition, the island has a flat terrain and abundant fresh water resources, so it was designated as the capital. The 7 Portuguese warships were stationed in Angra do Hero and were not assigned to other islands. The main reason is that pirates have not yet emerged in this era, and the defense pressure on other islands is very light. And Marin's tactic of making a feint to the east and attacking the west this time is to send people to attack São Miguel Island, the largest island in the archipelago, to attract the warships of Angra do Hero to rescue. Marin also thought about sending a few pirate ships to attack São Miguel Island for a long time. First of all, you can't send too few. If only 1 or 2 ships are sent to attack São Miguel Island, it is estimated that Angra do Hero will despise it and only send 2 or 3 warships to rescue, which will not achieve the purpose of luring the tiger away from the mountain. However, you can't send too many. If too many pirate ships are sent, it will scare the Portuguese in Angra d'Água and make them dare not send ships to rescue. So, after much calculation, Marin finally decided to send 6 pirate ships to attack São Miguel Island to attract the Portuguese warships in Angra d'Água to rescue. 6 ships is a very delicate number. This scale makes the Portuguese in Angra d'Água dare not underestimate it and will not randomly send 2 or 3 ships to rescue. However, they will not be too scared. After all, the scale of 6 ships is 1 less than the 7 warships of the Portuguese. In addition, Marin will deliberately deploy only 2 or 3 6-pound cannons on each pirate ship to bombard the towns on São Miguel Island. This kind of firepower can not only make the Portuguese dare not underestimate it, but also not scare the other side from fighting. After all, the number of artillery on the Portuguese warships was still considerable, although the caliber was not large. At about the same time when the Gama's fleet returned to the temporary base on Hong Kong Island, a pirate fleet consisting of 6 Kirk sailing ships also arrived at the waters of São Miguel Island, the largest island southeast of the Azores, and began to attack the island. Chapter 1882. This is difficult. At this time, the development level of São Miguel Island was not high, and there was only one port city, Ponta Delgada, located at the southwest end of the island. Although São Miguel Island is the largest island in the Azores and its area is nearly twice that of the third largest island, Terceira Island, it is a volcanic island with many earthquakes and small-scale volcanic eruptions. In addition, the terrain on the island is rugged and the proportion of plains is not high. Therefore, the Portuguese talents focused their development on Terceira Island. But in any case, the island is still very valuable for development. After all, there are still many places that can be used on the 759 square kilometers of the island. For example, sugar cane, grapes, etc. can be planted, and cattle and sheep can be grazed. For the Portuguese nobles, although the earthquakes and the eruptions of 2 volcanoes on São Miguel Island are terrible. However, the fertile soil produced by the volcanic eruption is also an excellent farmland. Therefore, some Portuguese nobles still recruited some farmers on the island to plant sugar cane and grapes here to supply sugar and wine to the local area. Anyway, even if there is an earthquake or volcanic eruption on São Miguel Island, only the subordinates and farmers will die, not the nobles themselves. Perhaps, those nobles who own large tracts of land on São Miguel Island will never set foot on this island in their lifetime. But it is undeniable that due to the high price of sugar and the importance of wine in Europe, this island is still very valuable. Ponta Delgada, the only port on the island, is also an important export port for sugar and wine. It is related to the interests of many nobles, and Portugal cannot give up this place. When the 6 British cogs arrived at Ponta Delgada, the locals did not realize the danger. After all, it is rare for foreign ships to arrive on an island in the Atlantic Ocean far away from the European mainland. But when the 6 British cogs raised the pirate flag, Ponta Delgada was in chaos. The fishermen and sailors in the port abandoned their ships and went ashore, hiding in the city of Ponta Delgada, shivering inside the city walls. This small island town is not big, but it is still solid. At this time, because of the threat of pirates, more than 2,000 residents inside and outside the city hid in, making the city extremely crowded. Under the horrified eyes of the residents in the city, more than 300 pirates were sent on 6 ships to land and plunder all merchant ships and fishing boats outside the city, and plundered several villages outside the city. However, for some reason, those pirates did not destroy the ships on the dock. After plundering several villages near the port of Ponta Delgada, the pirates began to besiege the city of Ponta Delgada. However, the pirates did not storm the city, but chose to use the 6-pound cannon on the bow to bombard the gate of Ponta Delgada. The 6 6-pound cannons on the bow of the 6 ships bombarded the south gate of Ponta Delgada port together, making the south gate look a little shaky. At the critical moment, Fonseca, the lord of Ponta Delgada, ordered the use of bricks and staff to block the gate of the south gate to prevent the enemy from breaking in after the gate was broken. Ponta Delgada is a small town in a remote area, and the city gate naturally cannot be an iron gate, and even the iron sheet is not nailed on. Therefore, the oak gate could not withstand the long-term bombardment of artillery. Fortunately, the 6-pound cannon used by the pirates was not a powerful cannon and could not blow through the oak door in a short time. Therefore, before the oak gate was blown up, the residents of the city finally blocked the gate hole. At night, for some unknown reason, the pirate fleet temporarily left the port of Ponta Delgada and ran to another place to anchor and rest. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lord Fonseca ordered 20 sailors to escape from the city, sneak into a 100-ton merchant ship in the port, and drive the ship to leave the port of Ponta Delgada at night and go to the heroic port of Terceira Island for help. What they didn't know was that in a hidden place outside Ponta Delgada, 2 North Sea spies who were responsible for monitoring the city put down their telescopes, smiled and clapped each other, and said, "It's done." In the next few days, the 6 pirate ships bombarded the south gate of Ponta Delgada in an orderly manner, and they didn't seem to be in a hurry at all. 3 days later, in Porto Ingra, about 300 kilometers away, Azores Governor Rui Silva received a distress letter from São Miguel Island. What? São Miguel Island was attacked. English pirates? Rui Silva was a little confused. Are you sure it's English pirates? Rui Silva asked again in disbelief. Sure. Governor, our Lord Fonseca said that those ships are English sailing ships, and their attack orders are also in English, said the sailor who came to report the news. Why did the English pirates come here to make trouble? Don't they always attack the French? Rui Silva was a little confused. In fact, if it were the famous generals in ancient China who were deeply influenced by strategies, they would probably be able to guess the strategy of luring the tiger away from the mountain. After all, this kind of thing was very common in ancient Chinese wars. However, this is ancient Europe, and strategies are not popular. And Rui Silva is not a very smart person, so he didn't see the trick. He dared not rescue São Miguel Island. You know, there are many estates of powerful Portuguese nobles on São Miguel Island, and even several royal estates. He couldn't afford to offend any of these big guys. If he didn't rescue, his term as governor would be over. So, he could only decide to send warships for rescue. By the way, how strong are those pirates, for example, firepower? Before the rescue, Rui Silva asked about the strength of the pirates. The sailor who came to report the news thought for a while and said, "There are more than 300 pirates who landed and looted the village, and there are probably more than 100 people on the ship. As for firepower, they used 6 cannons to attack the city. However, the city lord said that each of their ships should have 3 cannons, arranged at the bow and stern." More than 400 people, hiss, Rui Silva took a breath after hearing this. You know, as the governor of the Azores, he has 7 warships under his command, but only 420 sailors. If it was just a boarding battle, Rui Silva had no confidence that he could beat the pirates. You know, England has a tradition of pirates, and the pirates' boarding skills are much better than ordinary sailors. Although Portugal is also a maritime power, it has never done much pirate work. Portuguese sailors mainly attacked the west coast of Africa, mainly engaged in trade and landing to attack black villages, and were not good at boarding battles. Unlike the English, who attacked the French and French ships all day long, they were very familiar with boarding battles. Fortunately, the Portuguese also knew their own weaknesses, so they later focused on developing a naval battle mode of artillery bombardment and achieved success. In the Battle of Calicut in India a few years ago, although the Spanish were the main force, it was also a huge success in artillery naval battles. Although the Azores fleet only had 7 small warships, each ship had at least 7 or 8 cannons. In terms of vitality, it is definitely stronger than the pirates. To be on the safe side, Rui Silva decided to send out 6 warships, leaving only 1 warship to protect Porto Ingra. This news was discovered by spies stationed in the Azores by the North Sea Kingdom. Then, it was passed to 4 warships 200 kilometers north of Terceira Island overnight. This is difficult. The commander of the 4 warships, Terrell, scratched his head. The 4 warships he brought were also modified British cog sailing ships, and the total number of guns on the 4 ships was only 12. The Portuguese warship that stayed in Porto Ingra had 10 guns on board. If the 2 sides were to fight, they would certainly have a chance of winning, but it would definitely not be easy. After all, the Portuguese warship with 10 guns would definitely give them a hard time. If the North Sea Kingdom's regular warships came, they would naturally not be afraid of this Portuguese warship. But they were all modified British cog sailing ships, which were thin and could not withstand a beating. If one of them was sunk by a Portuguese warship, it would be a lot of fun. Chapter 1883 We are pirates with principles. At this time, Captain Iharu, Terrell's adjutant, suddenly said, "Sir, why don't we send another ship to lure away that warship?" Lure away that ship? Terrell was stunned for a moment, but soon understood what Niharu meant, which was to lure the tiger away from the mountain again. Then, Terrell sent a ship to attack São Jorge Island, which was relatively close to Terceira Island. São Jorge Island was very close to Terceira Island, and the letter for help was delivered to Ingra do Porto in half a day. Hearing that there was only one pirate ship, Rui Silva sent out the last warship without thinking. His adjutant, Ravelho, reminded him, "Sir, there is no warship to protect Porto Ingra." Rui Silva waved his hand and said, "It's okay. Porto Ingra is an extremely solid fortress, and it is also protected by artillery. There are hundreds of garrisons in the city, and we are not afraid of pirate attacks at all. Moreover, Porto Ingra is the only port on Terceira Island that can be docked. But the pirate ship dare not land again, because it will be hit by the artillery on the city wall." Rui Silva was right. In this era, large ships dare not dock without professional docks. Large ships are not small boats, and they are not afraid of being stranded. If a small boat is stranded, the sailors can push the boat away with force. If a large ship is stranded, it will be finished and can only wait for high tide. You know, there are no lifting machinery in this era, and ships rely heavily on natural forces. Terceira Island is not big, and there is only one good port in Porto Ingra around it. Even if a pirate ship wants to attack Terceira Island, it will be a problem for the ship to dock. Before, the pirate ships attacked São Miguel Island and São Jorge Island, and they all stopped at the only local port to land. However, there was no artillery in the castle of the local port to fight back, so they could only watch the pirates land at the dock and dared not go out of the city to fight. Because there were only dozens of garrisons on the two islands, they did not dare to provoke pirates with hundreds of people. After the only warship in Hero Port left, a pile of smoke suddenly rose on the island, and then 3 pirate ships stopped in the sea 10 kilometers west of Hero Port. Then, dozens of rafts were thrown down, carrying 150 sailors in batches, and began to land on the beach. Because it was broad daylight, their actions were naturally seen clearly by the Portuguese on the shore. Then, someone notified Rui Silva in Hero City 10 kilometers away of this situation. What? 1 or 200 pirates used rafts to forcibly land near the Silva plantation. Rui Silva panicked. He did not expect that this group of pirates would not play by the rules and land on the beach with rafts. You know, using rafts to land on the beach is easy, but you can't take away large property. Therefore, pirates usually attack ready-made ports. In this way, you can use the docks on the port to ship large looted property. If you send rafts and small boats to land, it is convenient. However, where there is no port, there must be no towns nearby, and there is no money. What can you get by robbing those small villages? Originally, Rui Silva also felt a little strange. It was not until the second group of people who reported the news came to tell him that the pirates took away the slaves that Silva's plantation had captured a few months ago that Rui Silva suddenly realized it, and then his face turned pale. So that's it. So that's it. No matter how stupid he was, he reacted, "What kind of pirates are these? It's clearly the army of the North Sea." The other party's methods are very clever. First, they pretended to be pirates to attack San Miguel Island and diverted the 6 warships in Porto Ingra, and then attacked San Jorge Island and diverted the only warship left. Then, they began to land and attack the Silva plantation, snatching away the enslaved sailors from the North Sea Kingdom. This was a very clever trick. Moreover, the fact that they sent 1 or 200 people to land also made Rui Silva in Hero City dare not act rashly. Because he only had more than 100 garrison soldiers. Not to mention that he might not be able to defeat the enemy, and Rui Silva did not dare to send everyone out of the city and give up guarding the most important port city in the Azores, Hero Port. So, he could only watch the soldiers of the North Sea Kingdom's Marines rescue the 38 enslaved sailors in the Silva manner. Before leaving, as if to vent their anger, the North Sea Kingdom sailors burned all the houses in the Silva plantation. Thinking of the news from the land that his own baronies had been attacked in various ways, Rui Silva didn't understand that what he had done had been clearly investigated by others. Moreover, a strong revenge was given. He only made a profit of more than 30,000 gold coins from robbing the transport ship of the North Sea Kingdom. However, the loss of the barony has exceeded 20,000 gold coins. The most terrifying thing is that his only son, who was only a few years old, was kidnapped for a long time, which scared the people of Baron Silva half to death. Although the kidnappers sent the man back half a day later. However, the young master who was sent back had a small note on him, which read, "I can't kill your country, but I can kill you, and your son." Combined with the so-called pirate incident in the Azores, Rui Silva understood everything. It was all done by Marin of the North Sea Kingdom. The other party's methods are sophisticated and vicious. Compared with him, he is simply too weak. The most terrifying thing is that his people can kill his only son at any time. Thinking of this, Rui Silva collapsed in his chair and murmured, I have provoked a ruthless person who should not be provoked. However, the matter is not over yet. A few days after the rescue operation, a Portuguese merchant ship loaded with Indian spices was hijacked near the waters of the Madeira Islands. The one responsible for the hijacking was Captain Jack and his Black Pearl, who Marin valued very much. Because it was modified, the Black Pearl ran a little faster than ordinary ships. Therefore, the unfortunate Portuguese transport ship was caught up as expected, and the entire ship was captured. In this era, the English pirates and Barbary pirates in the Atlantic Ocean had not yet risen. Only the golden waters such as the Mediterranean Sea, the North Sea, and the Baltic Sea were the areas where pirates were active. Therefore, the Portuguese were also negligent, and Captain Jack and Black Pearl took advantage of the opportunity. After capturing the Portuguese merchant ship, Captain Jack raised his finger and jumped onto the captured Portuguese transport ship, and said in a weird voice in not very fluent Portuguese, "Don't be nervous, babies. We are pirates, pirates with principles. So, we won't kill people indiscriminately." But just as the Portuguese crew breathed a sigh of relief, Captain Jack ruthlessly ordered the captain and the first mate of the Portuguese transport ship to be killed. The Portuguese sailors were confused. What about the promise not to kill? Did you lie to us? At this time, Captain Jack raised his finger and spoke again, "Don't be afraid, babies, I killed those two guys just as a revenge. Tell your master the specific reason, it was caused by Baron Rui Silva. In addition, I want to weigh out spices worth 38,000 ducats as compensation for the losses caused to us by Baron Silva. I want to emphasize again, we are pirates with principles. If we say we will kill your whole family, we will kill your whole family. Well, this time we are just taking back our own losses. Let me tell you, we are going to take away spices worth 33,000 gold coins as compensation for the goods. The other 4,000 gold coins are compensation for the destroyed ship, because the 250-level merchant ship was too special to be sold, and was destroyed by Rui Silva. As for the remaining 1,000 gold coins, they are used as pensions for the dead captain and first mate. These were all deliberately told by Captain Jack to the Portuguese sailors. He just wanted to tell the Portuguese, I am a stickler for rules and I will only take back my own losses. As for the loss of this ship, you can blame Baron Silva. In short, Rui Silva is in trouble this time. Because the loss of the spice ship, as well as all the losses of the Azores manors during the implementation of the luring the tiger away from the mountain strategy, could be blamed on him. After taking away the spices worth 38,000 gold coins, Captain Jack happily let the Portuguese spice ship go. Before leaving, Captain Jack pointed his finger and repeatedly emphasized, we are principled pirates, we are very principled and will never mess around. Remember. Chapter 1884 Dover Ship Completion. The classic look of Captain Jack and his funny lines left a deep impression on the Portuguese sailors. These legends later spread in Portugal and became legends. However, the Portuguese sailors are still in shock, and they have to return to Portugal first. At the same time, the North Sea Kingdom also began to prepare for war. This time, Captain Jack was sent out to make up for their own losses. However, God knows how the overconfident Portuguese will mess up. Years of showing off their power at sea have made Portugal forget that they are just a small country, and their self-confidence has expanded. Therefore, Marin once again began to promote the two powerful artillery batteries at the mouth of the EMS River, promoting their invincibility. At the same time, 2,500-ton warships of the North Sea Kingdom made their first public appearance at the mouth of the EMS River, causing a huge sensation. Oh my God, I always thought that there were only 10 warships like this in the North Sea Kingdom, but I didn't expect that there were 20. Some foreign businessmen who came to the North Sea Kingdom to do business exclaimed in the port of Emden. Of course, many of them are spies. However, in this era, other countries do not have any professional spies. These spies among businessmen are actually part-time and not professional. They are usually businessmen, and then secretly hired by their countries to find out intelligence about the target countries. Therefore, they are not professional spies, but just businessmen who find out information by the way. Spies of this level are naturally not good enough in front of the full-time spies of Beihai. Therefore, what they can find out is generally what Marin wants them to know. Or, news that cannot be covered up. However, in this era, you can't ask for more. After all, it's already very good that people can think of using businessmen doing business abroad as spies. And the real professional spies, in this era, are generally subordinate to the army. In other words, they are simply military spies, not full-time spies. And military spies rarely go abroad to disguise themselves as civilians to find out information. Unless a war is about to break out in that area. In addition to Beihai, in this era, I am afraid that only the Ming dynasty has professional spies Jinyui. However, because Jinyui has privileges, he acts a little high-profile and domineering, but loses the forbearing side of spies. Moreover, the Jinyui was also part of the military organization, and most of its members were illiterate soldiers. They often used to gather intelligence by directly recruiting hangers-on and obtaining intelligence from the informers in the market, rather than personally obtaining intelligence like 007. Therefore, although the Jinui was more advanced than the intelligence organizations of other countries at the same time, it was still bound by the shackles of the times. Because there were not many educated people among its members, its professional level was actually just that. Of course, there were only secret agents in the Jinui, who were very smart, but very few. The spies of the Beihai Kingdom were different from the spies of this era. The spies of the Beihai Kingdom were all trained in schools and were educated spies. Moreover, they had received very professional reconnaissance, counter-reconnaissance, as well as modern spy methods such as torture, shorthand, disguise and makeup. Even, they could master multiple foreign languages and were top talents. If the intelligence work was not very important, these spies would be more than enough to be local officials. In addition to the 20 main battleships, Marin also asked 2,250 class armed merchant ships to follow the main battleships, showing a huge fleet of 40 warships as a deterrent. In order to show force, Marin asked this huge fleet to swing around the mouth of the EMS River for a few rounds. Then, he left the mouth of the EMS River and went to Antwerp in the Netherlands for a friendly visit. Why did the fleet go to Antwerp? Because Antwerp is the main distribution center for the Portuguese to sell Indian spices in northwestern Europe, and there are many local Portuguese merchants. Similarly, there are many Portuguese merchants who are part-time spies. Marin asked the fleet to go to Antwerp, which was clearly intended for those Portuguese merchants who were part-time spies to see so that they could pass the news back to Portugal. At the same time, Marin also asked the fleet to buy saltpeter from the people in Antwerp, making a posture of preparing for war. In short, all these preparations are telling the Portuguese I am ready to fight. At the same time, the 20 lizard cannons purchased from Venice also arrived. After the arrival, the Emden shipyard of the North Sea modified 2,250 class armed merchant ships and installed a 7,000-pound lizard cannon on the bow as the main gun. At the same time, the hull was strengthened in various ways, and oars were added to the side to convert the ship into a sailing paddle boat. Among them, 5 modified 250 class armed merchant ships were equipped with a row of single-cylinder diesel engines, giving them the ability to maneuver without wind. In fact, Marin originally wanted to install a row of single-cylinder diesel engines on all 20 ships. Unfortunately, the manufacturing level of single-cylinder diesel engines in the North Sea is too pitfall. In addition to the original 10-12 horsepower single-cylinder diesel engines, only 30 qualified and durable 12 horsepower single-cylinder diesel engines were manufactured in a few months. There is no way. Limited by the level of technology, the single-cylinder diesel engines of the North Sea are all handmade, which is time-consuming and labor-intensive, and the defective rate is very high. As a result, more than 160 new single-cylinder diesel engines were manufactured, but only 30 were durable and could be used for a long time. Others were either unqualified at the beginning or always broke down after running for a period of time and could not be used for a long time. But these are not problems. At least, Marin saw progress. At the beginning, the craftsmen of the North Sea Kingdom manufactured more than 100 units, and only 10 were qualified. Now, more than 160 units have 30 qualified, which is a great improvement. It is foreseeable that in a few years, the craftsmen of the North Sea Kingdom will make more and more progress, and then the yield rate of single-cylinder diesel engine manufacturing will be further improved. When there are several great gods like Level 8 technicians, the output and quality of diesel engines will be guaranteed in the future. Subsequently, 5 diesel-powered Dover ships were tested in naval battles at sea. The test results show that placing the gun on the bow and firing from the front is more advantageous than the broadside gun. Among them, the biggest advantage is that if the bow gun is fired from the front, the left and right swaying of the ship will have less effect on its shooting. The broadside gun has poor accuracy when the hull shakes from side to side. Because a slight change in the shooting angle will lead to a big change in shooting accuracy. But if the bow gun is arranged on the central axis, it will be less affected by the swaying of the ship if it is fired horizontally. However, the Venice Lizard cannon is not a flat shooting cannon, but a short-barreled mortar with a curved shot. Although the angle has been adjusted as low as possible, the shooting angle of the mortar is still more than 10 degrees. Therefore, the shaking of the hull still has some effect on its shooting. It's just that it is much smaller than the effect on the broadside guns. Moreover, the gunners of the North Sea Kingdom are not vegetarians. They will choose to fire at the moment when the hull is the straightest, trying to minimize the impact of the sea conditions. The test results of these 5 Dover ships are very good. In order to observe their actual combat effects, Marin specially bought 2 caravel sailing ships that were about to expire as target ships and let the 5 Dover ships bombard them hard. Then, because the shells were powerful and the side of the warships of this era had not been strengthened, the 2 caravels were quickly sunk. Seeing such a good effect, Marin's confidence increased and he ordered the full production of single-cylinder diesel engines so that the diesel-powered Dover ship would be larger and more lethal. However, the row of diesel engines behind the Dover ship was too cool and inevitably attracted people's covetousness. Moreover, if the single-cylinder diesel engine was exposed and unfortunately hit by the enemy's shells, it would be easy to break. So, Marin came up with a solution. He had someone build a large shed with iron plates at the stern to cover all the 8 single-cylinder diesel engines at the stern. In this way, with the cover of the iron shed, the 8 single-cylinder diesel engines at the stern could not only be kept secret from the outside world, but also withstand the threat of enemy shells. In this era when the caliber of artillery in other countries was not large, the iron shed was enough to withstand the bombardment of shells from other countries. Chapter 1885, The Dream of Biodiesel and Tractor Domination. The excellent performance of the single-cylinder diesel engine aroused great interest in Leonardo da Vinci and the college students of the Department of Mechanical Engineering. But this is not a good thing. The adverse effect it brings is that the research and development progress of the steam engine has stagnated. Because of the super high speed of the diesel engine, the teachers and students of the Department of Mechanical Engineering are extremely disgusted with the steam engine with a speed of only 50 revolutions per minute. After all, there is no harm without comparison. Then, most of the college students of the Department of Mechanical Engineering went to study the single-cylinder diesel engine. The steam engine was not in demand for a while, which made Marin very depressed when he learned the news. Marin also knows the superiority of the diesel engine, but the diesel supply is seriously insufficient. Before science and technology develop to a certain level, especially before drilling technology develops to a certain level, the supply of diesel is impossible to be sufficient. You know, the oil fields in later generations are hundreds of meters deep or even thousands of meters deep. And the current technology can only drill more than 100 meters deep, and it is impossible to supply enough diesel. Especially some rock formations, without the high-strength drill bits of later generations, they can't be drilled through at all. So, even if a single-cylinder diesel engine can be manufactured, what can it do? Without oil, a diesel engine is just a pile of scrap metal. But the steam engine is different, it burns coal. Marin, who controls the Ruhr area and Newcastle coalfield, has the most abundant coal. Moreover, it is easy to obtain coal all over the world. Therefore, even if he knows that the diesel engine is better, the steam engine is the easiest to promote and use. For this reason, Marin had to adjust his strategy and began to stimulate Leonardo da Vinci and his students to develop steam engines. Marin promised that those who made major research results in steam engines would be rewarded 10 times as much as those who studied diesel engines. The specific standard is that the reward for diesel engine research results starts at 10 gold coins, while the reward for steam engine research results starts at 100 gold coins. 10 gold coins are less than an ordinary person's annual salary, 12.16 gold coins, which is not a small amount, but not too much. And 100 gold coins are equivalent to more than 8.2 times the annual salary of an ordinary person. If an ordinary person has a basic salary of 3,000 yuan per month in the future, 12 gold coins are equivalent to 36,000 yuan. And 100 gold coins is almost equivalent to 300,000 renminbi. A phased ordinary research result is rewarded with 300,000. This standard, if put in the future, those professors will also be tempted. And Marin promised that whoever can successfully put the steam engine on the ship, or successfully make a practical steam engine train, the reward will start from 1,000 gold coins, and there is no upper limit. In other words, Marin's reward for steam engines and steam locomotives starts at 3 million, which is very generous. And for diesel engines with higher technical content, Marin cut the reward by 10 times, and the ordinary reward is only about 30,000 yuan in the future. For the already high-paid engineering and technical personnel, it is really not attractive. After this kind of stimulation, most of the college students in the Department of Mechanical Engineering went to study steam engines. But there are also a small number of pure academic college students who don't care about rewards and are determined to continue to develop diesel engines. Marin is not disappointed with this. After all, one day, diesel engines will become mainstream. At present, the proportion of most people studying steam engines and a few people studying diesel engines is exactly what Marin wants to see most. However, Marin is unwilling to accept that the excellent diesel engines cannot be applied on a large scale. Then, he suddenly thought of the biodiesel technology that is very popular in the 21st century. The so-called biodiesel is to esterify vegetable oil and alcohols, mainly methanol, but also ethanol, at high temperature in an alkaline environment to obtain biodiesel with combustion performance very similar to diesel. Biodiesel is environmentally friendly, does not contain sulfur, and does not pollute the air. It is the key research direction in the 21st century. However, because the price of vegetable oil in later generations is relatively expensive and the cost is higher than that of ordinary diesel, it has been difficult to make a big breakthrough. Marin remembers watching an agricultural program that introduced a plant called leprosy. The oil squeezed from its fruit can be easily processed into biodiesel, and the quality is quite good, better than the quality of domestic No. 0 diesel. It is said that this leprosy tree is native to the tropical region of southern North America. The fruit is toxic and can cause dizziness, vomiting, and diarrhea after eating. But its fruit has a high oil yield and is suitable for processing into biodiesel. In fact, the jatropha is the American version of the tung oil tree. Its characteristics are very similar to those of the tung oil tree, and the oil extracted from its fruit is also somewhat similar to that of tung oil. Moreover, tung oil can actually be made into biodiesel. Marin had read reports in his previous life that it seemed to be an esterification reaction between tung oil and methanol, which was reacted for n hours in a strong alkaline environment of potassium hydroxide. However, the TV focused on the jatropha tree, not the tung oil tree, which shows that the jatropha tree must have the advantage of being a source of raw materials for biodiesel. In fact, tung oil processed into biodiesel is not much worse than the jatropha tree. But the problem is that the tung oil tree has high environmental requirements and only grows well in southern China. In later generations, the United States and Paraguay and Argentina in South America all introduced oil barrels, but the result was that the oil barrels did not grow well in Southern America, and the quality of the tung oil produced was poor. In the South American environment, the quality of tung oil produced in Paraguay is okay, but it is not as good as the tung oil produced in China. The reason why the jatropha tree was promoted by TV is because of its strong adaptability. The TV program introduced that the jatropha tree has low requirements for the soil environment, is very resistant to diseases and pests, and has strong adaptability. I am afraid that this is the main reason why it is vigorously promoted. Anyway, Marin remembered that the oil squeezed from the fruit of the jatropha tree was esterified with methanol or ethanol under KOH and high temperature. As for how many hours the reaction lasted, what the ratio was, and how to remove the alkali solution later, he didn't know. After all, he was not a professional chemical worker. However, knowing these, the following will be easy. Anyway, as long as the raw materials are sufficient, try a few more times, or even try hundreds or thousands of times, you can always try out the ratio and reaction time, as well as the subsequent purification methods. Anyway, Leonardo da Vinci has now taught a group of chemical engineering students. When there are more chemical engineering students later, a group will be assigned to study this, and there will always be a way. According to the TV program in the previous life, the oil squeezed from the fruit of the jatropha tree on 1 acre can produce 500 kilograms of biodiesel, which is half a ton. If he planted his 10,000 acres of jatropha trees, the annual diesel output would be 5,000 tons. A 12-horsepower single-cylinder diesel engine consumes only 2 or 3 liters of diesel per hour. Even if it does not stop for a moment, it only consumes about 26,000 liters in a year. The density of zero diesel is about 0.85 kilograms per liter. In other words, a 12-horsepower diesel engine running at full power all year round only consumes about 22 tons of diesel. But in fact, a general single-cylinder diesel engine consumes 3 to 5 tons of diesel a year. In this way, the biodiesel produced by 10,000 acres of jatropha can supply thousands of diesel engines for a year. If the production of biodiesel is expanded 100 times. Although in later generations, the cost of biodiesel is relatively high and not very cost-effective. But for Marin of this era, whether there is or not is the most important issue. As for the cost, it is secondary. Even Marin came up with an exaggerated scene of using a walking tractor formation to attack the enemy. Of course, first of all, he must have a professional team of mechanics to move the single-cylinder diesel engine onto the car and make a rotten agricultural vehicle similar to the 4-in-1 in later generations. Then, wrap it with iron sheets and it can be used as a rustic tank. Thinking of this, Marin's saliva is about to flow. Even the 4-in-1 used for farming in later generations is enough to break down any enemy battle formation in this era. However, after waking up, Marin understood that if he wanted to make a chariot like the Xibuxiang, he had to first train qualified mechanical ones. And Leonardo da Vinci and his mechanical students would not even be as good as mechanical apprentices in the future. Therefore, there is a long way to go. But if the Xibuxiang is developed, and the production of biodiesel is sufficient, it is estimated that the whole world will be shrouded in the shadow of the tractor chariot of the North Sea. Thousands of tractors are coming towards you, and I ask you if you are afraid. Of course, that is just a beautiful prospect in the future. First of all, in order to realize that beautiful future, Marin needs to send people to find the leprosy tree. Although it is known that it is in southern North America, it is very difficult to find it. Then, even if the leprosy tree is found, it will take several years to bear fruit. Then the oil from the fruit is squeezed out, and then it is used by chemical students for esterification research. In short, this will take a very long time, probably decades, and maybe Marin won't be able to see it alive. But no matter what, the jatropha tree brings Marin a bright prospect of biodiesel and a brighter prospect of tractors dominating the world in the future. So, no matter what the cost, Marin plans to find it. Chapter 1886, Searching for Beaumont. In fact, Marin, a chemist, didn't know that both soybean oil and tung oil can be processed into biodiesel. It's just that the use of catalysts and reaction control are more complicated. Marin only knows high school chemistry and doesn't know biodiesel technology, so he didn't think of using ordinary vegetable oil to process biodiesel. He knew that the oil from the fruit of the jatropha tree could be processed into biodiesel, but he only knew it by watching a TV program on the agricultural channel by chance. In order to find the jatropha tree, Marin offered a reward of 5,000 gold coins for the first time and recruited 10 expedition teams to go to the jungles of southern North America to look for the jatropha tree. Of course, if you rely solely on the expedition team, it's completely sending them to death. Therefore, in order to cooperate with the expedition team's actions, Marin plans to establish a colony on the southern coast of North America, that is, the northern coast of the Gulf of Mexico, as the base camp for the expedition team's operations on land. After all, if the supplies are used up during the expedition, or someone is injured or sick, a stronghold is needed to solve the problem. Otherwise, it's sending those explorers to death. Spreading out the white paper, Marin drew a map of the old Americans in the future based on his memory. Then, he set his sights on the Gulf Coast. Where should we set up a colony? Marin looked at the map and fell into deep thought. If we consider agriculture, the first colony to be set up in New Orleans at the mouth of the Mississippi River is the best. Because this will help to go upstream from the Mississippi River in the future and control the best agricultural areas in North America. The Mississippi River is the fourth largest river in the world, second only to the Yangtze River. But the Mississippi River Basin is one of the three major black soil areas in the world, the other two being the Ukrainian Great Plains and the Northeast Plains. But the area of the Northeast black soil is only 1.03 million square kilometers, and the winter is super cold, so only one season of grain can be planted, and the rest of the time is spent on the Kong. Because they have been hiding on the Kong for a long time, they are very good at talking and their mouths are very smooth. There is no way, they have been hiding in the house for half a year to brag, and it's strange that their mouths are not smooth. The black soil in the Mississippi River Basin covers an area of 1.2 million square kilometers, which is larger than the black soil in the Northeast. Moreover, the area where they live is relatively warm, and they can have 2 crops a year, which is much better than the black soil in the Northeast. Therefore, if you want to farm, you must take the Mississippi River Basin. However, Marin is not short of food now, so he doesn't need to farm. What he lacks is energy, and farming is secondary. Energy. Marin thought about it, and suddenly stole his eyes to the northwest of the Gulf of Mexico. In the future, there is a city that Chinese people are very familiar with, Houston. Although the manager later had a brain disease and talked nonsense, it is undeniable that many NBA fans regard the Houston Rockets as their home team. The reason is that Yao Ming spent his entire NBA time there. When Lao Yao was fighting in the NBA, Houston almost became the most eye-catching American city for Chinese people, and its reputation in China was greater than that of New York. Marin was still in high school at that time, and he often skipped classes to watch Lao Yao play. He was a fake fan, not caring about those local NBA players, but only watching Lao Yao. He didn't even watch the games without Lao Yao. He didn't recognize Jordan even when he took off his number 23 jersey. There was nothing he could do. Marin had black face blindness, and all black people looked the same. He recognized people by their facial details, but black faces were as black as carbon, so he couldn't see the details, so he was blind to black faces. Only Kobe's special face, which was a bit pointy and a bit like Apa on the Avenue of Stars, could be remembered by Marin. He didn't recognize Jordan's popular, rounder black face when he took off his jersey. However, the place Marin had his eyes on this time was not the famous Houston in later generations, but Beaumont, 137 kilometers east of Houston. What attracted Marin to Beaumont? Because there is a spindletop oil field near Beaumont. The Lucas well there is the world's first self-flowing oil well. Moreover, at its peak, it gushed 10,000 tons of crude oil per day, and the spray column was 50 meters high, which was terrifying. Although the spindletop oil field is several hundred meters deep, with the current technology of the North Sea country, it is impossible to drill out at all. But Marin did not plan to develop the spindletop oil field right now, but to occupy the place first. Then, tell the engineering and technical personnel that there is a large oil field hundreds of meters underground, that's enough. According to the current technological development speed of the North Sea, perhaps this huge oil field can be developed in a few decades. Due to the lack of modern pumping machinery, the Lucas well in the spindletop oil field has become the first choice. 10,000 tons of oil sprayed per day, how many pumping units would be needed? With enough oil, Marin will be able to start more single-cylinder diesel engines. By then, the hand tractor will become a very common agricultural machinery. Unlike now, due to the lack of oil, single-cylinder diesel engines can only be used for scientific research, at most for warships, and small warships. Although there is a biodiesel plan, cheap petroleum diesel will eventually replace the more expensive biodiesel in the future. In other words, biodiesel is currently just a transition. When the North Sea's technology develops and oil wells hundreds of meters deep can be opened, biodiesel will come to an end for the time being. After all, the costs of the two are different. One is planted with a lot of manpower and material resources, and the other is sprayed underground. The cost of the two is not of the same order of magnitude. So, establishing a colony near Beaumont can not only take care of finding leprosy trees, but also find the oil field of Spindletop. The characteristics of Spindletop are still easy to find, a highland with a sulfur smell, just near Beaumont. The expedition team can find this place first while looking for leprosy trees. Then, Marin circled this place and ordered the engineering department to find a way to drill there, as deep as possible, and learn from the lessons if it fails. One day, that self-flowing well will spray a lot of oil. In addition to taking into account the search for leprosy trees and determining the location of Spindletop, there is another use here, that is, as a springboard for you to enter the North American prairie. This is Texas in the future, which is the southern part of the North American prairie. Although the climate in the southernmost coastal area is relatively humid and there are some forests, as long as you leave the Gulf of Mexico and go north a little, you can quickly enter the North American prairie. Why enter the North American prairie? Find bison. Before the arrival of European colonists, there were tens of millions of bison on the North American prairie, which was a source of a large amount of beef and cowhide. Marin had already determined the war plan to rob women from the Aztec Empire in Mexico. He planned to rob millions of women. Then, he would give birth to mixed-race children with the men of the North Sea Kingdom as a source of labor for the North Sea Kingdom to develop North America. However, with the increase of millions of people at once, there will be millions of children in the future. With so many people, food is not enough. Therefore, at the beginning, the food gap was huge. Even if the North Sea Kingdom had a large grain output, it would be difficult to afford the food for millions of surplus people at once. In the final analysis, food in this era is produced by people. The food produced by the 300,000 or 400,000 strong men of the North Sea Kingdom can feed hundreds of thousands of people, but it is not enough for millions or even 2 million people. Therefore, Marin planned to send cavalry to hunt bison on the North American prairie during that transition period, kill a large number of bison, and make beef jerky as a food supply for the suddenly increased population. One bison can get more than 1,000 pounds of meat, which can be made into jerky to feed an adult for a year. Even if the population suddenly increases by 1 million, as long as 1 million bison are hunted, the famine period can be overcome. Compared with the base number of tens of millions, 1 million bison is not a lot. It has an impact on the tribe, but it is still within an acceptable range. Moreover, Marin will let the cavalry shoot those old bison in extra bulls as much as possible, and try not to touch calves and cows. In this way, it will not affect the continuation and reproduction of the bison tribe. Anyway, those old bison will die millions of times every year, so it is better to be hunted by the North Sea Kingdom as beef jerky. Otherwise, it will be wasted. In summary, whether it is looking for leprosy trees, looking for spindle-top oil fields, or going north to the North American prairie to hunt bison, Beaumont is an excellent starting point. Therefore, Marin waved his pen and ordered 10 expeditions to march into Beaumont. He can even give coordinates. Because of Lao Yao, Marin could even remember the longitude and latitude of Houston and some of the local natural features. Beaumont is 137 kilometers east of Houston, and there is a distinctive spindle top nearby. As long as the expedition team searches according to this, it should not be difficult to find Beaumont. Chapter 1887, The Plan to Breed the Pivarot Cattle. Of course, Marin did not put all his hopes of finding leprosy trees in the area near Beaumont. In addition to sending an expedition to Beaumont, Marin also sent another expedition to the Florida Peninsula. After all, the climate characteristics of the Florida Peninsula are very suitable for the growth of leprosy trees, and it is very likely that wild leprosy trees can be found there. In addition, there may be leprosy trees in Central America. Therefore, Marin also sent an expedition to Cuba, with Terra assisting them in finding leprosy trees. This is because Marin only heard on TV programs in his previous life that leprosy trees were native to southern North America. Cuba, including the entire Caribbean region, is considered North America, and is also southern North America. It is possible that there are wild leprosy trees on the island of Cuba. Moreover, the island of Cuba has been developed for a long time, and with the help of Terra, a local snake, the conditions for finding are much better than going to North America. But Marin was not so concerned about the colony on the Florida Peninsula. After all, there are neither oil fields that Marin values nor prairies where bison are easily hunted on the Florida Peninsula. Therefore, the colony is purely a temporary base for finding leprosy trees. Once the mission is completed, the stronghold is estimated to be abandoned. Unlike Beaumont, Marin intends to operate as a base camp in southern North America. In the future, Beaumont will definitely build a city, plus an inland port terminal. At the same time, a cement road will be built directly to the North American prairie in the inland area, so that the cavalry can go out to hunt bison and bring back the jerky made from bison. In addition to hunting bison to obtain a lot of meat, the vast grassland left after hunting bison is also an excellent pasture for grazing. The North Sea Kingdom has currently cultivated North Sea sheep that produce fine wool, and has also focused on cultivating East Frisia sheep with a large milk production. If you control Texas, you can fully utilize the local excellent grasslands to graze North Sea sheep and East Frisia sheep in large quantities. Then, graze some cattle, it will be even more perfect. Moreover, Marin also plans to use North American bison to improve the breed characteristics of European domestic cattle. Marin remembered that in his previous life, the Americans used North American bison and European beef cattle to crossbreed and bred the pivot cattle. The pivot cattle are stronger than European beef cattle, after all, they have the bloodline of North American bison, and they are more tenacious and can withstand bad weather, such as blizzards. Moreover, their fertility and meat quality are very high, and they produce a lot of milk. Of course, in this era, the quality of meat and milk production are secondary. Its strong characteristics are what Marin values most. Because of its bloodline of North American bison, pivot cattle are stronger and more powerful than European beef cattle. This feature is of little use in later generations. But in this era, it plays a huge role in cattle plowing. North American bison are different from ordinary cattle. Ordinary cattle have strong endurance but poor explosive power. Plowing the land is slow, which affects the efficiency of plowing. The North American bison is a high-speed cattle that can run at a high speed of 50 to 60 kilometers, which meets the standard of high speed. It can be seen that the explosive power and flexibility of the American bison are far superior to ordinary domestic cattle. This is also what Marin is looking at. When hybridizing, in addition to eliminating fierce breeds with bad tempers, the speed and explosive power of cattle are also important characteristics that need to be retained. Because explosive power and speed mean faster plowing speed. Cattle have strong endurance. If explosive power and speed are also improved, there will be no need for horse plowing. Of course, when breeding new breeds, attention should also be paid to the temper of the breed. If a bad-tempered cattle is bred, it will kill people like Spanish bullfighting, and then it will be over. Therefore, this requires observation and directional breeding of several generations of hybrid cattle breeds. It is necessary to retain the advantages of strong explosive power and fast speed, and control the temper of cattle to avoid breeding violent cattle that threaten human safety. Although the North Sea country has produced single-cylinder diesel engines and can make walk-behind tractors. However, because the diesel output is too small, tractors cannot be widely used in agriculture. Therefore, for a long time, before oil can be mass-produced, cattle and horses plowing land will still be the mainstream in the world. But horses have poor endurance, and they have high requirements for feed, and the feeding cost is high. Eastern European Mongolian horses are not picky eaters, but they are too thin and weak to be compared with Western European draft horses. In this way, if a kind of oxen with explosive power not much worse than horses and strong endurance can be cultivated, it will become the best choice. Even if the hybridized Pifroy cannot run at the speed of 60 km per hour like the North American bison, as long as it is much faster than the European domestic cattle, that is enough. Because ordinary yellow cattle are too slow, even if many cattle are used to pull the prade plow, the amount of cultivated land per day is difficult to exceed 15 acres. If there are enough horses, the amount of cultivated land per day can exceed 30 acres. There is no way, ordinary yellow cattle are slow, and they will not move forward unless they are pulled. If used to pull the plow, the cost of raising them is certainly much lower than raising horses, but that speed is really worrying. Therefore, Marin intends to breed fast Pifroy cattle as a very important goal. If we can cultivate fast, docile and obedient Pifroy cattle, ox carts may become an important means of transportation in the future. In fact, Marin's requirement is a bit nitpicking. Because speed and docility are often in conflict with each other. Generally speaking, those cattle that are more docile and obedient are slow and can't speed up. And those cattle that are fast are often impatient. Otherwise, they won't run. Therefore, Marin's breeding requirements for Pifroy cattle are simply difficult for those animal husbandry experts. After all, cattle with good tempers can't speed up, and cattle that are fast often have bad tempers. However, Marin is the boss, and he has the final say. He said that he wanted cattle with fast speed and good temper, and these animal husbandry experts could only do it. In this way, the difficulty of selecting and breeding new varieties of Pifroy cattle is too much. Therefore, in the future, the cattle that are finally bred must be a variety that compromises in all aspects. For example, the speed must be reduced, and it cannot reach the running speed of 60 km per hour of the original North American bison. At the same time, the temper will become a little bigger than that of ordinary yellow cattle. In the final analysis, animal husbandry experts can only find a balance between the two, and try to breed the best comprehensive performance, which is acceptable to people in both aspects. In the end, Marin also knew that he was in the wrong, and took the initiative to lower the standard. He did not require the hybridized Pifroy to run at a speed of 60 km per hour, the original North American bison. However, a speed of 20 km per hour is still required, which is the speed of bicycles in later generations. This speed is already one-third of the original North American bison. But if this speed can be reached, it is also very strong. Because the speed of the horse-drawn carriage on the official road is no more than this. Moreover, the endurance of horses is far inferior to that of cattle. If the newly bred Pifroy can reach this speed and its temper is not too bad, Pifroy cattle carts may become the main force of transportation in the future. After all, cattle have much stronger endurance than horses, and their feeding requirements are lower. Chapter 1888, Oxen and Horseboat. A bad-tempered bull is very scary. The tonnage of a bull is there, plus the sharp horns. Once angry, it will become as dangerous as a Spanish bullfight. However, Marin knows a very interesting phenomenon. That is, even hornless bulls are used to using their heads to butt each other when fighting. This seems to be an instinct of bulls to fight. Bulls don't like to bite with their mouths when fighting, nor are they good at kicking with their legs, they just like to butt. Therefore, the fighting action of bulls is also called butting. If there are sharp horns on the head, then butting is very dangerous and has great lethality. But if there are no horns on the head of the bull. In his previous life, Marin saw a funny video, two hornless bulls fighting, butting each other with their bald heads. But without horns, there is no lethality. As a result, the fight between the two bulls turned into a funny confrontation similar to pushing each other. After fighting for a long time, neither of the two cows was injured. In the end, the two cows probably felt bored and tired of fighting, so they dispersed to eat grass. It is foreseeable that the cattle with strong explosive power that Marin asked the livestock experts to breed will definitely not have a good temper. Therefore, it is inevitable that there will be a fight between the bulls. Since fighting cannot be avoided, Marin came up with a solution, to breed hornless bison. No matter how bad your temper is, without horns, the action of bullfighting becomes a strong push. Although this strong push may hurt people, it is not so fatal without sharp horns. In this way, even if the high-speed bison bred is not so good-tempered, the danger is greatly reduced. After thinking this through, Marin ordered, only hornless cattle and North American bison are used for crossbreeding. At the same time, when capturing North American bison for crossbreeding, only hornless North American bison are allowed to be captured. In order to breed hornless bison, Marin even set a rule: if you see hornless bison, you can't shoot them, you can only round them up. In this way, the probability of breeding hornless bison is greatly increased. The probability of normal cattle being hornless is very low. Except for a few specially bred breeds such as Angus cattle, most cattle breeds have horns. Therefore, every hornless bison is a very precious sample. Therefore, Marin plans to equip the hunting team with telescopes and strictly order them to use telescopes to confirm that there are no hornless cattle in the herd before hunting. If hornless cattle are found, the policy must be changed immediately, and more hunters must be summoned to round up the herd and capture hornless bison alive to obtain breeding samples. Marin plans to breed hornless bison in two directions. One is to mix with European hornless cattle to get a relatively good temper and not too slow bison. The second direction is to breed hornless bison internally and breed special hornless bison. But in fact, the second direction also serves the first direction. Marin was not sure what level of Pifroy could be bred from hornless bison and hornless European cattle, and the quality was not guaranteed. But if the hornless bison were bred internally, the characteristics of the species could still be stably retained. In this way, it would be the best choice to retain the characteristics of the hornless bison while trying to breed Pifroy that met the requirements. One day, experts will surely be able to breed high-speed Pifroy that meets Marin's requirements, which can be used to pull carts and plow fields at a higher speed. Marin did not know that because of his temporary interest, draft horses were unemployed worldwide. Because people were surprised to find that the hornless Pifroy was not only strong, but also pulled carts at a speed not slower than draft horses, and had stronger endurance. For plowing, the hornless Pifroy with stronger endurance and not slow speed was no worse than draft horses. And in terms of daily feeding, Pifroy is obviously easier to raise. In addition, the Pifroy's ability to adapt to adverse climates and its ability to resist diseases are stronger than those of draft horses. So, many years later, the high-speed hornless Pifroy almost squeezed out the draft horses. Then, people raised horses only for riding. Even the transportation vehicles on the road began to mainly use high-quality hornless Pifroy. Only some vehicles carrying people use draft horses to pull carts because of their particularity. And from an economic point of view, trucks used high-speed hornless Pifroy to pull carts. But this did not last long, because after the North Sea Kingdom matured its oil extraction technology, it began to mass-produce tractors to replace the status of livestock. Later, only remote areas with very inconvenient transportation continued to use livestock to plow the land and pull carts. Therefore, the high-speed hornless Pifroy bred by Marin, like the Clipper, was born in the wrong era and was destined to be short-lived. When the Clipper appeared, the technology of steam engines was relatively mature and began to develop rapidly. Therefore, the Clipper ship was born at the wrong time and was only popular for a while. Similarly, before Marin ordered the breeding of high-speed hornless Piflo cattle, he had copied a 12-horsepower single-cylinder diesel engine. If it were not for the severe shortage of diesel supply, there would have been no cattle and horses. But no matter what, this is also a good story in history. After all, it is indeed a very genius idea to breed fast hornless cattle to pull carts and plow land. The breeding of high-speed hornless Piffalo cattle still takes time, and it requires multiple generations of breeding and selection to stabilize performance. Therefore, this will take a long time. Just after Marin set the cross-breeding plan for high-speed hornless Piffalo cattle, the Long Island shipyard in New York sent back good news: the cattle and horse ship specially used to transport large livestock was successfully manufactured. Long before contacting the Persians, Marin had set a plan to develop professional ships for transporting livestock. After all, Marin planned to import cattle and horses and other livestock from Persia on a large scale. And ordinary ships are difficult to handle the transportation of livestock. Ordinary ships are generally designed to be very compact to maximize the use of space. Therefore, sailors often have to crouch down when entering and exiting the cabin. Moreover, the cabin where sailors live is also in a very bad environment. But such a ship is very inconvenient to transport livestock. Because large livestock such as cattle and horses are very large in size, the hatches and stairs suitable for sailors to enter and exit are not suitable for cattle and horses to enter and exit at all. In addition, a closed environment like the bottom cabin is completely unsuitable for livestock to survive. Because livestock are animals after all, they don't know to go to the toilet when they are convenient. Therefore, they often solve it on the spot. If it is on the top deck, it is okay, which is convenient for cleaning and pouring into the sea. At the same time, sailors can also wash the deck. If the livestock are kept in the bottom cabin, if the livestock urinate and defecate anywhere, it is estimated that the relatively closed bottom cabin will be extremely smelly. Moreover, the livestock cannot be put together all at once. Because they are prone to fighting with each other. Especially some male cattle and horses, they are particularly aggressive and easy to hurt each other. Therefore, in the past, if you wanted to transport large livestock, you could only tie the livestock to the top deck and separate them from each other. This not only prevented them from hurting each other, but also made it easier to clean the cow and horse manure and dump it into the sea. However, in this way, the number of cattle and horses that a ship could transport was very limited. Often, a ship could only transport a dozen or 20, or at most a few dozen, and it was very troublesome to serve them. Therefore, if you want to transport large livestock such as cattle and horses on a large scale, you must design special transport ships to transport them on a large scale and safely. However, at the beginning, the shipbuilders of Beihai Kingdom were a little lost and took many detours. It was not until Marin introduced shipbuilders from the treasure ship factory from the Ming Dynasty and brought the technology and ideas of horse ship manufacturing in the treasure ship of the Ming Dynasty that the pace of research and development was accelerated. In the end, a professional cattle ship that could transport 200 horses or 200 cattle at a time was manufactured. Chapter 1889, Deterioration of Relations with Portugal. According to the opinions given by the craftsmen of the Ming Dynasty Baochuan factory, the so-called horse ship is actually to move the stables onto the big ship, and build many stables side by side on the deck of the relatively empty big ship to facilitate the placement of cattle and horses. At the same time, the cattle and horses are separated to prevent them from fighting each other. The key to building stables on the ship is to facilitate the cleaning of feces. Therefore, the stables on the ship are often built on the edge of the ship. The person in charge of cleaning does not even need to enter the stable, but directly shovels the cow dung and horse dung with a long-handled broom and shovel, and then throws it into the sea. Then, if the weather is not cold, the floor in the stable can be washed with sea water to remove the odor and the possibility of fly breeding. After learning this experience, the craftsmen of the Long Island shipyard in New York built a large number of stables on the inner side of the top deck of the ship, making the best use of the space. However, after the repair, they found that the space in the middle was wasted. In order to increase the transportation volume, the shipyard used a 500-ton large ship, which was converted from a Beihai Kingdom warship as a template. Its size is similar to that of the North Sea warship, both of which are 40 meters long and 10 meters wide, in the classic 4:1 galleon shape. Moreover, it is a double-layer gun deck. Of course, there are no guns. The deck width is 10 meters, and the length of the single-row stable is generally more than 2 meters long, generally within 2.2 meters. If only the stables on the sides of the deck are built, then the more than 5 meters in the middle will be wasted. After collective discussion by the shipbuilders, they finally added another row of single-row stables in the middle to accommodate cattle and horses. As for the cleaning of cow dung and horse dung, it is arranged to be cleaned twice a day. As for the cleaning of the stable deck in the middle, the shipbuilders discussed repeatedly and finally determined the plan to build a drainage ditch on the deck. They raised the deck of the middle row of stables, and then built special drainage ditches on both sides. In this way, when washing the deck, the water flows along the drainage ditch and flows into the sea through a special location. In this way, the problem of water accumulation in the middle row of stables when washing the deck is avoided. In this way, a 40-meter-long deck can have 26 or 27 stables in one row and 80 in 3 rows, according to the width of a single-row stable of 1.5 meters. The template of the cattle and horse ship is a 500-ton warship with a double-layer gun deck. Therefore, after the 2 gun decks are converted into 3 rows of stables, a total of 160 horses or 160 cows can be loaded. As for the crew on the ship, they live in the bottom cabin or in the poop of the ship. Because the cattle and horse ship that transports livestock does not pursue speed, the poop is built on the ship as a residence for the captain and senior crew members. After all, the bottom cabin is stuffy and is generally for low-level sailors. The food on the ship and the feed for cattle and horses are generally placed in the bottom cabin. However, in order to worry about the cattle and horses getting scurvy, in addition to eating hay during the voyage, the cattle and horse ship will also stop at a fixed location, collect some grass and leaves on the shore, and feed them to supplement their vitamin C. However, from Persia to the European mainland, it mainly passes through the Portuguese sphere of influence. Only the coast of Mozambique is the sphere of influence of the Spanish who are friendly with Marin. Therefore, Marin still needs to haggle with the Portuguese on the issue of choosing a stopover point. However, now is definitely not a good time to discuss landing and replenishing the green grass with the Portuguese. Because Marin is almost falling out with the Portuguese at present. After being robbed by Captain Jack, the unfortunate Portuguese spice transport ship returned to Lisbon in a mess and set off an uproar in Portugal. Captain Jack's words almost clearly stated his origin under the instructions of Marin. After all, the Portuguese noble circle in Lisbon knew that Marin's transport ship was robbed in the Azores. Now that this has happened, it is clear that Marin is slapping Portugal in the face. You know, in Portugal, the spice trade is controlled by the Portuguese royal family and several noble families, and ordinary small nobles can't get involved. But it is precisely these nobles who determine the fate of Portugal. Marin's revenge on the Silva family before, in fact, those great nobles knew about it, but they were happy to see the joke. Anyway, it's not them who are losing. But this time, Marin's action directly targeted them, and they were immediately unhappy and angry. Except for Marin's friend, Duke of Coimbra Jorge de Rencaster, who was kicked out of the core circle of the spice trade because of his competition with Manuel I for the throne, almost all the great nobles in Portugal have a share in the Indian spice trade. Marin instructed the pirates to rob the spice ship, which is basically equivalent to offending all the great Portuguese nobles. In fact, Marin didn't want to cause trouble at first and offend those great Portuguese nobles. However, this time the Portuguese government and the public acquiesced to Rui Silva's pretending to be a pirate, which made Marin angry. And what Marin is most worried about is that these guys will acquiesce to those Portuguese nobles who failed to participate in the Indian spice trade, organize pirate ships, rob North Sea merchant ships, and even covet the American colonies. And this point, with the nature of the great Portuguese nobles, is very likely. After all, history has changed. Under the influence of Marin, Portugal did not develop Brazil as it did in history. As a result, the interests of many Portuguese nobles were not met. The Indian spice trade was firmly controlled by the Portuguese royal family and the nobles. If the Portuguese nobles wanted to gain benefits, they could only find other ways. It was no secret in Portugal that Rui Silva pretended to be a pirate to rob the North Sea transport ship. After all, after Rui Silva succeeded, the goods on the ship also needed to be sold. As soon as he made a move, the entire Portuguese noble circle knew it. But they all chose to remain silent, and even encouraged it secretly. Because these Portuguese nobles also knew that they were too ugly to share the benefits with the small and medium nobles. If they could find a way to make money themselves, the nobles would be happy to see it happen. As for who is the victim, what does it have to do with them? It was precisely because of this attitude that Marin was completely angered. Since you ignore my interests, don't blame me for being rude. Therefore, although it seemed unwise, Marin ordered the Black Pearl to attack the spice ship belonging to the Portuguese nobles, in order to remind those arrogant Portuguese nobles that I am not so easy to mess with. However, doing so did stir up a hornet's nest. The relationship between the North Sea Kingdom and the Kingdom of Portugal began to deteriorate. After the news spread, the Portuguese nobles who had interests in the relationship were all angry. Many people began to clamor, send a fleet to attack the only port of the North Sea Kingdom, Emden Port, to teach Marin a very profound lesson. Chapter 1890 Internal Debate. Quiet. Everyone, be quiet. I know I have to teach the other side a lesson, but the problem is, don't you know that there are 2 more artillery batteries at the mouth of the EMS River, with 100 guns deployed? Manuel, I looked at the nobles who were shouting and felt a headache. The Portuguese nobles below were silent immediately. They also remembered that the power of 100 guns could indeed sink many ships. But at this time, the Portuguese naval commander Bebeto de Leo suddenly stood up and suggested, Your Majesty, the 2 artillery batteries at the mouth of the EMS River in the North Sea Kingdom are indeed very powerful, but there are ways to deal with them. Manuel, I was delighted and asked, Do you have a way to destroy the other side's artillery batteries? Bebeto de Leo shook his head and said, I don't have a way to destroy the artillery batteries, but I have a way to prevent the main battleships from being harmed by their artillery batteries. Tell me in detail. Manuel I and the Portuguese ministers focused their attention to hear what he said. Bebeto de Leo gestured on the table with his hands and said, Your Majesty, fellow masters, we all know that the North Sea Kingdom's artillery has many cannons. However, their cannons have a feature, that is, they can directly bombard warships. Moreover, no matter how bad the ship is, as long as it is large enough, it cannot be sunk by a single shot. In this way, when we break through the enemy's blockade, we can use a large number of ordinary merchant ships on both sides as targets to attract firepower. Let those merchant ships attract the enemy's shells, while the main battleships are sandwiched in the middle and take the opportunity to break in. Then, burn all the North Sea Kingdom warships and merchant ships in Emden port. Manuel I and the Portuguese ministers nodded, but Manuel I asked, This is a solution, but the problem is that even merchant ships are expensive. If we lose too many merchant ships, we can't afford it. Bebeto de Leo nodded and said, That's the truth, so I didn't say to let the Portuguese merchant ships be the target to attract firepower. Your Majesty and the gentlemen should know that there are many merchant ships entering and leaving the port of Emden. We can send a fleet to capture those merchant ships belonging to the North Sea Kingdom outside the range of the artillery fort at the mouth of the EMS River. Then, let them be used as targets to attract the firepower of the North Sea Kingdom's cannons. Hiss. This is a good idea. However, in this way, the North Sea Kingdom will be offended to death, and the two countries will basically be at war to the death. There are also Portuguese ministers who are unwilling to completely break up with the North Sea Kingdom. Humph, who dared to touch our spice ship? He deserves it. The radical Portuguese minister expressed his attitude. And Foreign Minister Ricardo worriedly said, Your Majesty, gentlemen, I don't know if you have thought about it, if Marin is completely angered, what if he attacks from land? Land. It's unlikely. The French will not allow the North Sea Kingdom's army to pass. Manuel I said uncertainly. Ricardo shook his head and said, I'm not talking about going through France, but the Mediterranean. It's easy for the North Sea army to go south to Italy by boat. Then, they can take a boat to Spain along the coast of Italy. Although our navy is strong, we don't have a fleet in the Mediterranean and can't stop it. Once the North Sea fleet lands in Spain, it can directly rush to Lisbon. Suddenly, the faces of many people present changed. Lisbon is the core of Portugal. If Lisbon is taken, then any advantage Portugal has gained at sea will be meaningless. Spain should not let the North Sea army land easily. You know, our queen is a Spanish princess. A Portuguese noble said weakly, but his tone seemed very unconfident. Ricardo shook his head and said, It's hard to say. Although Queen Maria is a Spanish princess, you should all know that Spain has always had the ambition to annex Portugal. If it weren't for France, God knows whether Spain would attack Crispin as they threatened. Take a step back, even if Spain finally refuses to let the North Sea army land, I'm afraid that we Portugal will have to pay an extremely high price. For example, the share of the Indian spice trade. At this point, the faces of all the nobles present changed. The spice trade is their forbidden fruit, and no one else is allowed to get involved. However, if the fight with the North Sea Kingdom is too fierce, Spain threatens to allow the North Sea army to pass through Spain, and Portugal will have to compromise. Because, in terms of land warfare, Portugal has no confidence in whether it can defeat the tens of thousands of troops of the North Sea Kingdom. The current situation in Europe is clear. Spain, Portugal, Venice, England and the Hanseatic League including the North Sea Kingdom are all naval powers. As for the land powers, the top two are definitely Spain and France. Well, Turkey is not included in the European ranking. Next, the land power is probably the Holy Roman Empire. But the Holy Roman Empire is divided internally, and its strong total combat power cannot be reflected. Otherwise, France and Spain will be inferior to it. And within the Holy Roman Empire, the most powerful vassal state is probably the North Sea Kingdom. If there is no alliance of vassal states that is not in harmony with it and restricts the development of the North Sea Kingdom, God knows how this powerful vassal state will develop. From the previous wars of the North Sea Kingdom, the Portuguese also clearly saw that the North Sea Kingdom army has the strength to defeat 50,000 or 60,000 troops. Moreover, it is the 50,000 or 60,000 troops in the German region, not the 50,000 or 60,000 troops of Portugal. After all, the Portuguese also know very well that their army is really not good enough. It is estimated that the combat power is equivalent to that of Italian mercenaries, and the total number will not exceed 30,000. After all, the total population of Portugal is only 3 million, and there are hundreds of thousands of people engaged in great voyages, which can only make up 30,000 army. When Sebastian I led his troops to participate in the War of the Three Kings in 1578, the total force was only 25,000. Therefore, if the North Sea Kingdom can attack Portugal from land, the Portuguese have no confidence in defeating the other side, even if they fight on their own land. The Spanish can obviously see this. In this way, once Portugal and the North Sea Kingdom are completely torn apart, if Portugal breaks into the port of Emden and destroys all the warships and merchant ships of the North Sea Kingdom, the completely enraged Marin will definitely ask Spain to lend him a passage to attack Lisbon. By then, the fate of Portugal will depend purely on the face of the Spaniards. If the passage is lent to the North Sea Kingdom, then once the city of Lisbon is breached, even if the Portuguese nobles can escape to the sea, the country's prestige will be thrown into the abyss, and it will no longer be called a powerful country. After all, a country whose capital is breached will be despised by all countries. In the future, it is hard to say how the Portuguese will develop. Moreover, the Spaniards can take this opportunity to occupy the Portuguese mainland. After all, the North Sea Kingdom is so far away from Portugal that it cannot control it, and can only benefit Spain. If the Spaniards were more malicious, they could have used Marin to destroy Portugal. In addition, even if Spain did not allow the North Sea Army to pass through Spain, it would probably take the opportunity to blackmail Portugal. For example, it would seize Portugal's share of the Indian spice trade. In the face of the crisis of national extinction, Portugal had to accept it. In other words, even if the Portuguese fleet could break through the artillery at the mouth of the Ems River and destroy all the warships and merchant ships of the North Sea, it would probably be difficult to get any benefits. Because if Marin insisted on attacking Portugal from land, then the fate of Portugal would be in the hands of the Spaniards. However, this was just an internal debate among the Portuguese nobles. Many Portuguese nobles insisted that Marin, a German landlubber, might not be able to think of a way to attack Lisbon via Spain. Therefore, some people still insisted on using Bebeto de Leo's tactics to attack Emden port and take the opportunity to destroy some North Sea warships and merchant ships. In their opinion, if Portugal wanted to become the hegemon of the sea, it had to teach a few blind people a lesson and establish its prestige, so that others would not follow suit and ignore the powerful Portugal. Chapter 1891 Military Visits and Joint Military Exercises. Before the meeting, Manuel I repeatedly stressed that the content of the meeting should be kept secret. In particular, the part about the North Sea Kingdom attacking Lisbon through Spain, so as to prevent Marin from really adopting this method. However, no one present expected that the content of this internal meeting would be sent to Marin's case 2 days later. People of this era could never imagine how perverted the intelligence network of the North Sea Kingdom was. Perhaps, in some irrelevant countries and regions, the intelligence network of the North Sea Kingdom is not yet developed and perfect enough. But in Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, which Marin attaches great importance to, the North Sea Kingdom has long woven a very powerful intelligence network. Perhaps, the great nobles who attended the meeting that day could indeed keep their mouths shut. However, there were not only the king and the great nobles present at the time, but also the maids and palace guards who served. The royal palace of Lisbon had long been infiltrated by the spies of the North Sea Kingdom. The spies of the North Sea Kingdom, using various methods such as coercion and inducement, had long since won over and controlled many maids and guards in the Lisbon royal palace. It should be pointed out that the palaces in Europe are generally small, so they are often more open than the palaces in ancient China. Because the palaces are too small to form their own society. Therefore, the maids and guards in the European palaces often have their own residences outside the palace. In addition, there are 2 types of European maids. One is the maid, that is, the senior maid who accompanies the queen and princess. Strictly speaking, they are not slaves, but descendants of nobles who come to serve the royal family before marriage. Before the era of Louis XIV, the maids serving in the European courts were often unmarried noble women, and their status was equivalent to that of the female officials in the ancient Chinese court. They are relatively free in the palace and can enter and leave the palace at will. Except for the rotation time, they can go home. The other type of maid is the maid who was born as a civilian or even a slave. These maids do the dirtiest and most tiring work, and they have no status, and it is even more impossible for them to leave the palace casually, unless the pitiful holiday comes. But in ancient times, there were very few holidays, only major festivals. The spies of the North Sea Kingdom tried to win over the maids of these 2 different statuses. Those noble ladies and maids who could enter and leave the palace freely were naturally the key targets. Because they could take intelligence out of the palace in time. However, in comparison, those maids who could not leave the palace at will were the most likely to get access to confidential intelligence. Because when the nobles talked about confidential matters, they would often clear the room. Many maids could not listen in on confidential information. But maids could, because they often served in the palace for a long time and would not leave the palace easily, so they were naturally more trustworthy. Therefore, after the spies of the North Sea Kingdom won over the maids and maids who were willing to serve them through various means, they created a channel for intelligence transmission. The maids trusted by the royal family eavesdropped on confidential information. Then, the eavesdropping maids passed the information to the maids who could enter and leave the palace freely, and brought it to the spies of the North Sea Kingdom behind them. Of course, they did not know that their employers were spies of the North Sea Kingdom, but only thought that they were some Portuguese local nobles who wanted to pry into the privacy of the palace. The spies of the North Sea Kingdom were very generous. Every time they passed on useful information, they would grab a handful of gold coins. Even the palace maids from noble families could not resist this kind of money offensive, not to mention the lowly maids from poor families. Several maids serving the spies of the North Sea Kingdom secretly saved thousands of gold coins every year, which is equivalent to more than 3 million in later generations. Even those low-ranking maids could get hundreds of gold coins every year, and their family lives were completely changed. European noble girls need a rich dowry when they get married. But the noble families who sent their daughters to the palace as maids, except for the big families who specially sent their daughters to inquire about the news in the palace, many of them were noble families with poor family economic conditions. Otherwise, it would be great for their daughters to be carefree young ladies at home. Why should they serve others and suffer? The richness of the dowry of the noble girl will directly determine the girl's future status in her husband's family. This point was similar in the ancient East and the West. But because of the backward agriculture in ancient Europe, many land nobles were very poor. In order to save their daughters' dowries, some poor noble families would even send their daughters to monasteries to become nuns to avoid the huge expenses of marrying their daughters. Therefore, many noble girls, in order to marry a good husband, would secretly embezzle and save dowries for themselves when they served as noble maids. Therefore, under such a strong money offensive, it is not surprising that the daughters of poor nobles who need to save dowries fall. As for those maids, the spies of the North Sea Kingdom took advantage of their few opportunities to go home to visit their relatives every year, and flashed gold coins in front of them, which could knock them out. As for those palace guards, they were harder to win over than those maids and servants. After all, these guards entered the palace to serve, often for the future, and generally valued the future more than money. Especially some eldest sons of nobles with inheritance rights are difficult to win over. But there are also some noble children who are not heirs, who have high expenses, and some are addicted to gambling and need a lot of money. Therefore, some guards were also won over to help the North Sea Kingdom to gather intelligence. At this secret meeting, there were maids and waitresses, as well as reliable guards present, who simultaneously passed on intelligence to Marin. Looking at the intelligence in his hand, Marin's face was uncertain. Unexpectedly, the Portuguese could come up with the unethical idea of using the merchant ships of the North Sea Kingdom to attract the firepower of the artillery. This also reminded Marin that only arranging artillery on both sides would indeed miss the enemy ships in the middle. No wonder later generations pay attention to crossfire. It turns out to prevent the occurrence of firepower blind spots. Obviously, the practice of arranging artillery on the left and right has a firepower blind spot, which is the middle part. As Babetto de Leo said, the setting of one artillery for each of the North Sea Kingdom can only hit a small number of warships entering and leaving, as well as the ships on the left and right sides of the large-scale fleet. For the warships blocked in the middle, the firepower cannot cover it. Therefore, it is best to arrange the artillery in a shaped triangle to ensure that the enemy fleet has no blind spots to avoid artillery fire. But it is too late to modify the layout of the artillery now, and the estuary of the EMS River is too wide, which is not conducive to the layout of the pin-shaped artillery. Therefore, Marin plans to use stones to build one or two long bridge piers that can go deep into the middle of the river. On the top of this long bridge pier built with stones, build an artillery turret. In this way, it can echo the artillery on the left and right sides and hit the blind spot of the enemy fleet. However, it is too late to do so now. If you want to scare Portugal, you can only take other measures. For example, Marin decided to contact Spain and organize a fleet visit in the port city of La Coruña on the northwest coast of Spain, and conduct a joint military exercise of landing and attack with the local Spanish army. La Coruña is located on the northwest coast of Spain, very close to northern Portugal. Marin chose to visit and conduct joint military exercises here, which was clearly a demonstration to Portugal. In order to achieve the demonstration effect, Marin decided to dispatch 5,000 infantry this time, in the name of Marine Corps, to participate in this military visit and joint military exercise in La Coruña. This routine, the old Americans in later generations are very skilled. If North Korea makes any moves, the US will conduct joint military exercises with South Korea to scare North Korea. Marin wants to use this joint military exercise to tell Portugal, I know how to attack Portugal through Spain, don't mess with me. However, if he wants Spain to agree to cooperate with him in this play, Marin estimates that the price he needs to pay is not small. Although Spain has a good relationship with Marin, it will not let the army of the North Sea Kingdom come in and out easily, and will not conduct joint military exercises with you. Unless Marin is willing to exchange a lot of benefits. Marin thought about it, and it seems that Conti has brought back a batch of porcelain and silk, worth 300,000 or 400,000 gold coins. Forget it, this time I will share the profits of this batch of porcelain and silk with the Spaniards. Marin plans to use the agency rights of the Iberian Peninsula and Italy of this batch of porcelain and silk as a condition to let Spain cooperate with him in this play. If it is handed over to the Spaniards to sell exclusively, it is estimated that 20% to 30% of the profits will fall into the hands of the Spaniards, worth tens of thousands of gold coins. However, compared with avoiding a war with Portugal, this is also worth it. After all, Marin is preparing to fight with France at the moment, and he really can't provoke two powerful enemies at the same time. Moreover, eating alone in the business of silk and porcelain is also hateful, and pulling an accomplice to share the firepower is also a good choice. No matter what, they still get the biggest share. Moreover, if the Spanish agree to this military visit and joint military exercise, it will be a deterrent to Portugal. See, Spain is still on the side of the North Sea Kingdom. Chapter 1892, The Spanish Response. When Marin sent someone to send the request for military visits and joint military exercises to Spain, Kings Ferdinand II and Juan III happened to be in the royal palace of Toledo. There was no way. Recently, the little prince of Spain, Marin, was unwell, which frightened Ferdinand II, his grandfather, to come from Zaragoza to visit and take care of him. Originally in history, Ferdinand II should have died on January 23, 1516. But in this time and space, because Marin helped him save his only son Juan, his mood was very different from the original history. Therefore, he did not die as in the original history, but survived, and he was a doting demon. The Spanish Crown Prince Marin is 16 years old this year, 2 years older than Caesar, but he is definitely the #1 celebrity in the Spanish royal family. Although Ferdinand II is very cunning and ruthless, he is a person who dotes on his children and grandchildren. On the contrary, he doesn't care about his daughter's life or death. His eldest daughter died of dystocia, and he didn't feel anything. His youngest daughter was wronged in England, and he didn't have any psychological fluctuations. But historically, he was extremely sad about the death of his son Juan, and even felt hopeless. Because the death of his son meant the end of the inheritance of the Trastamare dynasty. As for the children born by his daughter, they belonged to other families, and Ferdinand II didn't care. Therefore, originally in history, Ferdinand II and his grandson Charles V competed for the right to speak in Spain. It was not until his death that Charles V completely controlled Spain. Unlike his attitude towards his grandson Charles V, Ferdinand II's love for his grandson Prince Marin was boundless. After the death of his son born to his second wife, Ferdinand II placed all his hopes on his grandson Marin. Every year, Prince Marin lived in the Zaragoza court for several months and received parent-child instruction from Ferdinand II. Now, his grandson is sick in the royal palace of Toledo, and Ferdinand II, regardless of his 64-year-old age, ran directly to visit his grandson. Moreover, it was a coincidence that Prince Marin also caught a cold, which was similar to Juan III's condition. He had a cough caused by a cold. There was nothing much to say. Just give him ginger and brown sugar water, and it worked as soon as he drank it. So, when Prince Marin drank ginger and brown sugar water and his condition began to improve, it was exactly when Ferdinand II and Juan III were most grateful to Marin. Because the three of them understood that if Marin had not offered the ginger and brown sugar water treatment method, not to mention this grandson, even their son's life would not have been saved. It was in this context that Marin's request for a military visit and joint military exercise was sent to the royal palace of Toledo. After reading Marin's request, Juan III did not dare to make a decision, but asked Ferdinand II, who was hugging his grandson and asking about his well-being, "Father, what do you think?" Ferdinand II helped his grandson cover the quilt, turned around and said, "Since the other party is willing to let us earn tens of thousands of gold coins, why should we refuse? Moreover, you and little Marin can survive, and we should be grateful to him. But Portugal. I'm worried that my sister Maria will be unhappy." Juan III hesitated. Although he was also grateful to Marin, he was also worried that his sister, Queen Maria of Portugal, would be unhappy, and he was a little embarrassed. Ferdinand II snorted heavily, then left his grandson's bedroom and came to the living room. After seeing Juan III and Queen Margaret following him, he reprimanded, "What does Maria think of you have to do with you? Although she is your sister, she cannot affect the relationship between Spain and Portugal. For Spain and Portugal, both countries wish the other to die. Although they are currently cooperating to control the Indian spice trade, both want to monopolize it. Moreover, the Portuguese have always been dissatisfied and think that we have robbed them of their share of the Indian spice trade. Therefore, it is definitely not good for us to worsen the relationship with the Portuguese. Even if your sister and younger sister are both queens of Portugal, it will not change this. So, you don't need to consider your sister Maria's feelings, just think about how to benefit Spain. As for the accusations of the Portuguese, you can use the excuse that Marin saved your life that year and say that you can't refuse." After a pause, Ferdinand II said, "In fact, I wish Marin's army would pass through Spain and directly destroy Portugal. At that time, we can not only take the opportunity to annex Portugal, but also annex the other half of the Indian spice trade. It's a pity that this so-called joint military exercise is clearly a false move by Marin, the cunning boy, to scare Portugal. You know, the North Sea Kingdom and Portugal are thousands of miles apart, and the North Sea Kingdom's naval power is not as strong as Portugal. Even if it annexed Portugal on land, it would not be able to control it. In the end, it will still be a bargain for us, right? However, this is destined to be a show to threaten the other side. Alas! What a good opportunity. 1-3's Queen Margaret's eyes flashed and said, how about we encourage Marin to really destroy Portugal? She also hoped that her husband could annex Portugal. In this way, she could become the queen of the entire Iberian Peninsula. Ferdinand II shook his head and said, my child, you are smarter than Juan, but you still lack experience. Marin, that cunning boy, is much more cunning than you. I am sure that he is just bluffing this time, unless the Portuguese are really stupid enough to take the initiative to attack the North Sea Kingdom. Otherwise, this boy will definitely not send troops to destroy Portugal. Because the North Sea Kingdom does not want Spain to annex Portugal. Queen Margaret thought for a while before saying, you mean, the North Sea Kingdom is also afraid of the emergence of an Iberian Empire that dominates the ocean? Ferdinand II praised, yes, if Spain really annexed Portugal, then we will have no opponents on the ocean and become the master of the ocean. And the North Sea Kingdom is a country that manages the ocean. Not to mention the development and utilization of the savage continent, even the colonial management of Japan in the Far East and the trade with the Ming dynasty are all things he is reluctant to give up. But if we annex Portugal, the ocean will be ours. We can cut off its Far East trade route if we want. It all depends on our mood. Do you think he will be happy to see such a maritime hegemon appear? So, this time the North Sea Kingdom is just using us to scare Portugal? 1-3 said. Ferdinand II nodded and said, yes, that's right. Marin is using us. So, he did not use us in vain and gave us benefits. Otherwise, would I agree to let him use us? In addition, Spain actually needs the North Sea Kingdom to attract Portugal's attention. Juan, you should know that Spain is currently competing with France for the Kingdom of Naples and has no time to take care of other things. I am worried that Portugal will make small moves behind the scenes, so I am very happy to let the North Sea Kingdom and Portugal confront each other. In this way, the Portuguese will have no intention of calculating Spain. With Marin, the little fox, confronting the Portuguese will have a headache. Ferdinand II smiled gloatingly. After that, Ferdinand II waved his hand and said, let's do it this way. Afterwards, send someone to tell your sister Maria that your life was saved by Marin and you couldn't refuse him. In addition, that treatment method also saved your son. Oh, if only my grandson Marin could be as smart and cunning as Marin. After that, he ran into the bedroom to see his grandson again. Chapter 1893, The Wedding of the Niece. Before entering his grandson's bedroom, Ferdinand II muttered, I don't know how Marin, that cunning boy, grew up. His father is just a stupid knight. His mother is educated. Is it because his mother taught him well? Well, my grandson's mother is also smart. I hope that my grandson will be better than Marin, that cunning little fox, in the future. 1-3 and Queen Margaret looked at each other in surprise. After a while, 1-3 said speechlessly, my dear, Marin's education depends on you. Queen Margaret was speechless, but to be honest, the Spanish Prince Marin is really not bad. Because he received strict education from his mother since he was a child, Prince Marin is not an unlearned dandy, but a primary school bully with erudition and talent. After all, Queen Margaret was a person who taught a powerful monarch like Charles V in history, and it is impossible for her to teach her son wrongly. However, compared with the time traveler Marin, the 16-year-old Prince Marin is still not good enough. You know, the time traveler Marin left home to conquer the world at the age of 16, while Prince Marin of Spain was still studying under the guidance of his mother. Maybe, I should take some time to visit Lady Mary in the North Sea Kingdom and ask her how to educate my son. Queen Margaret thought to herself. However, Lady Mary, the powerful mother that Queen Margaret was thinking about, was educating her eldest granddaughter Mary at this time. Mary Hoffman is the oldest child of the third generation of the Hoffman family. She is 1 year older than Caesar and was born before Marin captured East Frisia. Because she was worried that the tough eldest daughter-in-law Liv was not good at raising children, Lady Mary brought her eldest granddaughter Mary with her and trained her personally. Staying with Mary in the villa area in the east of the city where the old Hoffman couple lived was Mary's younger brother Muti. Since the youngest daughter and got married, the old couple could only stay with their eldest granddaughter and grandson Muti. Of course, they could also visit Caesar in the palace from time to time. However, Caesar was not very close to the old couple. After all, they did not live together. Of course, Caesar has all the respect and courtesy he should have. However, the old couple felt that Caesar was a little too polite, unlike their grandson who could play with him at will. In fact, Marin was also worried that old Hoffman would teach Caesar the wrong way. Mrs. Mary was smarter, and there was nothing wrong with her educating Caesar, but old Hoffman was a muscular man who liked to wield swords and guns the most. If Caesar was led astray and became a man with no brains but only muscles, Marin would cry to death. Therefore, Marin deliberately asked Adler to give his children to the old couple to raise, so as to divert their attention. As expected, Adler's eldest son Muti, who was only 8 years old, was trained by old Hoffman to be a little warrior. He loved fighting and liked to compete with children of the same age. At a young age, he was notorious among the children. Only Tyson, the eldest son of the fierce brother Khan, could compete with Muti. Of course, this was also the result of Marin's deliberate arrangement. On the surface, he wanted to please old Hoffman and let him teach his grandson to become a brave nobleman. In fact, he hoped that Muti would grow into a muscular man so as not to threaten Caesar in the future. Lady Mary seemed to be very clear about this, and did not urge Muti to study hard. As a descendant of a noble family, Lady Mary was very clear about the filthiness of noble families. For Muti's safety, he would live longer if he did not grow his brain. Therefore, when seeing Muti dozing off while reading, or even finding excuses to avoid reading, Lady Mary remained silent. But on the contrary, when educating her granddaughter Mary, Lady Mary was much stricter, and seemed to want to train little Mary into a resourceful and wise wife. Then, the old couple reached a tacit understanding. Old Hoffman concentrated on teaching his grandson martial arts and tried to train him into a brave knight. Lady Mary, on the other hand, concentrated on teaching her granddaughter to read and write, as well as management methods, so that she could become a qualified mistress of a large family in the future, or even, queen. However, little Mary's luck did not seem to be very good. Because it seems that no prince or monarch who wants to remarry wants to marry her. The main reason is that his father is not attractive, and no monarch or crown prince is willing to marry Adler's daughter. After all, the Hoffman family is just a nouveau riche family in the eyes of others. Although they are among the great nobles, others only reluctantly recognize Marin as a person, and will not recognize Adler, Marin's brother. If Mary is Marin's daughter, perhaps there will be princes of the vassal states willing to marry her in order to establish a relationship with the North Sea Kingdom. But little Mary is Adler's daughter. Although Adler later became the Earl of the Earldom of Wicklow, he is far away in the countryside of the island of Ireland and is not recognized by the mainstream society. So, although little Mary is already 15 years old, marriage has become a big problem. In fact, under the careful training of Lady Mary, little Mary's ability is very outstanding. She has read a lot of books and often goes in and out of the library of the Auric Palace. She has a very rich knowledge, comparable to ordinary college students of this era. Moreover, she has a good level of mathematics, enough to serve as a financial officer. Moreover, because of the influence of Lady Mary, little Mary is not as tough as her parents, but is more educated and has the demeanor of a lady from a noble family, not worse than Anne, who has become the Queen of Poland. However, her appearance is dragged down by her father, and she can't catch up with Anne, who perfectly inherited Lady Mary, but it is definitely not bad. After all, Adler's wife Liv is not ugly. Moreover, there is no old man like Sigismund I who comes to the North Sea Kingdom and happens to fall in love with Lady Mary. So, the Hoffman family is a little worried this time, worried about little Mary's marriage. The old Hoffman couple wanted to marry little Mary to the princes or the prince's heirs, but they didn't like it. Those barren families, including many noble families in the North Sea, were willing to marry little Mary, but the old Hoffman couple were not happy. In their eyes, the precious granddaughter should be the queen of a principality, not the mistress of a small noble family. But the eldest granddaughter is already 15 years old, and no prince or prince has come to propose marriage. They are anxious. Then, old Hoffman found Marin. What? Let me help my niece find a husband of importance. Marin was very upset after hearing old Hoffman's request. Old Hoffman nodded as a matter of course and said, "Of course, you are the most capable in our family. It shouldn't be difficult to help your niece find a powerful husband. This is the oldest child of the third generation of the Hoffman family. Her marriage cannot be particular, otherwise people will look down on her." Old Hoffman argued. On the side, Mrs. Mary also nodded repeatedly. Marin's heart was full of whistling horses. He thought to himself, when did I become a matchmaker? But what the old Hoffman couple said made sense. As the first person of the third generation of the Hoffman family, little Mary really couldn't marry a bad one, otherwise, it would be a loss of face for the entire Hoffman family. Marin suddenly thought of the Spanish crown Prince Marin. The child was 16 years old, just 1 year older than little Mary, and the age was very suitable. But she quickly rejected this idea. Not to mention whether the Spanish royal family looked down on little Mary's background, even Marin herself was not happy with little Mary becoming the Queen of Spain. Why? After all, she is the eldest daughter of Hoffman's eldest branch. If Adler had only her as a daughter, Marin would definitely find a way to make her the future Queen of Spain. But the terrible thing is that she also has a younger brother named Muti, who was formerly called Nefolk, German, heir. If little Mary becomes the future Queen of Spain, and Spain secretly instigates Muti to compete with Caesar for the Orthodox position in the future because of little Mary, then it will be a lot of fun. Therefore, for the safety of her son, little Mary must not become the queen of a powerful country. In addition, she cannot marry into the Medici family of the future pope. However, she cannot marry too badly. Otherwise, the Hoffman family will not look good. Therefore, this matter worried Marin, and it made Marin more worried than commanding a war. What kind of nephew-in-law should he find? Chapter 1894, 10 Miles of Red Makeup. After much deliberation, Marin finally decided to find an heir to a small prince family with a high status but poor family strength for his niece. In this way, his niece can satisfy her parents' face and be a prince's wife without affecting the situation in the North Sea. However, Marin was actually overthinking. Even if he wanted to find a powerful prince for his niece, he would not be happy. Just like the Spanish Prince Marin, his marriage partners are generally princesses of major kingdoms. At the very least, she must be a princess of a powerful prince. How could it be the turn of a prince's niece? Although Marin canonized Adler as the Earl of Wicklow and gave Wicklow County to Adler as an earldom, it was a fiefdom within the Hoffman family. Other countries did not actually recognize it. They only recognized Adler as a senior noble of the North Sea, but not a prince with independent sovereignty. Therefore, the status of the eldest niece, Mary, is naturally much lower than that of the daughter of a prince. Moreover, considering that the Hoffman family is a nouveau riche among the princes, there are very few people who can look up to her background. Unless it is a very poor little prince who needs to hold the North Sea country's thigh. Obviously, Marin also considered this. Therefore, he ordered Kohler to start collecting information about the princes of those very weak princely states and see if the other party is interested in marriage. In any case, little Mary is also the first person of the third generation of the Hoffman family, and she will definitely get married earlier than Caesar. Therefore, she really can't marry too shabby. Otherwise, his uncle will have no face. Therefore, Marin directly promised that the standard of little Mary's dowry would be directly based on a very high standard. Its value is based on 200,000 gold coins, and he, the uncle, will pay for it. This decision shocked many people, and also moved the old Hoffman couple and little Mary. You know, in this era, France's annual fiscal revenue is only about 1.2 million gold coins. Marin took out 200,000 gold coins as a dowry for his niece, which was equivalent to 1/6 of the annual fiscal revenue of France, the most powerful country in Western Europe. Those poor countries would definitely be full of money if they married little Mary. Of course, it doesn't mean that Marin would take out 200,000 gold coins in real money and silver. He planned to use most of the goods such as silk and satin and exquisite porcelain imported from the Ming dynasty to compensate. In this way, it is worth 200,000 gold coins on the surface, but the actual cost is only tens of thousands of gold coins. After all, these things are actually cheaper in the Ming dynasty. However, it is indeed worth 200,000 gold coins when brought to Europe. Moreover, the dowry is all silk and satin and exquisite porcelain, and it is particularly face-saving. After all, in Europe, Oriental silk and porcelain are the symbol of wealth. Whoever marries a car of Oriental silk and porcelain will probably make others envious. Scarcity makes things valuable, and this kind of thing also happened in ancient China. During the Tang dynasty, Chinese pepper was very expensive. Prime Minister Yuan Zhi was corrupt and actually collected 800 stones of pepper. When Emperor Daizong of Tang learned that Yuan Zhi's family had 800 stones of pepper, he was furious and ordered the excavation of Yuan Zhi's ancestral tomb as an extremely severe punishment. There was no way. During the Tang dynasty, due to inconvenient transportation, pepper, which was extremely cheap in Southeast Asia and India, was also very valuable in China. Like Europe at that time, it was more expensive than gold. Of course, this was also the reason why Arab merchants at that time slaughtered the Tang dynasty. When they imported pepper from India, the price was very cheap. When it was shipped to the Tang dynasty, they opened their mouths and sold it at a sky-high price. If anyone traveled to the Tang dynasty, as long as they could open up the trade route to India and engage in pepper trade, they would definitely make a fortune. Because during the Tang dynasty, Chinese people did not eat pork, but mutton. Mutton has a strong smell and requires spices, so pepper is very popular among the powerful. In addition, the Tang dynasty did not produce pepper at that time, and there was no great voyage, so it could only rely on Arab merchants to transport it, so it could only be slaughtered. As for the subsequent drop in pepper prices, it was also related to the popularity of pork. After all, pork is not as smelly as mutton, and does not require too many spices. But the price of pepper really fell after Zheng He sailed to the west and opened up the Southeast Asian route. Although the Ming dynasty no longer sent fleets to the west, after Zheng He opened up the route, Southeast Asian countries such as Manchuria kept sending tribute ships to the Ming dynasty for tribute trade. Then, the price of pepper really began to fall. In the early Ming dynasty, pepper was still an expensive item. By the Wanli period, it was only more than 100 coins per pound, and ordinary wealthy families could afford it. By the same token, Europe had not yet fully opened up the Ming market. Only Marin could trade with the Ming dynasty by taking advantage of the situation, while the Portuguese failed. Therefore, at this time, Oriental silk and porcelain were naturally extremely rare luxury goods in Europe. In fact, if only the purchase price is considered, silk and porcelain worth 200,000 gold coins would probably only cost a few thousand gold coins in the Ming dynasty. This is doubled after taking into account the freight for ultra-long distances and other additional costs, but it is only a fraction of the value. Therefore, the cost of Marin's generosity is not very high. However, in the eyes of other Europeans, this is real generosity. Because the market value of this thing is not fake. However, because the value of the dowry is too high, Mrs. Mary is worried that others are willing to marry little Mary just for the dowry. Therefore, Mrs. Mary asked to temporarily conceal the specific amount and only declare it to the outside world as a very generous dowry, instead of saying the specific value of 200,000, so as not to scare others or attract greedy people. After listening to Mrs. Mary's concerns, Marin rolled his eyes and thought, what's this? In the Western Jin dynasty, Shirchong and Wang Kai used expensive purple silk and colored satin to lay 40-mile and 50-mile barriers. Moreover, there is a saying of 10 miles of red makeup among the Chinese people. Although it is an exaggeration, in the Ming dynasty, there were really many wealthy families who could afford silk and porcelain worth thousands of taels of silver. But this is Europe, not China with developed productivity. Therefore, Mrs. Mary's concerns are somewhat reasonable. Therefore, Marin did not publicize the richness of the dowry, but only vaguely said rich. However, at this time, Marin had a plan for his son Caesar's wedding, 10 miles of red makeup, no discount. Caesar is also 14 years old, and will be 15 soon, but Princess Margaret of England is still young, only 10 years old. But in a few years, the two can almost get married. By then, Marin, as a father, will definitely make Caesar's wedding a legend. There was no way for his wedding. At that time, it was still the startup period, and there was no Ming dynasty route. There was no condition, so he could only use inferior lion silk to make up the number. But when Caesar and Princess Margaret got married, Marin had a lot of silk in his hands. At that time, Marin planned to learn from Shirchong and Wang Kai, use red silk as barriers on both sides, and really put on the posture of 10 miles of red makeup to shock the European natives. By then, Marin should have thwarted France's interference in his annexation of England, and would no longer be afraid of other people's threats. So, even if he was as rich as Shirchong and Wang Kai, what about it? Chapter 1895, The Legend of the Rich Emperor. According to Kong Tai's report, in the Ming dynasty, a piece of silk was only 601, which is 0.6 taels of silver. And a piece of silk is 13 meters long and about 1.4 meters wide. So, a single-sided 10 li long, 5,000 meters, red silk barrier is 385 pieces, and a double-sided one is 770 pieces, which is only worth 462 taels of silver. Well, so cheap. Less than 500 taels. Then give my niece a 10 li red makeup. After Marin calculated, he immediately made up his mind. No wonder ancient China had 10 li red makeup, because there was not much money. 500 taels of silver, the small and medium-sized landlords who could afford it in the Ming dynasty were numerous, not to mention those wealthy families. However, it was a bit embarrassing for his son to use ordinary cheap red silk. Marin decided to use ordinary red silk at 0.6 taels of silver per piece for his niece. And his own son used purple satin at 2 taels of silver per piece. In ancient times, red and purple were precious, especially purple, and this was true in both the East and the West. If his son used purple satin to make a 10-mile red makeup to marry an English princess, it would probably shock the whole of Europe. In fact, there are not many nobles in Europe who can wear purple silk clothes now. After all, European silk and purple dyes are very rare. Seeing Marin use 10 miles of purple satin as a fence-like barrier, it would probably make a lot of people jealous. But they don't know that in the Ming dynasty, even the relatively expensive purple satin was only 2 taels of silver per piece. Moreover, silk that costs more than 1 tael of silver per piece is considered high-end. Calculated in this way, 10 miles of purple satin is only 1,540 taels of silver. Marin was immediately unhappy, not rich enough. So he changed Caesar's wedding specifications, and 10 miles of red makeup became 10 miles of red makeup. Then, the length was expanded to 3.2 times the original, but the purchase price was only less than 5,000 taels of silver, which was very cheap. Marin didn't know that the specification of 10 miles of red makeup for his son Caesar, which he casually set today, later became the highest configuration of romantic weddings in Europe. However, it also made many men who pursued girls suffer. Because 10 miles of red makeup is really expensive. Later, some European girls asked their suitors, "Are you willing to lay 10 miles of red makeup to marry me?" Then, men with insufficient financial resources turned around and left in fear after hearing this. Nima, although ordinary silk and satin were less than 1 tael of silver per piece in the Ming dynasty, they could buy more than a dozen gold coins in Europe. As for purple silk, it was sold for 50 gold coins per piece. Laying a 10-mile-long purple satin barrier is a luxury, but it is worth 120,000 or 130,000 gold coins. Can ordinary people afford it? It is equivalent to 1/10 of the annual fiscal revenue of the Kingdom of France. Therefore, later European nobles accepted the concept of 500-meter huali. If nothing else, just to save some length and spend less on red makeup. This cut saves most of the money. Then, those European nobles with limited financial resources will tell the girls they are pursuing, I am a well-educated person, and the 10 miles of red makeup they are talking about is 10 li, not 10 miles. Don't be misled by the inhumane guy Marin the Great. We must respect the originality. Well, and the 10 miles of purple satin was also exaggerated by the rich Emperor Marin. In fact, the original Oriental one is red silk, the kind worth more than 10 gold coins per piece, not the purple satin worth 50 gold coins. We must respect the originality and don't learn from the rich emperor. Because of the 10 miles of red makeup incident, Marin the Great became the synonym of romantic father-in-law in the eyes of European women in later generations. But in the eyes of male compatriots, this guy is a rich emperor, the kind that spends money. But privately, male compatriots also lament in their hearts, I also want to have such a rich father like Caesar the Great, and I also want to be a scallion. In fact, 10 miles of red makeup was ruined by Marin. The original meaning was that the burden of carrying the dowry was very long, and 10 miles was also an exaggerated adjective. Marin was an idiot because he thought that European silk was too rare, and no one would see it if it was placed in a box, as in, who knows it when a woman walks at night in brocade clothes. Moreover, if a dowry burden of 10 miles was really made, it would actually be more valuable. Therefore, he simply changed the concept and combined 10 miles of red makeup with the silk screen used by Shi Chong and Wang Kai when they competed for wealth, and made a fake and shoddy version of 10 miles of red makeup with a double-sided screen. The 1.4-meter wide silk as a screen can't actually block the sight of onlookers. But this screen itself is not used to block people's sight, but to show off wealth. Therefore, this height is just right. It allows people to see the grandeur of the wedding and the expensive silk showing under their eyes. Therefore, it is the best way to show off. Especially in Europe where silk is in short supply. This fake and shoddy version of 10 miles of red makeup is more shocking than the original one. You see, ordinary poor nobles can't even wear silk clothes. As a result, the Hoffman royal family directly used silk, and the lowest grade of purple satin, as the barrier fence on the wedding aisle. Isn't that infuriating? It's simply inhumane. Moreover, Marin, the rich emperor, also distorted the European wedding customs. Originally, it was popular to wear white wedding dresses at European weddings, symbolizing holiness. But Marin is a Chinese soul, and he thinks that laying 10 miles of white makeup is too outrageous, and it is simply a curse to the whole family. So, he first used the genuine 10 miles of red makeup for his eldest niece, and later used 10 miles of purple makeup for his son, which invisibly raised the standard of European royal weddings. Later, under the distortion of Marin, the European wedding atmosphere no longer made white wedding dresses, but used red silk or purple silk. Among them, the nobles who were not rich enough used red silk as a barrier. The royal family generally began to use purple satin as a barrier. As a result, a term called purple dress was born. Being able to use purple satin as a barrier and wearing a purple wedding dress represents being noble enough. Even later, it was extended to high-end weapons and equipment, also known as purple clothing. However, Caesar and Princess Margaret are still young, and the wedding will take a few years. Therefore, the 10-mile purple makeup cannot be done now. Moreover, it takes time to get so much purple satin back. But now, there are already a lot of silk and satin in the warehouse of the Auric Palace. And it happens that Marin's future daughter-in-law, Princess Margaret, also likes purple. So, Marin called his son Caesar and gave him a task: arrange tailors to make 100 various princess dresses according to Princess Margaret's size as Caesar's summer gift to Princess Margaret. After all, it's almost summer, and I have to prepare some clothes for my future daughter-in-law. Then, wait for autumn and winter, and prepare different styles. 100 purple satin skirts. Dad, is it too extravagant? Caesar was a little surprised and felt it was too wasteful. Then, Marin knocked him on the head and scolded him with a smile, you know nothing. Behind Princess Margaret is England. Once we unite with England, the benefits will be enormous. What are 100 purple satin skirts? Son, remember this. Poor men use sweet words to coax women, and rich men say, swipe my card. They use luxury goods to stun women. Let me tell you, in the past, there was a wasteful festival invented by an unscrupulous businessman, called Double 11. On that day, any man who can empty the shopping cart for the wasteful woman he likes has a very good chance of taking her home, and until he vomits, well, it's too early to say these, you are still young, I'll tell you in detail when you grow up. Chapter 1896, Europe's most popular gift giver. The world of children is very simple, not as complicated as the world of adults. Caesar had told Princess Margaret many interesting fairy tales under the instruction of Marin, so that Princess Margaret had long regarded Caesar as a great good man. It should be pointed out that the great good man in the eyes of little girls is different from the good man in the mouths of adult women. The good man in the mouths of adult women is hopeless because he has been given a good man card, while the great good man in the eyes of little girls is the kind who can marry you when he grows up. Now, if Caesar sends hundreds of beautiful purple satin skirts, Caesar's reputation with Princess Margaret will definitely be further improved. Moreover, the cost is not very high. Princess Margaret is only 10 years old, and her clothes are very small. One piece of purple satin can make several skirts. 100 sets of purple skirts are only about 20 pieces of purple satin. Including the processing fee, it is not much money. Of course, this is the cost on Marin's side. Marin imported purple satin from the Ming dynasty for only 2 taels of silver per piece, equivalent to 1.74 gold coins. The cost of shipping it to Europe is definitely no more than 5 gold coins. In addition, in order to meet the clothing requirements of Angela, Felice, and other women in the family, Marin specially selected young girls with special tailoring talents and trained them to serve as tailors for the royal family. Now, after a few years, these girls don't say that they design clothes themselves, but at least they have made many princess dresses and ladies' dresses that Marin copied from the later generations very well. With a group of professional tailors at home, the labor cost of making clothes for Princess Margaret is not high, and it is very fast. But in the market, purple satin skirts are very expensive. Silk and purple dyes are precious and rare in Europe, and now Europe does not have any fashion design masters like in the later generations. If the purple satin skirts in Marin's palace were circulated on the market, they would cost at least 20 or 30 gold coins, and there would be no market for them. In England, although Marin also sent people to sell silk and porcelain several times, there were very few purple silks sold there, and they were basically eaten by the royal family of England. Because Princess Margaret likes purple very much. However, the quantity is not large. In fact, purple in the East was much cheaper than in the West at that time. Because the purple dye in Europe was mainly derived from a fuel extracted from a conch in the eastern Mediterranean region, which was very rare and precious. Until the emergence of synthetic dye aniline purple in the 19th century, purple was something that only the European royal family, great nobles and senior church officials could afford to wear. Moreover, purple dye would definitely not be used on cheap fabrics such as linen and wool, but only on expensive silk. But the purple dye in ancient China was much cheaper, because the purple dye in ancient China was extracted from a plant called comfrey. Although its printing and dyeing process is more complicated, color fixation is required, the cost is indeed much cheaper than the purple dye in Europe. However, Marin did not import a large amount of purple silk, but imported enough and slightly more. The reason for this is that purple is too noble in Europe. If he sells purple silk to ordinary people, it may cause disgust from the royal families of other countries who respect wearing purple, as well as the top leaders of the church. This is not difficult to understand. Now many royal members of Europe and high-ranking church officials are proud to wear purple silk clothes. If Marin imports a large number of purple satin clothes and sells them to the common people and rich people, so that the common people can also wear purple satin clothes, it would be strange if the kings and archbishops who are proud to wear purple silk clothes are not angry with Marin. Therefore, Marin cannot dump purple silk in Europe, so as not to offend people for no reason. However, there is nothing wrong with using purple silk as a barrier for weddings and giving purple satin clothes to Princess Margaret. Because after all, he is also a king now, and Princess Margaret is also the heir to the Kingdom of England, and her status is enough. As long as you don't sell purple satin clothes to ordinary people, you won't be hated. Moreover, Marin plans to use purple satin as a gift for mutual gifts between monarchs in the future. If there is a big event between the royal families in Europe, they also have to congratulate each other with gifts. For example, when the king or crown prince of a certain country gets married, other countries with good or at least not bad relations will send gifts. Moreover, the gifts cannot be shabby. Otherwise, people will laugh at it. Giving too expensive gifts is too costly. But if they are too cheap, they will be laughed at. Therefore, this purple silk, which is not suitable for sale among the people, has become a very suitable gift. This thing was only 2 taels of silver per piece in the Ming dynasty, and even the high-end goods in the Ming dynasty were only 5 taels of silver per piece. But in Europe, a piece of such purple silk costs at least 50 gold coins, or even cannot be bought. Marin sent 100 pieces of purple silk as a gift, and the cost was only 200 taels of silver, but the market price in Europe was 5,000 gold coins. This gift is very valuable no matter where it is placed. Moreover, it is very face-saving. In this way, Marin later became a madman who sent purple silk. Whenever a king or a prince held a wedding, Marin would send 100 pieces of purple silk and nothing else. The cost was only a few hundred taels of silver, but it was the most arrogant, dazzling and face-saving gift among all the guests. Especially for the birthdays of princesses of some small countries, in order to get purple silk, they often deliberately invited the royal family of the North Sea Kingdom to attend the birthday party. But not every princess is qualified to have the North Sea Kingdom send someone to go, so many times, it's just a gift. But those princesses don't care, because the North Sea Kingdom will send 50 pieces of purple silk as a gift, even for a birthday party, which is not a high-profile celebration. It just happens that it can be used to make beautiful clothes. Those small vassal states are not very good economically, and they can't afford such expensive purple silk. Moreover, even if they can afford it, there is no market for it. Because purple dye is too scarce. Therefore, many princesses of small vassal states rely on birthday parties to invite Prince Caesar and William of the North Sea Kingdom to participate in order to cheat purple silk. Anyway, whether the two princes come or not, 50 pieces of purple silk will be sent. In the words of those princesses, it doesn't matter whether people come or not, the purple silk must be sent as a gift. Marin knows it well, but he also finds it funny. Because this thing was only 2 taels of silver per piece in the Ming dynasty. Ordinary landlord families can afford it, let alone the local tyrants. In the early Ming dynasty, because of Zhu Yuanzhang's strict rules, small families might not be allowed to wear purple clothes. Even the children of merchants were not allowed to participate in the imperial examinations. But in the middle and late Ming dynasty, the rules were relaxed a lot. The children of merchants could also participate in the imperial examinations, and ordinary small families could also wear purple clothes. Now is the middle of the Ming dynasty, when the rules began to relax. Purple clothes have begun to enter thousands of households and are easy to buy on the market. The purple silk that Marin gave as a gift to the royal families and princesses of various countries is actually a common commodity worn by ordinary people in the Ming dynasty market. However, in Europe, it has become a very popular luxury. Moreover, there are princesses who specifically want it, which is really ridiculous. In fact, 50 pieces of purple silk cost only 100 taels of silver in the Ming dynasty. And what is 100 taels of silver? Lu Jin couldn't accept gifts without 10,000 taels of silver. Of course, on the surface, the annual salary of a county magistrate in the Ming dynasty was only 45 taels of silver. So, 100 taels is actually not a small amount in this era. However, it was too shabby to be used as a gift between countries. However, considering the high price and scarcity of purple silk in Europe, 100 or 50 pieces of purple silk could be considered a great gift. Therefore, the royal families of various European countries later liked to invite the royal family of the North Sea Kingdom to participate in their various celebrations and banquets, not for anything else, but for the purple silk that the North Sea Kingdom casually gave. And Marin was also privately rated as the most popular gift giver in Europe. Chapter 1897, Does My Son Have a Love Rival Again? Marin's method of asking Caesar to send a purple skirt was also very successful. Princess Margaret, who was only 10 years old, loved the 100 beautiful purple skirts of various styles, and vowed to kiss Caesar a few times to express her gratitude when he came. However, some ministers in England were very dissatisfied with the little princess's statement. These ministers all supported Princess Margaret to marry the sons of domestic nobles to avoid foreign monarchs from ruling England. Or, these ministers hoped that Princess Margaret's husband would not be the crown prince of another country. In this way, foreign monarchs would be avoided from ruling England. They were not against the North Sea Kingdom, but against Caesar, the crown prince of the North Sea King, ruling 2 countries at the same time in the future. They believed that as the crown prince of the North Sea, Caesar must have a higher recognition of the North Sea Kingdom. At that time, if he favored the North Sea Kingdom, it would be disadvantageous to England. In fact, their judgment was not unreasonable. Historically, it was a tragedy that Spain chose Charles V to be their king. Charles V was, after all, the emperor of the Habsburg family, and psychologically he was more inclined towards Germany. Therefore, although he lived in Spain, his mind was mainly on the hegemony of the German region, actively participated in the internal hegemony of Germany, and also participated in the religious wars. The poor Spanish colonial empire plundered so much gold and silver from the Americas, most of which were squandered by Charles V on the hegemony of the German region. Then, Spain did not develop, but instead suffered a lot of deficits. Even during the reign of Charles V's son Philip II, Spain, which had a lot of gold and silver, was forced to declare national bankruptcy. In the final analysis, it was because Spain was dragged down by Austria. Obviously, it had a strong profit level, but because of rashly participating in the European hegemony of the Holy Roman Empire, it wasted a lot of money and dragged down Spain. If it did not participate in the European hegemony, the money used in the development of Spain or the American colonies would at least be better than spending it on the European hegemony. In short, the Habsburg family dragged down the Spanish colonial empire. However, after separating from Austria, Spain did not seem to develop well. After losing the 80 Years' War and being forced to let the Netherlands become independent, Spain directly became a second-rate country in Europe. England, which was once poor and weak, rose to become a first-rate power. But in this era, the two are switched. Spain in this era is rich, with a population more than twice that of England, and owns a large area of land in Italy. It can be said to be extremely powerful. England, on the other hand, was still a weak and poor country with a population of only 3 million. Of course, because of Marin, England today has annexed England's mortal enemy Scotland and the entire territory of Ireland, and its national power is booming. Then, some English ministers were inevitably a little arrogant and began to regard themselves as the top powers in Europe, which was a little inflated. Then, the North Sea Kingdom, which was not even a sovereign state, was somewhat ignored by them. Although the North Sea Kingdom has a large colony on the American continent, the concept of colonies in this era was not clear enough for Europeans, and it was inevitable that they would underestimate the role of colonies. Coupled with Marin's previous anti-propaganda, the American colonies were nothing in the eyes of the English ministers. In fact, after annexing 8 vassal states, the current North Sea Kingdom has a large area, larger than the Kingdom of England before annexing Scotland and Ireland, and a population of more than 2 million. However, because it is not a sovereign state, but only a Grand Duke, and the American Kingdom in America is not recognized. Therefore, those English ministers who regard themselves as ministers of a great power inevitably look down on the North Sea Kingdom. It is not that they are unwilling to marry the Hoffman royal family, but they do not want their future king to be a monarch of another country. Especially, the monarch of a non-sovereign country like the Grand Duchy of the North Sea. In addition to worrying that such a monarch will not be interested in England in the future, they also don't like their future monarch to be a vassal of another country. After all, the Grand Duke of the North Sea is still a vassal of the Holy Roman Empire in name, a minister. A person of this status, serving as the King of England, will make the English ministers feel ashamed. Because your monarch is just a minister of others, and feels like a dwarf. Therefore, at present, some ministers in England have begun to seek to keep the throne in the country to prevent foreign monarchs from becoming the powerful monarch of England. However, even if they wanted to learn from the French and choose a branch to become the heir to the royal family, they found that it seemed that all the other men in the York family had been killed by Henry VII. Then, they could only support Henry, the eldest son of Edward's sister, Princess Margaret, to marry Princess Margaret. In this way, the throne would not fall into the hands of a foreign monarch. But the problem was that Henry's father, Richard Pole, was a standard traitor and killed Edward's sister, Princess Margaret, with his own hands. Therefore, even if he inherited the title of Earl of Salisbury from his mother, Princess Margaret, Henry Pole was not very popular in Edward's court. In particular, the military nobles did not like the little cubs of the Pole family. Only those civil ministers who did not want the throne to fall on the heads of foreign monarchs supported him to marry Princess Margaret. But many English military nobles knew very well that although Marin was not in England, there were legends about him everywhere in England. In particular, the 4th and 5th legions of the North Sea Kingdom were still stationed in England. If they turned against each other rashly, civil war would break out in England in an instant. However, given that Edward is still young and people don't know that Edward has been kicked out, the ministers of England are still waiting for Edward to give birth to a prince to solve the current problem. However, they don't know that this is just a luxury. However, recently a new faction suddenly emerged in England, supporting the marriage between Princess Margaret and Prince Ferdinand of the Habsburg family. In the future, let Prince Ferdinand marry into England. Prince Ferdinand is Ferdinand, the second son of Prince Philip, and the younger brother of Charles V. He was born in 1503 and is close to the age of Princess Margaret. However, he has no right of inheritance and will not become a monarch in the future. If he marries Princess Margaret, then after marriage, because he has no right of inheritance in his own country, he will have to come to England to live. This is somewhat similar to the marrying into in China, and it has nothing to do with the original country Austria. At that time, Ferdinand, who lives in England, will not consider other countries, but can only consider the interests of England. After all, everything in Austria belongs to his brother Charles and has nothing to do with him. Moreover, Prince Ferdinand is the grandson of the emperor, and his status is noble enough, so he will not humiliate the status of the English Princess Margaret. This plan was proposed and received support from many people in England. After all, this is a very good plan. Prince Ferdinand's status is noble enough, but he has no inheritance rights. In the future, he can live in London and focus on the affairs of the Kingdom of England. Everything seems so harmonious. Then, Marin was unhappy when he heard the news. Chapter 1898 Edward's Little Move. Why did Caesar and little Margaret's marriage have so many twists and turns? The problem still lies in the Treaty of Nantes signed by Edward, Marin and Louis XII. At the beginning, in order to obtain the support of France and Marin's North Sea Kingdom, Edward, before he entered England, concluded a tripartite treaty with Louis XII and Marin in the port of Nantes, France, in exchange for France and the North Sea Kingdom sending troops to help him seize the throne. But the problem is that Edward at the time was not the British monarch, but an exiled noble. The ministers of England could completely default on the treaty he signed. In addition, because it was a secret agreement, only the 3 bigwigs were present, and no representatives of other countries were present to notarize it. This became a problem. Without third-party notarization, it is difficult to be recognized by other countries. Of course, if Edward insisted on the validity of this contract, there would be no problem. But the problem is that Edward's attitude is also somewhat ambiguous and his position is not so firm. Therefore, there will be English ministers who jump out to make trouble. In fact, Marin is now fully capable of using force to force England to accept the contract. Anyway, this contract was not fabricated by him, and many people knew about its existence. But the problem is that if Marin forces England to publicly admit it now, it is equivalent to exposing his ambition to annex England. At that time, he will have to confront France in advance. Once France and the German princes join forces, Marin, who is not well prepared, may be beaten. Therefore, Marin is now unable to speak out and can only deal with this problem secretly. In addition, Marin also felt Edward's small moves in recent years. Probably worried that the 2 legions of the North Sea Kingdom would threaten his rule, Edward had formed 2 legions of 10,000 people directly under the royal family, including 7,000 longbowmen. But the combat effectiveness of these 2 legions has always been poor. It is not until the war to conquer the island of Ireland that these 20,000 people took turns to fight and practice their combat effectiveness through actual combat. Of course, Edward did not know that due to the lack of strict management and daily training of the North Sea Army, his 2 legions of 10,000 people could only be regarded as good in the old army of this era, and the gap with the new army of the North Sea Army was still not small. Some things can't be seen at ordinary times. For example, the North Sea Army trains very frequently, and they often do marching. Although it consumes a lot of energy and requires a lot of food for extra meals, it is very useful for maintaining combat effectiveness. Although Edward's 2 10,000-man legions also learned the recruit training model of the 2 legions of the North Sea, they were all old officers who were appointed, and they did not strictly enforce military discipline and daily training. These things seem to be trivial matters at ordinary times, but they can be distinguished on the battlefield. However, Edward and his old officers did not understand that they thought that after fighting a war of conquest of Ireland, the combat effectiveness of the army was comparable to that of the 2 North Sea legions. In addition, the slackness of daily training at ordinary times, in addition to the problem of officer management level, also includes cost issues. You know, frequent marching and armed cross-country will consume a lot of physical energy. At this time, you need to have extra meals frequently. Moreover, it is a high-energy meat extra meal. Otherwise, the human body will collapse. This is the same as the farmers feeding eggs and concentrated feed to oxen during the plowing period to prevent the oxen from being overwhelmed. After a large amount of exercise, you must make up a lot. Otherwise, the body will suffer losses. Of course, people who lose weight are excluded. In order to maintain the usual high-intensity training in armed cross-country, the North Sea military camp often has large pots of braised pork or braised lamb. There are many sheep in England, and lamb is cheap. At worst, they often eat high-protein meat such as salted fish. However, these all require a lot of cost. What's more, 20,000 people have to eat. Therefore, if you really eat like this, the cost is very expensive. Marin is a local tyrant, and he has no shortage of those, so he can naturally have the conditions to support soldiers like this. Therefore, the soldiers of the North Sea are usually well-nourished, have a lot of training, and are very physically fit. But England is a traditional agricultural country, and the British royal family's fiscal revenue also depends on the wool textile industry, and the income is not high. How much is England's fiscal revenue? About £120,000 a year. Most of it comes from the wool textile industry and tariffs. The income from the royal territory is only about £40,000, accounting for only 1/3. Of course, for England, an annual fiscal revenue of £120,000 is not a small amount. After all, that is equivalent to 480,000 golden gold coins. It seems that this is much less than France's 1.2 million gold coins per year, but this depends on the comparison of national strength. France has a population of 15 million and an annual fiscal revenue of only 1.2 million. England has a population of only 3 million, and with the population of Scotland and Ireland, it is only 3.75 million. With an annual fiscal revenue of 480,000 gold coins, the financial situation is definitely much better than that of France. After all, the English population is only more than 1/5 of the French population, but the fiscal revenue accounts for more than 1/3 of France. This is mainly due to the great development of England's wool textile industry, which has brought a lot of surplus income to the British royal family. If it only relied on the annual income of £40,000 from the royal territory, England would not dare to call itself a great power. It is precisely with the annual fiscal revenue of 400,000 to 500,000 gold coins that England is able to dispatch large-scale troops and people to fight wars for hegemony, and barely occupy a place among European countries. But neither England nor France knew that Marin was the most low-key super tycoon in Europe. If all the wheat produced in America could be sold, plus the annual domestic surplus of hundreds of millions of pounds of rye, plus trade and other miscellaneous calculations, Marin's annual fiscal revenue would definitely be worth more than 10 million gold coins. But the problem is that the European market is not that big, and there are not so many coins, so most of Marin's grain cannot be sold. In desperation, Marin can only use the excess grain to make wine, or even to raise pigs. Therefore, his fiscal revenue is not visible to ordinary people. The fiscal revenue displayed on the surface is only more than 1 million gold coins. These are calculated by people with intentions through foreign trade activities. And they cannot see the grain stored in the warehouses of the North Sea Kingdom and the Americas. Moreover, many of the more than 1 million gold coins on the surface are used to feed tens of thousands of troops. Therefore, on the surface, Marin's fiscal surplus is not much. In fact, the annual fiscal revenue of the North Sea Kingdom, not counting the grain that cannot be sold, is estimated to be 3 or 4 million gold coins. However, Marin's governing philosophy is different from that of the monarchs of this era. Therefore, his income is high and his expenses are also very high. For example, Marin promoted the digging of rivers and road construction in the North Sea Kingdom and carried out infrastructure construction. This kind of thing, the monarchs of this era will never waste money to do. They only know how to collect taxes, and it is absolutely impossible to want them to spend money for the people. The governing level of European monarchs in this era is generally very low, and they are still in a very primitive feudal era, which is similar to the spring and autumn period of China, and is far inferior to the feudal dynasty of China. Although the ancient feudal dynasties of China had high fiscal revenues, they also spent huge sums of money every year to build water conservancy, pave and maintain official roads, and improve the post station system. These conventional things cost a lot of money every year. However, the construction and maintenance of these inconspicuous infrastructures are the guarantee of a country's economic prosperity. But in this era, European monarchs will not spend money on those things. They only know how to collect taxes and then squander them. Of course, they still pay for the repair of the avenues they walk on. As for the roads that the people walk on, they will not spend money to help repair them. The most serious problem is in Germany. Because of the feudal separatism, the lords of various places are in charge of their own affairs. They are short-sighted and unwilling to pay for the construction of roads, bridges and other infrastructure. It is rare that a lord built a bridge, but in the end, it was to set up a checkpoint to collect tolls. Therefore, the economy of the German region has always been difficult to develop. However, unified countries such as England and France have gradually taken measures such as spending money to maintain official roads and opening post stations. After all, unified countries need smooth transportation and information to manage various places. However, affected by fiscal revenue. Countries with centralized royal power such as Britain and France are also unable to invest in infrastructure. It is already very difficult to maintain a few trunk roads and post stations. As for the others, it can only be blamed on the lack of money. For example, the problem of daily training of the army. Because they are unable to provide enough meat for the army, they can only cancel daily training and armed cross-country training. It's not that they don't want to, but they can't afford it. Moreover, the traditional officers also despise this kind of daily physical training, thinking that as long as the soldiers have rich experience, it is not very important whether they eat meat or not. Even if there is a difference, it is not very big. Edward obviously realized that the two 10,000-man legions that Marin placed in England posed a threat to his rule. Therefore, taking the opportunity to conquer Ireland, Edward used the excuse that Ireland has just been taken, and in order to prevent the locals from rebounding, a large army needs to be stationed. Then, he ordered 5,000 troops from the 4th and 5th Legions to be stationed in Dublin as a control and deterrence to the island of Ireland. In this way, the two North Sea legions left in England only had a total of 10,000 people. Moreover, the remaining 5,000 people of the 4th Legion were stationed in Newcastle, in the northernmost part of England. The remaining 5,000 people of the 5th Legion were even farther away, stationed in Edinburgh, and posed almost no threat to London. Then, Edward felt that the North Sea Army had only 10,000 people left on the British Isles, and it was still far away from London, which greatly reduced its influence on London. After that, London began to have all kinds of moths. Obviously, after Edward transferred half of the North Sea Army, he felt that the time was almost right, so he started to make small moves. However, according to spies lurking in the London Palace, Edward is not sure whether he can give birth to a prince, so he has not made up his mind to interfere with Princess Margaret's marriage. He is just making trouble for the time being. After all, if a prince is born, it doesn't matter who Princess Margaret marries. However, if it is confirmed that he can't have another son, Edward may make other plans. The main reason is that marrying Caesar, the heir of the North Sea Kingdom, does not seem to be good for England. Maybe it will drag England into the quagmire of the internal war for hegemony in Germany. Therefore, from the perspective of the English, Edward's choice is actually not a problem. However, he didn't know that his opponent Marin was a time traveler with a very high level. These little actions of his were completely exposed in front of Marin. Chapter 1899, Dealing with the Emperor. Frankly speaking, if we put aside Marin's identity as a time traveler and all kinds of black technology, from the perspective of a native of this era, choosing Prince Ferdinand is indeed better than choosing Caesar. Although Ferdinand was born of a noble family, he was ultimately a person without inheritance rights. Therefore, even if he married Princess Margaret, it would not affect the general trend of the two countries. Therefore, at that time, Ferdinand could only take over England, and in the future he could only consider England. As for Austria, his brother Charles would naturally consider it. At that time, England would just pick up a son-in-law with a noble status, which would not affect England's national interests. But if they married Caesar, many English ministers worried whether they would drag England into the extremely complicated war for hegemony in the German region. The chaos in the German region was known to all of Europe, and Marin's North Sea kingdom happened to be one of the vassal states with the most wars in the German region. Although it was said that when Marin was in power, he seemed to be very good at fighting, which allowed the North Sea kingdom to take advantage of it. But considering the long term, the English ministers were worried whether Caesar could fight like his father after he succeeded to the throne. Once Caesar could not fight, and he was the monarch of both the North Sea kingdom and England, then England would definitely be dragged down. At that time, the good men of England might be sent to the battlefield of internal hegemony in Germany as cannon fodder. It was based on such concerns that the monarchs and ministers of England were reluctant to marry the only little princess of His Majesty the King to Caesar, the heir of the German princes. After all, the fragmented Germany was a quagmire in the eyes of the English. If Marin had a second son who was about the same age as Princess Margaret, they would be reluctant to marry, but Caesar, the heir. In addition to the high degree of danger in the German region, the rejection of the North Sea kingdom by the German princes was also a concern for the monarchs and ministers of England. All of Europe knew that most of the German princes were not very friendly to Marin, the Grand Duke of the North Sea, and seemed to reject him. At present, because Marin is so good at fighting, other countries can only bear their dissatisfaction. However, if Marin dies and Caesar succeeds to the throne, it will be a big problem whether the North Sea kingdom can withstand the beatings of various vassal states without Marin, the god of war. Don't pull the young people of England to help him fight and die in vain. Prince Ferdinand does not have this problem. Although he is from the Austrian Habsburg family, he is not the heir. Even if Austria is trapped in the quagmire of war, it is his eldest brother Charles who should worry about it. Once Prince Ferdinand marries into England, he should worry about the affairs of England. Even if Austria needs to be supported because of in-laws and allies, the support is limited. After all, these are two families, and my family still has to make a living, and I will not sell my pots and irons to support you. Therefore, on the issue of Princess Margaret's marriage, the monarchs and ministers of England have never considered Maximilian I's grandson Charles, nor Prince Marin, the number one heir to Spain. Because England does not want to become a vassal of another country. In fact, Spain also intended to promote the marriage between Prince Marin and Princess Margaret. In this way, Spain and England become one, which makes it easier to attack France from the north and south. However, because of Marin's face, Spain was not active in this regard, so it just mentioned it casually. Seeing that England had no intention in this regard, it gave up. As for Emperor Maximilian I, he did not dare to offend Marin for this matter, and did not mention it. However, intelligence shows that it seems that Prince Philip, the son of Maximilian I, is very interested in the marriage between Ferdinand and Princess Margaret. This idiot thinks that it would be great if his second son could live in England. After all, England is also a powerful country, and it feels great to have his second son as king. As for the agreement between Marin and England, Prince Philip believes that it is not a formal and legal agreement, and it does not count. Moreover, it was England that broke the contract, and he was not going to rob it. If England took the initiative to ask for a marriage, he would have no reason to refuse. For this reason, Maximilian I ran to Ghent angrily and had a big fight with his son, and the father and son were very unhappy. It was not that Maximilian I was thinking about Marin, but Maximilian I knew very well that Marin was extremely powerful. With the existence of Marin, a powerful prince who was not welcomed by the noble alliance, those princes had to restrain themselves when facing the Habsburg family. After all, no one knew whether Marin would stab them in the back when those princes were fighting with the Habsburg family. Although Marin has not been particularly concerned about the Habsburg family in recent years, the two families are still allies with good relations and often hold each other for warmth. However, if according to the idea of Prince Philip, Ferdinand has indeed mixed up the throne of the Kingdom of England, but the main line of the Habsburg family will be miserable. Obviously, if Ferdinand dares to snatch Caesar's marriage, he will definitely completely anger Marin. At that time, Marin is likely to completely turn to the princes' alliance. The alliance of princes itself was extremely unbearable for the Habsburg family. If Marin turned against the Habsburg family and helped the alliance of princes to fight against the Habsburg family, God knows what would happen. What's more, the Habsburg family still needs Marin's secret support on the Swiss battlefield. At this time, Marin, who was full of opinions, came to Innsbruck to visit Maximilian I. Facing Marin, Maximilian I was a little embarrassed. Because, although this matter was caused by England, he was embarrassed by his son's short-sightedness. Your Majesty, I think we should find a hidden place to talk about it. Obviously, Marin had something inconvenient to talk to Maximilian I about. Then, the two entered the secret room. In fact, during this period, the Habsburg family was also very lively. All this stems from the marriage of the two princes. Prince Charlie was born in 1500 and is now 16 years old. He needs to find a marriage partner. Prince Ferdinand is also 13 years old and needs to be considered. At this time, the Portuguese royal family and the Bohemian royal family both sent requests for marriage, which put the Habsburg family in a dilemma. The one that Portugal requested for marriage was the eldest Princess Isabella, who was the original Queen Isabella in history. And the one that the Bohemian royal family requested for marriage was naturally Princess Anna, who was also the Queen of Ferdinand I in history. According to Marin's original suggestion, Maximilian I should choose to marry Anna of Bohemia for his grandson Charles, and Bohemia also thought so. But the problem is that the eldest Princess Isabella of Portugal is very beautiful and smart. Prince Charles met Princess Isabella, who was only 12 years old, when he traveled to the Iberian Peninsula last year, and then fell in love with Princess Isabella. Portugal also seems to be interested in making Isabella the spouse of Charles. After all, Charles has a great hope of becoming the Holy Roman Emperor in the future, and Isabella becomes the Empress of the Empire, and the Portuguese royal family will also have face. After all, that is the only recognized emperor in Europe. Moreover, Portugal, which enjoyed huge profits from spices, offered a condition that made the poorer Habsburg family take action. When Princess Isabella got married in the future, her dowry should be worth hundreds of thousands of gold coins. In fact, originally in history, Princess Isabella's dowry was 900,000 gold coins. The princess was beautiful and intelligent, and the dowry was very generous. Prince Charles really couldn't think of a reason to refuse this marriage, and he also strongly requested a marriage with Portugal. And Prince Ferdinand actually liked Princess Isabella a little. He also traveled to the Iberian Peninsula with his brother. Moreover, both of them were actually Princess Isabella's cousins, and they were relatives. Because Juana and Princess Isabella's mother Maria were sisters. It was normal for the two brothers to travel to the Iberian Peninsula and visit their aunt's house. Then, both of them fell in love with their smart and beautiful cousin. But his brother had too much advantage over him, and he was helpless. And his parents, Prince Philip and Juana, felt guilty about him, and actually wanted to marry Ferdinand to England. In this way, they could also let their second son be a king in the future. As for Anna of Bohemia, neither of them was interested. Why? Because they had all seen Princess Anna who visited Vienna. Princess Anna looked ordinary, not as beautiful as Princess Isabella, nor as smart and wise. Therefore, both brothers were somewhat uninterested. Maximilian I wanted his grandson Charles to marry Anna, but he was not sure that the Bohemian royal family would be extinct. If the Bohemian royal family was not extinct, then Princess Anna would have been married in vain. And today, Marin came to reassure him. Don't worry, Your Majesty, the Bohemian royal family will definitely be extinct. By then, the Kingdom of Bohemia and the Kingdom of Hungary will belong to Prince Charles. How can you be sure? Maximilian I was a little hesitant. After all, Portugal's promise of a dowry of hundreds of thousands of gold coins was indeed very tempting. Moreover, the grandson Charles himself liked his cousin very much. Although it was in a secret room, Marin still leaned in and whispered. Maximilian I's eyes widened immediately. Are you serious? Absolutely true. Marin nodded affirmatively. Maximilian I still didn't quite believe it, so Marin simply stroked the Bible and swore that what he said was true. Okay. I'll make the decision right now. Let Charles marry Princess Anna, and let Ferdinand marry Princess Isabella. Maximilian I said with a firm look in his eyes. Chapter 1900 Sweet Viciousness. Marin shook his head secretly, feeling very sorry in his heart. You know, those are two kingdoms. Not to mention the Kingdom of Bohemia, the current Kingdom of Hungary is one of the European powers. Because including Transylvania, its territory is almost 200,000 square kilometers, which is larger than Austria and the Netherlands combined. Moreover, the population is 4 million. Its only disadvantage is probably that it faces the threat of Turkey and is at the forefront of the war. In addition to the Kingdom of Hungary, there is also the powerful Kingdom of Bohemia, the Duchy of Silesia, and the Moravia region, all of which are ruled by Vladislav II. In other words, compared with the Austro-Hungarian Empire before World War I, the two are only one Austria away. Even because most of the Duchy of Silesia did not belong to the Austro-Hungarian Empire in later generations, the territory of Vladislav II today is no less than that of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in later generations. Giving such a large territory to Austria, Marin's heart is bleeding. However, he has no suitable heirs to take over. He only has one son, Caesar, who is old enough to marry Princess Anna, and his second son, William, is still very young. Moreover, even if he did not intervene, Princess Anna would marry Ferdinand. Speaking of which, it is in Marin's interest to divide the Habsburg family into two powerful forces. But the premise is that the Habsburg family must withstand the wave of attacks from domestic princes and Turks. If Marin's diplomatic status is much better than it is now, he will definitely allow Ferdinand and Anna to marry, and then divide the Habsburg family into two powerful branches. But Marin's own situation is also very bad, so he needs an MT to help him pull hatred and ridicule the entire Germany for him. Even ridicule France. Moreover, he is also responsible for resisting the attack of Turkey. Then, the North Sea Kingdom hides behind and concentrates on development. Therefore, this is very demanding for the Habsburg family. If it is divided into two countries, then the Austrian lineage, as the main line, may not be willing to mobilize all resources to help Ferdinand resist the pressure of Turkey. At that time, if Turkey defeats Hungary and Bohemia, then things will be a bit big. If the Kingdom of Hungary and the Kingdom of Bohemia all belong to the main line of the Habsburg family, then it will be different. By then, the Habsburg family can mobilize resources from all over the country. They can use the power of Austria to help fight against Turkey, and they can also use the power of Hungary and Bohemia to fight against the alliance of French and German princes. The most important thing is that a big tree attracts the wind. Imagine that the Habsburg family, which owns Austria, the Netherlands, and Switzerland, annexed the two crown kingdoms of the Kingdom of Hungary and the Kingdom of Bohemia. Would it not cause the envy of all of Europe? By then, all the hatred of Europe will be pulled over by the Habsburg family, and it will be much easier for me. Moreover, for Marin, England is indeed more important than Hungary and Bohemia. After all, England has strangled Germany's sea route to the Atlantic Ocean. If it does not annex England, it will be controlled by others and will repeat the tragedy of Germany in later generations. Marin remembered that Suleiman the Great of Turkey was already 22 years old. He would succeed to the throne in a few years and launch a full-scale attack on Europe. By then, Lajos II, the son of Ladislas II, is likely to die. Then, Austria easily got the two great powers of Hungary and Bohemia for nothing. It was only a few years later, but from then on, the Habsburgs would probably be busy resisting the Turkish offensive. Without the financial support of the Spanish Empire in history, the Habsburgs would definitely be at a disadvantage. At that time, he was busy cleaning up the princes in northern Germany, and the Habsburgs dared not to object. Because Marin could conclude that they would still need his help at that time. In the end, the Habsburgs, who were caught in the dilemma of being attacked by Turkey and France, might have to agree to occupy Lesser Germany and share the world with Austria. Otherwise, as long as he changed his position, Austria would collapse. Marin even thought that if possible, he could use a piece of land in the south to exchange the Netherlands in the future, so that the entire Netherlands would become the territory of the North Sea Kingdom. However, this means that they will directly border France. It's very unsafe. In the secret room, Marin's thoughts have spread and he began to be dazed. At this time, Maximilian I suddenly couldn't help asking, Marin, I remember that you opened the Häagen-Dazs ice cream chain, right? Do you want to make all the noble ladies in Europe infertile? Yes, what Marin had just quietly told Maximilian I was the secret that eating too much ice cream can easily lead to infertility. Marin's face suddenly darkened, and he said in a muffled voice, how can I be so sinister? I am also a victim, okay? At the beginning, my wife Angela also loved eating ice cream, and as a result, she was infertile for many years after giving birth to Caesar. It was not until later that I invited a court doctor with excellent medical skills from the Ming Empire in the Far East to discover this problem. Then, William was born. Maximilian I thought about it, and it was true. It seems that Marin's wife gave birth to their second child William many years after Caesar. Therefore, Marin's own preference for ice cream was definitely an unintentional pitfall for himself. Then why don't you make this risk public, asked the emperor. Marin asked meaningfully, then, Your Majesty, are you going to make this issue public? Maximilian I thought about it, and finally shook his head and said, although it seems immoral, as an emperor, keeping a secret is indeed the best choice. Yes, there are too many princes in Europe. If many of them die without heirs, it will help the unification of Germany. Your Majesty, promoting ice cream well will help you to take back the territories of those princes. Marin smiled inexplicably. Maximilian I's eyes lit up, and then he asked Marin, so, can you teach my chefs how to make the delicious ice cream of the Häagen-Dazs chain? Marin was stunned, then smiled, what? Your Majesty has figured it out and wants to open an ice cream shop in the enemy's territory. Unexpectedly, the emperor didn't think about this at all, I just want to arrange a chef who is good at making ice cream for my granddaughter Mary. Maximilian I made a cruel decision lightly. For the future of the Habsburg family, he was going to sacrifice the future of his granddaughter. However, this sacrifice was gentle, and there was no pain in the middle. On the contrary, his granddaughter would like this kind of life of eating ice cream every day. So, this is a sweet and vicious decision. There was a trace of pain in the emperor's eyes, but thinking of the future of the family, he strengthened his determination. Chapter 1901 Marin's True Purpose. Let the granddaughter eat ice cream since she was a child, and give her a professional ice cream chef. When Princess Mary grows up, her body is probably as cold as Xiaolongnu who sleeps on a cold jade bed every day. It would be strange if she can give birth to a child. Marin admires the emperor's cruel decision, but when he thinks of himself, he seems to have no right to despise the emperor. In fact, the emperor is only 50 steps, and he is only the 100 steps. However, unlike Marin, who was influenced by the strange idea of people are invincible when they are humble, in later generations, Maximilian I received an orthodox European knight education and actually attached great importance to morality. Therefore, he actually blamed himself for designing such a trap to frame his granddaughter. Therefore, the emperor later often confessed to the statue alone. The emperor was a politician, not a fool who confessed to the real priest in later generations. Even if he confessed, he only confessed to the statue, not to those greasy priests. God knows whether those priests are tight-lipped and will leak secrets. Only a fool who knows nothing will really tell those greasy priest uncles about their privacy. If Marin ran to confess in front of those greasy priest uncles, it must be like this: Father, why am I so good? I am guilty. My sin is that I don't take care of my body. Alas, for the country and the people. After confessing in his heart for 5 minutes, the emperor suddenly looked up and said, "Hey, your idea is very good. Well, I decided to find a way to open a few ice cream shops around the palaces of rebellious princes such as Saxony and Lorraine, so that these rebellious princes' descendants will have difficulties." Humph. Thinking of the consequences of the descendants of those princes who disobeyed him, the emperor laughed sinisterly. The emperor is indeed a graceful knight king, but he has been forced into a very embarrassing situation by powerful princes such as Saxony and Lorraine over the years. Therefore, when the emperor thought of these 5 guys who committed treason, he gritted his teeth in anger. Now that there is a way to deal with them, how can the emperor not be happy? By the way, I will also open an ice cream shop in Paris, so that the French royal family will also, hee. They are all conspirators, and the emperor did not hide it in front of Marin. After all, this conspiracy was invented by Marin. Marin was a little speechless, thinking, are you waiting for you to do it? I have already sterilized Francois I. However, he dared not tell this secret, and could only flatter the emperor. Your Majesty is wise, this is how to deal with the damn French. Well, I will immediately send the best ice cream master to teach the technology. But Marin continued, I helped your Majesty plan the annexation of the Kingdom of Hungary and the Kingdom of Bohemia. Can your Majesty do me a favor? What favor? Maximilian I asked casually. I hope that your Majesty will pretend to be very interested in the marriage between Ferdinand and Princess Margaret in the next 2 years, and help me attract the attention of the French. Marin said seriously. It turns out that this is the real purpose of Marin's personal visit to Austria this time. If it is just to prevent the marriage between Prince Ferdinand and Princess Margaret, a letter is enough to explain the benefits and disadvantages. There is no need for Marin to come to Austria in person to talk to the emperor, let alone tell the secret that ice cream can cause uterine cold and infertility. The reason why Marin came here in person this time is that he hopes that the emperor can help him play a play, temporarily fool the monarch and ministers of England, and also attract the attention of the princes of France and Germany. Even, it can minimize the prince's vigilance against the North Sea Kingdom. This method is to deliberately let the emperor show that he is very interested in the marriage between Ferdinand and Princess Margaret. Then, the French will definitely be angry and focus on the Habsburg family. Moreover, Marin can also take the opportunity to pretend to break with the Habsburg family on the surface because of this. At this time, the princes saw that Marin and the emperor had a falling out, and they would definitely relax their vigilance against Marin. Then, Marin will have the opportunity to immigrate on a large scale. At the same time, Marin planned to expand the army under the pretext of falling out with the Habsburg family, and pretended to compete with the Habsburg family and invade the Netherlands. At this time, the princes would not only not stop it, but would probably support Marin. But Marin's real intention was to take the opportunity to recruit more mountain people from southern Germany as soldiers. The ultimate goal is to expand the army and prepare for war to deal with the invasion of France. The emperor frowned after listening to Marin's request. Why? If I do this, I will greatly offend the French. In this way, the pressure on the Netherlands and Franche-Comté will be great. Obviously, the emperor was a little unhappy. Because this would annoy France, causing France to take many countermeasures against the Habsburg family, which would bring great pressure to the Habsburg family. Marin also knew this, so he dropped a bombshell. Your Majesty, although this will cause temporary trouble to the Habsburg family, in the end, it will all be worth it. What do you mean? The emperor became interested. I plan to fight the French in 2 or 3 years. If I defeat the French army, do you think the Habsburg family has a chance? Maybe you have a chance to take back the former Duchy of Burgundy. Fight France in 2 or 3 years. Why? Are you sure? The emperor stood up in surprise, feeling incredible. He knew Marin's military strength, but compared with France, the North Sea Kingdom was still a little worse. After all, if the French go crazy, it's no problem to burst out 100,000 troops. What's more, France has the cooperation of the Duchy of Lorraine and other traders in the German region. Marin shook his head and said, I'm not sure, but this battle has to be fought. Why? Huangdi was puzzled, because England. Marin didn't say much, but the emperor understood in seconds. You mean, France will not allow the North Sea Kingdom to own England? Oh no, it should be that France will not allow the maritime power England to own a land power like the North Sea Kingdom. The reason is simple, England can cause great trouble to France at present. If they merged with a land power like the North Sea Kingdom that could beat 10 with 1, it would pose a greater threat to France. In order to nip the threat in the bud, as long as there are signs of a merger between England and the North Sea Kingdom, the French would definitely send troops to intervene. They couldn't cross the sea to attack England, so they could only attack the North Sea Kingdom from land. Marin nodded. That's right, so if you want to annex England, you will definitely have to go to war with France. It's not that I want to fight, but the French will definitely fight me. So, in the next 2 or 3 years, I must make full preparations to resist the French attack. At that time, if your Majesty does not open an opening in the direction of the Netherlands, then the French can only break in from the pro-French country of the Duchy of Lorraine. So, I plan to overhaul the fortifications in the southwest direction, and prepare to rely on a solid line of defense to hit the invading French army. As long as the invading French army can be defeated, the marriage with England can be confirmed. At the same time, it can also hit the prestige of France and even weaken the strength of the French army. At that time, maybe your Majesty can also take advantage of the opportunity to add insult to injury, and take back the Duchy of Burgundy from the French when they are defeated. Maximilian I nodded repeatedly after hearing this. No wonder the North Sea Kingdom has recently built many fortresses and walls in the southwest. It turns out that they are preparing to defend against the French attack. Thinking of the fate of the mortal enemy French after the defeat, the Emperor was very excited. So, he said without hesitation, okay, I will cooperate with you to play this scene. At that time, we will pretend to fall out, so that you have more opportunities to prepare. However, if the pressure from the French is too great, don't worry, I will secretly support your Majesty with weapons and food. If you can defeat France, then the arrogance of those princes in the country who have second thoughts will also be lowered. At that time, if there are conditions, maybe I can help you destroy the resistance army in western Switzerland. In order to let the Emperor help him cover, Marin also promised casually. But there is a pit in his promise, if there are conditions. Whether there are conditions or not, it is still up to him. The Emperor was very excited after hearing this, and felt that the Habsburg family had hope for revival. Therefore, he happily reached a series of cooperation intentions with Marin and discussed the details of the performance in detail. Chapter 1902, The Beautiful Cousin is Gone. After completing the negotiation, Marin returned to the country, and the Emperor rode north with him to discuss things with his son and grandson in Ghent, the Netherlands. This matter was too secret, and the Emperor did not dare to explain it in the letter. Once it was leaked, it would be a catastrophic disaster. Therefore, the Emperor rode north to the Netherlands, regardless of his 57-year-old age, and had a secret talk with his son. What? Let Charles marry Princess Anna? Prince Philip was shocked when he heard the old Emperor's plan. But after hearing the vicious plan, unlike the Emperor who felt guilty, Prince Philip, who was cold by nature, made up his mind almost without hesitation. Okay, let Charles marry Princess Anna. But we must take the opportunity to ask His Majesty Władysław II. Prince Lajos must marry our Mary. Maximilian I also nodded. Of course, Prince Lajos marrying Mary is the premise for all this to be realized. In the face of huge interests, the father and son who had always been at odds stood on the same position tacitly for the first time. When 16-year-old Prince Charles could not marry his beautiful and wealthy cousin, but could only marry the plain-looking Princess Anna of Bohemia, he was so angry that he refused to eat for 2 days. His younger brother Ferdinand was the opposite. He was very happy when he learned that he could marry a beautiful cousin of the same age and get a large sum of money. Before, because of his own conditions, he knew that he could not compete with his brother, and he was sad. Now, his wise grandfather actually let his brother marry the mediocre Princess Anna and let himself marry the goddess Princess Isabella, which made him overjoyed. Seeing that his beloved grandson refused to eat for 2 days, Maximilian I was also very helpless. However, Charles was still young, and those conspiracies and tricks could not be told to him. If they were leaked, it would be a big trouble. Therefore, Maximilian I could only find Charles and hint to him that if he married Princess Anna, he might get 2 very large and powerful kingdoms, the Kingdom of Hungary and the Kingdom of Bohemia, and their 2 crowns. After all, Prince Charles often received Maximilian I's teachings and stayed in Austria for a few months every year. Unlike the original history, although he was not taught by his smart Aunt Margaret, because his father did not die young as in the original history, the Netherlands did not need him to be in charge, and Spain did not need him to be in charge. Therefore, every winter, Prince Charlie would go south to Austria to avoid the cold and, by the way, receive the teachings of his grandfather. Maximilian I was a politician of a higher level than his daughter Margaret. Under his teachings, Prince Charlie was no worse than Charles V in history. Therefore, after 2 days of hunger and his grandfather's sincere persuasion, he had no choice but to accept this cruel fate. However, no matter how he asked, Maximilian I did not tell him why he could get the Kingdom of Hungary and the Kingdom of Bohemia by marrying Princess Anna. Of course, he knew about the agreement signed by Maximilian I and Władysław II that if the other party died, they would inherit each other's territory. But Prince Lajos, the heir of Bohemia and Hungary, was alive and well. Did his grandfather intend to assassinate Prince Lajos? With all kinds of ideas in his mind, Prince Charles resumed eating. While eating, his romantic father also came to visit him. The romantic Prince Philip patted Prince Charles on the shoulder and said, "Don't be discouraged, son. Isn't it just marrying an ugly princess? Don't be afraid. At most, your father will find you 10 or 8 beautiful mistresses, and I guarantee that none of them is worse than Princess Isabella." Prince Philip relied on his handsomeness and high status to harm many girls in the Netherlands. There were more than a dozen mistresses alone, which made his wife Juana often fight with him. But Prince Philip, as a classic scumbag, was naturally eloquent and good at speaking. Often when Juana quarreled with him, he could always coax Juana in the end. Then, continue to be a scumbag. Prince Charles was somewhat dissatisfied with his father's behavior, but this kind of thing was common among the nobles. Even his grandfather Maximilian I, who seemed very decent, had 2 or 3 mistresses outside. In this era, if a monarch did not have a mistress, he would be embarrassed to say hello to people when he went out. Even the Pope, the previous Pope Alexander VI, had several mistresses. The current Pope Julius II also had a mistress. After thinking it through, Prince Charles said while eating, "Okay, I will give my cousin to my brother. But, Dad, you have to help me find a few girls who look like my cousin." "No problem, find a few little lovers who look like Princess Isabella, right? Leave it to me." Prince Philip snapped his fingers and quickly called his subordinates who usually helped him find women to take charge of this matter. In order to get things done, Prince Philip sent that subordinate to go to Lisbon under the pretext of sending gifts between relatives and saw what Princess Isabella looked like. Then, he went to the Netherlands to find girls who looked like him. Later, Prince Charlie had several lovers who looked like his cousins. Moreover, every time he was with these lovers, Prince Charlie would automatically put himself into the situation and call them cousins. Then, after his younger brother married the legitimate Princess Isabella, he tried to secretly hook up with his cousin who had become his younger brother's sister. Fortunately, Princess Isabella ignored him, and Ferdinand moved away and reduced his contact with his brother. After all the arrangements, Prince Charlie was the only one who was dissatisfied. Of course, there was also an ignorant Princess Mary who was cheated without knowing it. Afterwards, Maximilian I and Prince Philip sent representatives to contact Vladislas II and proposed a marriage exchange. Vladislas II didn't know that he was cheated, and he was also very satisfied with his son marrying Princess Mary, who was of noble birth, and then the marriage was concluded. But Maximilian I suggested that the marriage be concluded secretly because he had to cooperate with Marin in acting, and then officially announced it 3 years later. Vladislas II didn't understand why, but he still agreed. Then, it was time to act. The Habsburgs continued to contact the Portuguese royal family and ambiguously agreed to the marriage, but did not specify whether it was Prince Charles or Prince Ferdinand and Princess Isabella. Then, according to the plan agreed upon by the father and son, Prince Philip publicly expressed his strong interest in the marriage between his second son Ferdinand and Princess Margaret of England. But soon after, Emperor Maximilian I also stated that he did not support this marriage plan. But Prince Philip seemed to have a tough attitude and said that he would marry England. This drama of the father and son fighting within the Habsburg family shocked the crowd of spectators. Then, Marin's statement made the spectators even more excited. Marin publicly stated that what's mine is mine, don't just grab it. Obviously, the relationship between the once close Habsburg family and the North Sea Kingdom has a huge rift because of this incident. Then, the anti-Habsburg princes in Germany were excited. Chapter 1903, Goal Achieved. Originally, according to the plan discussed by Marin and Maximilian I, the emperor also publicly expressed his support for the marriage between Prince Ferdinand and Princess Margaret. But later, after the emperor and Prince Philip discussed it, they thought it was too fake. After all, the consequences of offending Marin are obvious. The emperor is not so stupid, which is unreasonable. So, in the end, the emperor decided to let Prince Philip be the villain. Anyway, Prince Philip has been the villain before. Then, he will make a painless opposition. It shows that his IQ is online, and then deliberately show that he can't control his son. In this way, everything is reasonable. Next, Prince Philip continued to perform hard for Marin's statement. Prince Philip stated that the legendary Treaty of Nantes was not witnessed by a third country, and Edward was not the monarch of England at the time, so it had no legal effect. Moreover, the British and French sides have never officially announced the existence of this treaty. Therefore, he is not considered to be robbing. After his statement came out, the English side expressed silence and did not refute. As for France, it was impossible to form an alliance with England anyway. As if to break up the alliance between the mortal enemy Habsburg family and the Grand Duchy of the North Sea, the French deliberately let several ministers say in private that they had never heard of the Treaty of Nantes. Obviously, the French also wanted to take the opportunity to make trouble and provoke the relationship between the Habsburg family and the North Sea. After all, the Habsburg family is an old enemy of France, and the French do not want such a strong support for their old rival. As soon as the French attitude came out, it seemed that the North Sea was passive. What's more, England did not express its position on this matter. In this way, the secret agreement concluded by the 3 parties was almost abolished if 2 parties did not recognize it. At this time, Marin finally, furious. In an occasion with foreign guests present, after mentioning this issue, Marin was so angry that he smashed several exquisite porcelains on the spot. Porcelain, why do you always smash me for no reason? Later, Marin said that in view of the instability of the western border, he decided to form the 7th Army and station it at the western border of West Frisia and Munster where it borders the Netherlands. Things have developed to this point, and it is almost going to tear up and go to war. At this time, the Habsburg family finally panicked a little and sent people to negotiate. But what is jaw-dropping is that the stubborn Prince Philip still believes that the marriage between Prince Ferdinand and Princess Margaret of England is appropriate. Oh my God, how could His Majesty the Emperor give birth to such a stupid son? But I like, hee. The German princes expressed their own views on this matter when they met privately. Except for a few princes who had good relations with the Habsburg family or the North Sea Kingdom, most of the other princes were gloating over this matter and watching strongly. I heard that the North Sea Kingdom is currently recruiting soldiers for war. Is it going to send troops to the Netherlands to teach His Royal Highness Prince Philip a lesson, said a prince from the southern mountainous area at the princes' gathering. How about we give Marin an opening this time and let them recruit people, said another prince. Let's listen to Lord Frederick's opinion, said a prince with a steady personality. Lord Frederick is the leader of the princes, Elector Frederick III of Saxony. Yes, let's listen to Lord Frederick's opinion. The other princes also echoed. Seeing that the princes were asking about this matter, Frederick III did not express his opinion immediately, but sent his men to visit the western border of the North Sea Kingdom in the name of doing business. As a result, the Saxon spy unexpectedly discovered that the North Sea Kingdom seemed to be building fortresses and fortifications on the western border, as if preparing for war. This spy was not professional enough. If he was careful enough, he would find that these fortresses were all in the southwest, not in the west. But coincidentally, this spy only went to the southwest border of the North Sea Kingdom and saw the scene of preparations for war. So, the North Sea Kingdom is really preparing for war. Marin is really angry. Frederick III couldn't believe it. And Joachim I, the Elector of Brandenburg, who happened to be a guest at the Wittenberg Palace, said while drinking, how can I not be angry? Marrying Princess Margaret of England is equivalent to taking the throne of England. To be honest, I want my son to marry England. It's just that I'm not familiar with His Majesty Edward. Yes, the throne. Frederick III understood. For the throne, it is indeed easy for two allies to turn against each other. But for the German princes, this is indeed great news. As the most resourceful of the princes, Frederick III drank a sip of wine and said leisurely, I guess this new legion is probably prepared for the Habsburg family. What do you mean? The princes around were very curious. Everyone forgot that Marin still has two 10,000-man legions in England. You mean? Marin plans to lead troops to force the palace in England? Some smart princes guessed what Frederick III meant. Frederick III said confidently, that's right, the competition with the Habsburg family doesn't make much sense. So, I guess that in the end Marin will still transport this new 10,000-man legion to England and fight a civil war in England. King Edward of England currently has two 10,000-man legions in his hands. If Marin sends one more, it will basically be stable. As long as England is dealt with, what the Habsburg family thinks is not important. That's not right. Marin has 4 legions in the country. Can't he just transfer 1 or 2 over? Why should he form a new legion? Joachim I was a little puzzled. Frederick III said confidently, it's very simple. When sending troops to England to fight for the throne, the cunning guy Marin also had to guard against his home base being raided. This guy does things watertight, and it is impossible for him to give others the opportunity to raid his hometown. Therefore, it is a very safe approach to leave 40,000-man legions in his hometown. It's a pity that a generation of resourceful gods made up a seemingly reasonable and bizarre conclusion in their minds. However, this can't be blamed on Frederick III. How could he have thought that the marriage dispute between Marin and the Habsburg family was actually a play performed by the two families? The basic argument of the speculation is wrong, and it is normal to get the wrong conclusion. Then should we still recruit soldiers for him in the south? Asked a prince. Frederick III smiled confidently and said, give it to him, why not? No matter what he does in England, the North Sea Kingdom and the Habsburg family will definitely go their separate ways this time. After a pause, Frederick III said, besides, even if Marin succeeds in his fight for the marriage with England, it will greatly offend France. After all, France has always been eyeing England. So, the final result is that the Habsburg family and the North Sea Kingdom broke up, but while the North Sea Kingdom gained England, it also provoked a powerful enemy, the Kingdom of France. From then on, Marin not only lost the strong support of the Habsburg family, but also faced the powerful France. Do you think he will still have the mind to participate in the hegemony of Germany in the future? I am afraid that if he dares to mess around and give France an opportunity, they will send troops to beat him. At that time, we will respond to France, hee. After a while, some princes who had figured it out laughed. Joachim I thought for a long time and suddenly realized, I understand. What you mean is that even if Marin wins the battle for the throne of England, he will provoke a powerful enemy like France. In the future, he will not have the energy to cause trouble in the German region? Frederick III nodded and said, yes, whether Marin wins or loses this battle, he will break with the Habsburg family. Moreover, if he wins, it will be more beneficial to us. Because he will provoke a powerful enemy like France, and he will also have to face the resistance of the opposition forces in England. From then on, he will have no time to take care of other things, and even face many crises. So, let's cooperate for the time being and let them recruit soldiers. Okay, we understand. The princes who came to the party nodded in agreement. What the princes present did not know was that after the banquet, a carrier pigeon took advantage of the night to fly into the sky and flew back to the North Sea Kingdom. There was only one sentence on the note on the pigeon's leg: recruitment has been allowed, and the purpose has been achieved. Chapter 1904, Recruiting 5,000 Sailors. In fact, for the current North Sea Kingdom, the conflict with the Habsburg family is secondary. The most important thing is actually the conflict with Portugal. After all, the conflict with the Habsburg family does not necessarily require war, but the conflict with Portugal, if not handled properly, will really have to go to war. Therefore, while Marin was playing a double act with the Habsburg family, he was also actively preparing for a secret contest with Portugal. While people were generally paying attention to the rumors of the discord between Marin and the Habsburg family, 5,000 soldiers and horses of the North Sea Kingdom had quietly boarded the ship and landed at the port of La Coruña. In order to prevent the Portuguese from blocking, Marin dispatched most of the ships this time and quietly transported 5,000 people to the port of La Coruña at one time. When the Portuguese learned the news, 5,000 people had already set up camp outside the city of La Coruña. Upon hearing the news, the atmosphere in the royal palace of Lisbon, Portugal was solemn. Obviously, what they were most worried about happened. Marin knew to attack Portugal through Spain. That's not all. What they couldn't accept the most was that Spain agreed to let the North Sea army land so readily. Manuel I angrily questioned Juan III in the name of Queen Maria, but Juan III said calmly that he owed Marin a life, and letting the North Sea army land in Spain once or twice was just to repay the debt of favor. Besides, Spain is confident that it can stop the North Sea army from harming Spain. Yes, Spain has this confidence. After all, they are a powerful country that dares to confront France, and they have the confidence to say this. What's more, the North Sea sent only 5,000 troops, which was really not taken seriously by the Spanish. However, the Portuguese were uncomfortable. Even if there were only 5,000 troops, it was enough to scare the Portuguese. Because Portugal, like England later, had a really bad army. Moreover, the later English lobster soldiers were actually not bad, but they could not be compared with the first-class armies of Germany and France, and they could be considered second-rate. But the Portuguese army was not even second-rate. You know, in the War of the Three Kings, in 1578, Portugal sent out 25,000 troops with all its strength, but was defeated by Morocco, which was still a nomadic nation in terms of technology, and the king was killed in the war. Then, Spain had the opportunity to annex Portugal. Moreover, the 5,000 people sent by the North Sea Kingdom were all elite soldiers selected from the 1st Legion of the North Sea Kingdom, which was famous and had never lost a battle. Even if Portugal sent out 20,000 troops, it had no confidence to fight against such a force. It could only guarantee that it could defend several strong cities with superior forces. Yes, defend the city with superior forces. This is the sadness of a country with a weak army. When facing the threat of Spanish invasion, Portugal could only concentrate its superior forces to guard several large cities such as Lisbon, and dared not confront Spain head-on. Historically, in the War of Spain's annexation of Portugal, only 20,000 troops were sent on land, and it annexed Portugal with great momentum and ruled Portugal for 60 years. If Spain had not participated in the 30 Years' War and suffered repeated defeats, giving Portugal the opportunity to regain independence, Portugal would have continued to be ruled by Spain. Now, the reason why Spain did not annex Portugal is that in addition to the fact that it was more laborious to besiege several fortresses in Portugal, the French would not sit idly by, which is also an important reason. In 1580, France had just been pressed to the ground by Charles V for a few decades, and its national power was declining. Moreover, there was a religious war in the country, the Huguenot War. At that time, France was unable to attack Spain from behind to force Spain to return to defense. Therefore, the then King Philip II of Spain was relieved to send a large army to annex Portugal. But now it is different. France is not at a disadvantage facing Spain. Although Spain has a lot of money, France has a strong foundation and many elite soldiers. When the two sides fight, as long as they do not attack the long with the short, and play their own advantages, they can still fight with Spain. At this time, if Spain wants to send 20,000 to 30,000 troops to besiege Portugal, the domestic strength will definitely not be as good as France. As long as France takes the opportunity to send out a large army to attack Spain from behind, Spain will have to withdraw its army. Therefore, Portugal is not too worried about Spain annexing it, but it will still be cautious. But the North Sea Kingdom is different. This country does not border France, and France is restrained by Spain, England, and the Habsburg family. If the North Sea Kingdom sends a large army to attack Portugal through Spain, France will not be able to do it. After all, if the North Sea Kingdom is angered, and the North Sea Kingdom is determined to join forces with Spain, England, and the Habsburg family to besiege France, France will not be able to bear it. Moreover, the army of the North Sea Kingdom does not need to capture Portugal. They only need to burn, kill, loot, and cause great destruction in various parts of Portugal to make Portugal suffer. Portugal does not have the ability to invade the North Sea Kingdom, and can only strike the North Sea Kingdom's maritime power at most. But the North Sea Kingdom's army, with these 5,000 elite troops in La Coruña, can stir up trouble in Portugal and cause great losses to Portugal. No matter how you calculate it, Portugal will suffer. Therefore, the previous idea of attacking the port of Emden and burning the ships of the North Sea Kingdom would be difficult to implement. Moreover, this incident was, after all, caused by that idiot Rui Silva. Afterwards, the North Sea Kingdom did not take any drastic actions. It just took away the spices to make up for their losses and sent soldiers to rescue their people. There was no radical action. The only additional loss was probably the deliberate damage to the islands of São Miguel and São Jorge when attracting the warships of Porto Engre to leave the port. Originally, the Portuguese government and the opposition wanted to vent their anger and establish their prestige with the North Sea Kingdom. However, they did not expect that the North Sea Kingdom was still a difficult opponent to deal with. If they really established their prestige with the other party, they would also be established by the other party. In particular, the damned Spain actually agreed to let the North Sea army land and borrow the passage. After all the calculations, the Portuguese government and the opposition felt that this matter was very unfavorable. Therefore, they could only give up with resentment. At the same time, in England, Marin took advantage of the conflict with the Portuguese to publicly recruit sailors in England, saying that he wanted to form a North Sea fleet to protect the safety of the North Sea countries' coastal areas. Since the development of the wool textile industry in England, the enclosure movement has emerged, and there are 200,000 to 300,000 refugees who have nowhere to settle all year round. Marin's recruitment of sailors from these refugees this time can be regarded as a way out for them. Before, considering that there was no excuse, Marin also specially withdrew from the measure of loaning money to buy fishing boats, encouraging these refugees to go fishing at sea, and then train them to join their own navy. But this conflict with the Portuguese gave Marin an excuse to compete. Marin simply didn't beat around the bush and told Edward about the grievances with Portugal and asked to recruit 5,000 sailors in England. Edward was very unhappy, because the stronger Marin's military strength was, the greater the threat to him. Originally, England still had a maritime advantage. Even if the North Sea country had a strong army, it would not threaten England if it could not cross the sea. However, if the North Sea Kingdom had 5,000 sailors and a powerful fleet, England would lose its maritime advantage. If the North Sea Kingdom was allowed to land troops without scruples, England would have no power to resist. However, he had also heard about the conflict between the North Sea Kingdom and Portugal. Moreover, Marin was sincere and well-founded, and Edward could not find an excuse to refuse. Therefore, he could only accept it reluctantly, but only asked that these 5,000 sailors must be stationed in the North Sea Kingdom instead of in England. Marin naturally agreed. There was no need for him to quarrel with Edward on this matter. When these 5,000 sailors are trained, can't they go wherever they want? You know, a 500-ton warship has only 180 crew members. 5,000 people can control 28 warships, which is enough to form a powerful fleet. After learning that Marin recruited 5,000 sailors in England, Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony, proudly said to his friends and princes, "See, am I right? Marin is really planning to take action in England. This new fleet of 5,000 sailors is clearly to cover the 10,000-man army landing in England to participate in the war. Lord Frederick is wise." The princes flattered him. Chapter 1905, Catastrophic Disaster. The reason why Marin recruited sailors on a large scale in England was really a helpless move. At this time, the North Sea Kingdom actually had tens of thousands of sailors, serving 90 merchant ships and 30 warships in the North Sea shipping. However, there were only about 5,400 real sailors on 30 warships. The others were armed merchant ships, and the sailors on them usually ran commercial shipping and did not train much. When the real fight came, it still depended on the 5,400 sailors who regularly conducted combat training. But shipping is so important that it is the economic lifeline of the North Sea Kingdom. Therefore, Marin could not stop the operation of merchant ships and conduct combat training every day. If those merchant ships happened to go out to sea to transport goods, once there was a war, Marin could only rely on the 30 warships. Just like this time, because 10 warships went to the Far East, Marin could only rely on 20 warships and 20 to 30 armed merchant ships at home. Therefore, Marin made up his mind this time to double the fleet to 60 ships to completely ensure the safety of the sea. But the problem is that there are too few fishermen in the German region, and the total number of Frisians is less than 100,000. Including non-Frisian Germans who fish, there are only about 100,000 fishermen. Drawing tens of thousands of strong men from them as sailors has already affected the fishing industry of the North Sea. Therefore, Marin can no longer draw fishermen from Frisian fishermen. Otherwise, there will be no strong men to drive fishing boats. And women can't do heavy work such as driving boats and raising and lowering sails. Therefore, if you want to expand the navy, you can only think of other ways. The English happen to be an ideal recruiting target. Maybe it's not wise to recruit infantry in England. After all, the English are not very tough on land. However, the English are a group that is good at running at sea. They are not very prominent on land, but they are like dragons entering the sea at sea and become awesome. Just like the conflict between England and France, since the French used artillery to break the advantage of English longbowmen, the English have never been able to beat France on land. However, at sea, England is like a god, always beating the French to the ground. Moreover, England is rainy all year round, and the English are also very adapted to the humid climate at sea. Even English farmers who are not good at swimming adapt to life at sea much faster than German farmers. There are relevant records in Marin's American colonies. In the American colonies, the tens of thousands of English disaster victims who immigrated there were mostly farmers. But later, seeing that fishing in the Newfoundland fishing grounds was a big harvest and they could eat fish every day, many English farmers changed their careers with the support of the colonial authorities, and they adapted quickly. Now, the fishermen fishing in the Newfoundland fishing grounds are already mostly English. It was because of this performance that Marin made up his mind to select some people from the 200,000 or 300,000 landless farmers in England to be sailors. However, he had not found an excuse to recruit soldiers before. After all, recruiting soldiers is a big deal and it is difficult to get permission. Therefore, Marin could only save the country in a roundabout way by borrowing money to buy fishing boats, first dragging those landless farmers in England into the water and then trying to recruit them into the army. But now, with the conflict with the Portuguese, Marin has an excuse to recruit sailors. Even Edward could not openly oppose this excuse. Why, you want to stop them from guarding the country's maritime security? It is said that 5,000 people will be recruited, but in fact Marin will recruit about 5,400 people, which is just enough to operate 30 warships. In this way, the total number of 500-ton warships of the North Sea will reach 60. With sufficient gunpowder, you can fire at will. Such strength is definitely the best in Europe. Marin was thinking, after solving the French problem, should he pull the fleet over to abuse the Portuguese and then grab the benefits from them? However, if the Portuguese are beaten too hard, it seems that it will be a bargain for the Spaniards. Obviously, if Marin crippled Portugal, Spain would definitely take the opportunity to add insult to injury and maybe annex Portugal. At least, it would annex Portugal's interests in India. And this is not what Marin wants to see. If Spain completely monopolizes the huge profits of the Indian spice trade, then the benefit Spain gets will be no less than the benefits when it monopolized the Americas in history. But the problem is that in this time and space, there is no Charles V to squander the gold and silver earned by Spain. Originally in history, most of the money Spain earned from the Americas was used by Charles V to engage in the European hegemony, and he did not get much benefit. But because Marin saved Juan III, Spain in this time and space does not need to throw money into the bottomless pit of European hegemony. By then, Spain's financial resources will be extremely strong. Although Spain also participated in the Italian hegemony was not as pit as Charles V's simultaneous fight against France, Turkey, and the German princes' alliance, and the cost would be much less. Without the bottomless pit of European hegemony to throw money, Spain may continue to strengthen its navy and make it a force that can threaten the colonies of the North Sea. Therefore, Marin thought about it and felt that Portugal could not be destroyed, so as not to benefit Spain. Therefore, the best option is that when a naval battle breaks out between the two countries in the future, the fleet will deliberately let Portugal go on the premise of ensuring victory, so that it can retain its vitality to resist the erosion of Spain. But it's too early to say that, because Marin is not that strong yet. At the same time, in the far far east, a sea battle is about to break out. De Gama and the main force of his fleet have returned to Deepwater Bay on Hong Kong Island and are resting here. Then, De Gama is ready to move to Zhoushan Islands, a little north of Daming, and plans to find an island there as a base to invade the most prosperous coastal areas of Jiangsu and Zhejiang in Daming. After returning from Tamsui City, De Gama began to prepare to return to Hong Kong Island immediately for repairs. However, after catching a down-and-out scholar on the coast of Fujian, after hearing the introduction of this person, De Gama changed his decision and took the fleet north to Zhoushan Islands. Of course, the 3 injured warships first returned to the temporary base in Deepwater Bay on Hong Kong Island for repairs. Afterwards, the 3 injured ships will return to Malacca port for a thorough overhaul after a simple repair. There, the Portuguese established a large-scale ship repair factory. During an accidental operation along the coast of Fujian, De Gama captured a down-and-out scholar named Hong Hongjiu. This man was very spineless. After being threatened by the Portuguese, he did not come up with the trick of Sun Jiren to get away with it, but simply cooperated with the Portuguese and sold out the interests of the Ming dynasty. Under the guidance of Hong Hengjiu, the Gama's fleet went directly north to Zhoushan Islands for an investigation. At this time, due to the maritime ban policy in the early Ming dynasty, only Zhoushan Island had tens of thousands of residents and a Changding highway. Except for several islands near Zhoushan Island, the other islands of Zhoushan Islands were basically not managed by the Ming court and were in a semi-abandoned state. There were only one or two illegal small fishing villages on those islands, where some fishermen who fished secretly lived. After the Gama's fleet arrived at Zhoushan Island, it encountered strong resistance from Ding Haiwei and he failed to capture the local city. Subsequently, his fleet conducted an investigation in Zhoushan Islands and found that most of the islands outside Zhoushan Island were undefended, which was very suitable for setting up bases. Moreover, the most important thing is that this place is very close to the Suzhou and Hangzhou areas that Hong Hengjiu mentioned as being rich in silk. As long as we gain a foothold here, we can approach Suzhou and Hangzhou at any time. Even if we cannot capture this area, we can greatly deter the Ming dynasty. Because, the shameless Hong Hengjiu said that the Suzhou and Hangzhou areas are the financial and taxation centers of the Ming Empire and belong to the core area. As long as this place is taken, the core interests of the Ming dynasty will be touched. At that time, they will have no choice but to compromise. After making a plan, the Gama led the fleet back to Hong Kong Island. Hong Hengjiu, who was already in a state of decline, followed the Gama directly on the ship. Anyway, he was determined to sell the Ming dynasty. The reason why the Gama had to return to the temporary base in Hong Kong Island was because there were a lot of stolen goods piled up here. Since the base was moved, these stolen goods must naturally be taken away together. However, he did not expect that it was this stop in Hong Kong Island that caused the Portuguese fleet to suffer a devastating disaster. Chapter 1906, The Great Victory at Deepwater Bay, Part 1, The delay in the return of the Gama fleet made Wang Hong, the deputy envoy of the Guangdong-Guangxi Sea Road in Nantou Water Fort, very anxious. His water ghost troops have been trained almost completely, and more than 100 fire ships and warriors who operate the fire ships have also been recruited. Now, they just have to wait for the return of the Portuguese fleet. However, Wang Hong waited and waited, but he could not wait for the return of the Gama fleet. In the middle, 3 injured ships returned for simple repairs, and then turned south. Probably, they went back to another bandit nest in the south for overhaul. However, Wang Hong did not gain nothing. After Lu Xiaocai offered his advice, Wang Hong arranged for the water ghosts to undergo special training with the purpose of destroying the tail rudder. Of course, it was not a complete destruction, but to create obstacles so that it could not be used normally in a hurry. However, what Lu Xiaocai said was only theoretical, and the water ghosts had never seen the real thing, so they could only use the tail rudder of the Ming dynasty ship as the training object. But in fact, there are differences between the tail rudders of the east and the west. It was not until the days when the 3 damaged ships were repaired at the Deepwater Bay dock that Wang Hong had the opportunity to send out the water ghosts. They sneaked under the Portuguese ship at night and carefully checked the tail rudder of the Portuguese ship. Moreover, they found the object of destruction. The Portuguese ship was different from Marin's North Sea Kingdom ship. The tail rudder of the North Sea Kingdom ship was changed to a labor-saving steering system controlled by a steering wheel and a dynamic sliding lever. The Portuguese ship still used the traditional European crowbar-style tail rudder system. When turning, strong sailors need to use iron rods to pry the top of the huge rudder of the ship to make it turn and change the direction of the ship. The water ghosts found that inserting iron nails into the gap on the rudder shaft did not work well. Because if the other sailor is strong, he can still pry the rudder. At most, it will cause some damage to the rudder. Therefore, it is better to use a dagger with a narrower blade and a thinner blade to insert it into the gap of its rotating shaft. With the dagger's blade blocking it, it would be difficult for the Portuguese sailors to pry the rudder. In view of this, Wang Hong specially ordered the craftsmen in the Ming army to make 30 narrow and thin daggers with fine steel to destroy the rudders of enemy ships. Unfortunately, he was ready, but the main force of the Portuguese fleet was slow to return. If the spy had not told him that the temporary base in Deepwater Bay was full of stolen goods that the Portuguese had robbed from the coast of the Ming dynasty, Wang Hong almost suspected that the Portuguese would not come back. Deputy Envoy Wang had no idea that Hu Jian had a bad scholar who was in charge of Hong Hengjiu, who instructed the Gama to go north to Zhoushan Islands and set the combat strategy of using Zhoushan Islands as a springboard to attack the coast of Jiangsu and Zhejiang. If they succeeded, with the military preparations in Jiangsu and Zhejiang at that time, I am afraid that they might really succeed. Not to mention the fall of Jiangsu and Zhejiang, at least the coast would be greatly damaged. After all, in this conflict with Portugal, the Ming court had only made preparations in Guangdong and Fujian, and did not set up defenses along the coast of Jiangsu and Zhejiang. However, it seems that luck is still on the side of the Ming dynasty. As expected, the Gama's fleet returned to Deepwater Bay on Hong Kong Island for repairs. After all, the Gama was reluctant to part with the various stolen goods piled up on the temporary dock at Deepwater Bay. On the day Gama's fleet arrived at Deepwater Bay, several Ming Army night spies, military spies, quickly traveled through the mountains and forests until they left the site of the Deepwater Bay area in the south of Hong Kong Island, and released the pigeons in the cage around their waists. About an hour later, Wang Hong of Nantou Water Fort got the news. So Wang Hong loudly ordered, "All soldiers, prepare for battle." However, that night, although the moon was very round, the wind direction was not south, which was not conducive to fire attack. So Wang Hong had to wait patiently. This wait lasted for 3 days. 3 days later, the Gama's fleet was ready, and the most valuable part of the stolen goods was loaded on board, and the worthless part was discarded, ready to move the next day. That night, in the Portuguese camp in Deepwater Bay, the Portuguese sailors drank the rice wine they had robbed and ate the meat from the pigs they had robbed on the shore. They were very happy. At the banquet, Hong Hengjiu, who had been serving as da Gama's military advisor, worriedly said, "Governor, da Gama was appointed as the governor of the Portuguese Ming dynasty. Is it too risky for the whole army to drink? Otherwise, should we send a group of people to guard the camp and the dock?" After understanding Hong Hengjiu's words through the translator Bernardo, da Gama waved his hand indifferently and said, "Don't worry, Hong, we have been docked here for 3 days. If the Ming army wanted to attack at night, they would have done it 2 days ago. So, I think they should be afraid. After all, Portugal's warships and artillery are stronger than those of the Ming dynasty. I led the fleet to travel along the coast of the 2 provinces, and I didn't see the Ming navy being able to fight us. So, they should be scared. Moreover, I also took a dozen sentries to stand guard at night on the dock, so there will be no problem. Besides, the rice wine of Ming dynasty is not very strong, and people will not get drunk after drinking it, so it won't be a problem. Hong, you don't know that in Europe, people usually don't drink plain water. Generally, they drink wine as water when they are thirsty. So, we are used to drinking." What da Gama said was true. In the Middle Ages, Europeans were afraid of getting sick, so they didn't dare to drink raw water, so they drank wine as water. The rich and the priests drank wine, and the poor drank inferior beer. However, the alcohol content of rice wine is generally higher than that of wine and beer. Therefore, even if they are used to drinking, the Portuguese sailors who drank rice wine still feel a little drunk. After eating and drinking, the Portuguese went to bed and prepared to move out early tomorrow morning and go north to Joshan Islands to establish a new base. The location of the new base that da Gama took a fancy to is called Liuheng Island. There is a fishing port called Shuangyu on the west side of the island, which is a very good port. Da Gama planned to establish a military port there, using it as a springboard to first invade the nearby prosperous Ningbo prefecture, and then go north along the coast to invade Suzhou and Hangzhou. However, they did not know that just after the entire Portuguese army fell asleep, hundreds of large and small ships quietly approached Deepwater Bay from the south under the moonlight. When they were near the small island of Yubazu at the mouth of Deepwater Bay, the Ming Navy General Lin Tianhai said nervously, "Shuisheng, are there any Portuguese scouts on this island?" The captain of the water ghosts, Zhao Shuisheng, said, "My lord, the Portuguese do not seem to have the intention of staying for a long time again. Therefore, no outposts were set up on Yubazu. Besides, they are leaving soon, and there is no need to make such a fuss." "That's good, pass the order down." The fleet carefully bypasses this island and is ready to attack the enemy. "What's the situation with you water ghosts?" Zhao Shuisheng replied, "They should have sneaked under the deck of the Portuguese ship by now. Once they have inserted their daggers into the gaps of the enemy's rudders, they will release 2 Kongming lanterns into the air. By then, we can set fire to attack the enemy's dock." "Okay, pass the order down, temporarily lower the sail and wait. Once you see Kongming lanterns rising into the sky, immediately raise the sail and move forward, approach the enemy ship, and light the firewood and kerosene on the ship." "Understood." Then, on the Ming army ship, those with good night vision stood on the bow and stared at the Deepwater Bay dock to see if there were any Kongming lanterns rising. Chapter 1907, The Great Victory at Deepwater Bay, Part 2, around 1 a.m., 2 Kongming lanterns finally rose near the Deepwater Bay pier. At the Deepwater Bay temporary pier, the Portuguese sailors on duty were shocked to see the 2 Kongming lanterns suddenly rise. "Oh, God! What is that? What kind of lantern can actually fly?" The Portuguese had never seen a Kongming lantern, so they were naturally confused. However, they were confused, but the Ming army was not. At the edge of Iba Island, after seeing the Kongming lanterns rise into the sky 2 miles away, the naval commander Lin Tianhai loudly ordered, "Beat the drums, raise the sails. Fire ships attack." Then, the war drums on the flagship sounded. At this time, on the Taiping Mountain, a few miles west of Hong Kong Island, Wang Hong was also guarded by a large group of guards, standing on the mountain and looking southeast. Suddenly, he heard a faint drumbeat in the silent night, and Wang Hong knew that the decisive battle had begun. In the sound of war drums, accompanied by drumbeats, the fireboats raised their sails in order, took turns passing through the waterway west of Wanwa Island, entered Deepwater Bay, and then quickly lined up and rushed into the bay along the southwest wind. Because the attack had been launched, the Ming army no longer remained silent, but heard bursts of shouting and killing. The Portuguese sailors on duty at the dock finally felt something was wrong and began to shout, "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" The Portuguese soldiers who were lightly sleeping were awakened and got up to check the situation with curses. Many Portuguese sailors who were drunk with rice wine were still snoring. Rice wine is not high in alcohol, but it is really easy to get drunk. Many Portuguese sailors didn't feel anything when they drank it, and they slept very deeply after falling asleep. Hong Hingjiu didn't drink much, and he was awakened early when he heard the noise. When he hurriedly put on his clothes, the Ming army's fireboat fleet had already lined up and began to rush towards the dock. Among them, some of the fireboats in the front row had already started to ignite, and the flames on the boats had risen. No, burning red cliffs. Hong Hingjiu had also listened to the storytelling of the Three Kingdoms, and naturally knew the classic Battle of Red Cliffs. So, seeing the flames rising on the sea 1 mile away, he knew that something was wrong. So he rushed to the house where the Gama lived and shouted, "Governor, send someone to maneuver the boat to avoid it. Send someone to maneuver the boat to avoid it." The Gama had just put on his clothes and came out. Before he could figure out what was going on, he heard Hong Hingjiu's terrified shout. "What's going on? Bernardo, ask Hong what he is shouting." Bernardo immediately started communicating with Hong Hingjiu, and then, cold sweat flowed down Bernardo's head. After understanding what Hong Hingjiu meant, Bernardo immediately ran to the Gama and said, "Governor, Hong said that the enemy is rushing over with a row of fireboats. There are flammable things such as oil and sulfur on the fireboats. Once they stick to our warships will be burned. Fuck." The Gama couldn't help but burst into swearing, so he shouted in horror, "Everyone, get on board quickly, maneuver the sailboats to leave the anchorage and hide to both sides. Everyone, get on board quickly, maneuver the sailboats to leave the anchorage and hide to both sides. Everyone, get on board quickly, maneuver the sailboats to leave the anchorage and hide to both sides." The Gama shouted 3 times in a row, and many Portuguese sailors who had woken up hurriedly began to board the ship, preparing to raise the sails and drive the ship away from the dock. However, many drunk Portuguese sailors were still sleeping. The Gama shouted angrily, "Don't worry about those drunkards, everyone, get on board quickly. Hurry up and drive the boat to avoid the burning enemy ships." At this time, the front row of fire ships were only about 300 meters away from the outermost warships at the dock. At this time, the speed of the fire ship was about 5 knots, which was a little more than 2.5 meters per second. The distance of 300 meters can be reached in about 2 minutes. Even though some Portuguese sailors moved quickly, the outermost Portuguese warships had been stuck by the Ming army's fire ships and began to burn. Seeing this situation, Da Gama was so angry that he jumped up and down. In the Portuguese sailor camp, many people were scared and ran around like headless flies, and there was a sign of the camp exploding. Hong Hingjiu gritted his teeth and suggested, "No matter what, Governor, take the sober soldiers and board the closest ship to escape, and escape as many ships as you can." Da Gama felt distressed, but he also knew that Hong Hingjiu's suggestion was correct. Therefore, he could only bear the pain and take the first group of Portuguese sailors who woke up, boarded the warships closest to the innermost side, and regardless of whether there were enough people, he directly raised the anchor and dropped the sails, and began to run away. However, as soon as he started to control the ship, everyone realized that something was wrong. Because the rudder could not be pried. Oh no, it must be the Ming army that destroyed the rudder. Hong Hingjiu was sweating profusely. But he knew that if he was caught, he, a traitor to his nation, would surely die, and his whole family would be implicated. In desperation, he could only suggest to Da Gama, "Governor, quickly send someone to check the stern rudder." Then, some Portuguese sailors jumped into the water and began to check the stern rudder. At this time, the outermost Portuguese warships had already been on fire. Moreover, the gunpowder barrels on the ship also caused a secondary explosion, which accelerated the burning of the warship. On the inner side, more than 10 Portuguese warships that forcibly pulled anchor and set sail, the first 2 were unable to turn the rudder and directly crashed into the coastline. Finally, an experienced diving sailor found the culprit of the rudder failure, and he shouted, "Pull out the dagger stuck in the rudder. Pull out the dagger stuck in the rudder." Hearing his words, the sailors who jumped into the sea at the stern of more than 10 Portuguese warships that had started to check began to look for the dagger on the rudder. Then, before the fire ship arrived, a total of 7 warships successfully restored the function of the rudder. Rush out of the gap between that small island. Seeing that the exit of the Deepwater Bay west of Wanwa Island was blocked by the Ming army's fire ship, Da Gama had to take a risk and rushed to the narrow shallow waterway between the east of Wanwa Island and Hong Kong Island, which was easy to run aground, with the 7 warships that had restored their navigation ability. Fortunately, the tonnage of Portuguese warships at this time was not large, only 200 or 300 tons. Therefore, several ships successfully passed. However, the flagship, Prince Henry, that the Gama was on, because of its largest tonnage, unfortunately ran aground in this narrow waterway. Abandoned ship. Let's go to the Lyria. Seeing that the unfortunate Portuguese warships behind him had already caught fire in the fireboat array, the Gama had to reluctantly order the abandonment of the flagship for fear of being caught by the Ming Navy. The 450-ton Prince Henry and the crew took a small boat to the Lyria. Seeing this scene, the warships behind the Ming army immediately came to chase. However, the stranded Prince Henry happened to block the Ming Navy warships, giving the first few Portuguese ships a chance to escape. In the end, the remaining 6 ships entered the shallow bay and fled to the center of the sea in a panic. Moreover, unfortunately, the crews on the 6 ships that escaped were seriously insufficient. There were often only about 50 sailors on each warship of 150 people. In other words, only about 300 people escaped from the Portuguese fleet of about 3,750 sailors, less than 1/10. Moreover, most of those who escaped were pure sailors, with very few gunners. Even though there were many cannons on the ship, most of them were useless. Seeing this, da Gama was so sad that he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood and fainted. Chapter 1908, All Burned. Da Gama was also lucky. At this time, the Ming Navy was struggling to rush into the deep water bay and did not notice the situation in the southeast. They noticed several ships in the southeast, but did not know that there were big fish on the escaped ships. Seeing that the Prince Henrique was stranded and blocked the way out, they were too lazy to chase it, but turned around to rob the Portuguese warships. At this time, because da Gama took a group of captains, officers and a small number of sailors to board the ship and escape quickly, the Portuguese on the shore were leaderless and had become like headless flies. Of the more than 10 ships that were started, only 7 ran away, and 1 was stranded. Seeing that the Portuguese were in chaos, the commander of the Ming Navy changed his order and ordered the seizure of ships. As a result, of the 25 Portuguese warships on the dock, except for the 6 that escaped, the remaining 19 and 12 were burned, and the remaining 7, including the stranded Prince Henrique, were all captured by the Ming army. As for the shore, the Ming army, which had been ambushed in the mountains for a long time, also took advantage of the situation to kill, and the shouts of killing shook the sky for a while. The Portuguese, who had long been leaderless, had no will to resist. After dozens of stubborn elements were killed, the rest surrendered. After dawn, the Ming army soldiers who had completely occupied Deep Water Bay began to clean up the results of the battle. At the same time, they moved the stolen goods from the ship. Fortunately, the most valuable gold and silver treasures looted by the Portuguese in Guangdong and Fujian this time totaled 400,000 taels, all on the largest flagship, Prince Henrique. As for the other ships, they were mainly porcelain and silk. Those silks were naturally burned with the ship, and most of the porcelain sank into the sea. But for the people of the Ming dynasty, silk and porcelain were not valuable at all. Gold and silver were the most important, and those copper coins and copperware. Great victory! Great victory! At noon, at the temporary camp on Taiping Mountain, the messenger sent from Deep Water Bay ran and shouted as soon as he entered the camp gate. Mr. Deputy Envoy, Navy General Lin, Tianhai, Tongji and Infantry Commander Yang have defeated the Portuguese army. Among them, Lin Tongji's navy burned 12 enemy large-deck ships and captured 7 ships, and only 6 enemy ships escaped in the chaos. Commander Yang led 5,000 infantry to attack the enemy camp on the shore, killing 79 enemies and capturing 3,351 foreign devils alive. Good! 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 Wang Hong excitedly slammed the table and said, "Good," 3 times in a row. After the messenger took a breath, he said, "In addition, the property looted by the Portuguese along the coast of the 2 provinces has basically been loaded on the ships. In addition to the property on the burned ships and the several ships that escaped in the chaos, a total of 390,000 taels of gold, silver and copper coins were seized from the 7 captured ships, 10,000 were stolen. There are also various properties worth more than 20,000 taels." Well. In other words, most of the property was burned with the ship? Wang Hong said regretfully. The messenger replied, "Yes, sir, but Lin Tongji speculated that the Portuguese should have put all their money on the largest captured ship. The rest of the ships were mostly filled with silk and porcelain." Wang Hong breathed a sigh of relief and said, "That's good." In his opinion, silk and porcelain can all be reproduced. But gold, silver and copper are scarce and still very precious. The messenger asked again, "Commander Yang and Lin Tongji ask your lord, how to deal with the captured foreign ghosts and ships?" Wang Hong thought about it and was about to speak, but Lu Feng, who had been silent next to him, stopped him and said, "Wait a minute, Dong Wang, Feng has something to say." Wang Hong looked at Lu Feng in confusion, and after dismissing his attendants as Lu Feng requested, he asked in confusion, "Iji, Lu Feng's courtesy name, what do you want to say?" At this time, Lu Feng had been recruited by Wang Hong as a retainer, that is, a master. But Wang Hong didn't know that LV Feng was just a spy sent by Kong Tai, and he had his mission. As mentioned earlier, LV Feng's father was ill and needed expensive medicine, but his family was poor and helpless. Seeing this, the people sent by Kong Tai bribed LV Feng with a large sum of money, so that LV Feng could successfully save his father. In ancient times, the grace of saving one's father was very heavy, so LV Feng later joined Kong Tai. Moreover, Kong Tai treated him very well, an annual salary of 500 taels. What is the concept? The annual salary of the county magistrate of the Ming dynasty was 45 taels, and his annual salary was 11 times that of the county magistrate of the Ming dynasty. Of course, the income of the county magistrate of the Ming dynasty must be more than 45 taels, and there are many ways for people to make money. But who is LV Feng? He is just a poor scholar. And the county magistrate is at least a jurin. Moreover, a county magistrate who is not too greedy may not be able to get 500 taels a year. In addition, Kong Tai also promised that everything he did would not harm the fundamental interests of China, which made LV Feng feel at ease. This time, LV Feng came to give Wang Hong advice according to Kong Tai's instructions. Ahem. Dong Wang, how do you plan to deal with the 7 captured deck ships? Of course, hand them over to the court and let the court deal with them. If they can be sent to the capital for display, it can also promote the prestige of our Ming dynasty. Wang Hong said without hesitation. LV Feng said seriously at this time, Dong Wang, have you heard about the story of Mr. Dongshan hiding the sea map and the treasure ship map? Wang Hong frowned and said, what do you want to say? Dong Wang, what I want to say is that to promote the prestige of the country, the more than 3,300 foreign ghost prisoners of war can be released to the capital, and those ships cannot be kept. LV Feng said very solemnly. Why? I see that those Portuguese deck ships are strong and powerful, and they are weapons for naval warfare. Why don't you keep them and copy them for use by our Ming dynasty? Wang Hong said unhappily. He is a smart man. He can see the superiority of Portuguese warships, so he naturally wants to copy them. Don't do that, Mr. Dong. If you do that, it will be a waste of the efforts of Mr. Dongshan and the officials in the court. Lu Feng advised. Why? Wang Hong didn't understand. Don't you understand, Mr. Dongshan seemed to have hidden the sea charts and the treasure ship blueprints because he didn't want the court to do the same thing as the eunuch Sanbao did when he sailed to the west. You also know that the eunuch Sanbao wasted more than 1 million yuan of national treasury when he sailed to the west. Now, the sea charts and the treasure ship blueprints have been hidden by Mr. Dongshan. And Mr. Dong, you know that the emperor is fond of martial arts. If he gets this deck ship and imitates it, how much national treasury will the court waste? Now, the governor is leading a large army to quell the rebellion in Fujian. If your majesty is in a moment of excitement and spends a huge amount of money to build a ship, it will inevitably cost the treasury. If there is not enough money, your majesty may order a tax increase. But since your majesty ascended the throne, there have been many civil unrests. If you increase taxes again, won't it be that the officials force the people to rebel? After hearing this, Wang Hong broke out in a cold sweat. Based on his understanding of Emperor Zhengde, if he really gave him this big toy, he would really build it on a large scale and then go to the west or something. It's nothing else, our emperor is just willful. So, he saluted to Lu Feng with a serious face and said, thank you Iji for teaching me. So, Iji, what should we do with those big ships now? In addition, if the Portuguese come to invade our sea again, how should we deal with it? Lu Feng laughed and said, Dong Wang, if the Portuguese come again, don't we already have a mature countermeasure? Moreover, this is your first time using it in actual combat. In any case, you can't escape from being recorded in history. You mean, fire attack? Wang Hong also understood. Indeed, with this great victory, the Portuguese warships can just follow the same trick when they come again. Moreover, this trick is in line with the literate's idea of winning by wisdom and strategy, and he, Wang Hong, will definitely become famous in the future and leave his name in history. Lu Feng nodded and said, Feng would like to congratulate Dong Wang in advance on his fame and success. Wang Hong also laughed, and after laughing for a while, he asked again, then, Iji, what should we do with the 7 captured ships? Burn them all. Lu Feng said lightly. Chapter 1909, Strong Ships and Powerful Guns, only powerful guns left. Burn them all. Wang Hong was surprised. Then, he hesitated and said, Iji, these 7 ships are all very solid and resistant to arrows and stones. If they are repaired and renovated, they can be used by the Guangdong and Guangxi Navy. If they are burned like this, wouldn't it be a pity? At worst, we can just send the foreign ghost prisoners of war to the capital. Lu Feng bowed and said, Dong Wang, don't think like that. The foreign ghost deck ship is so huge, it's too eye-catching. Moreover, the court has spies from the factory and guards scattered all over the place. If they know about it and report it to His Majesty, given His Majesty's character, I'm afraid he will force the Navy to send these ships to the capital. By then, if His Majesty is interested, he will definitely order a large-scale construction. At that time, the plans of Mr. Dongshan and other officials in the court will be in vain. Wang Hong was shocked when he heard this, and he also remembered that this is the Ming dynasty, and the factory and guards are everywhere. If they know about the existence of the large ships, they will definitely report it to the emperor to please Zhengde. What kind of person is Emperor Zhengde? He once ordered the whole country to present rare and interesting things for his entertainment. And the Western deck ship is just a rare and interesting thing. If those factory guards knew about it, they would definitely report it. Then, he hesitated and said, but if we burn them now, the factory guards may find out. Maybe there are spies from the factory guards in this army. Lu Feng smiled and said, Dong Wang, if you order the burning of the ships tomorrow, it will definitely give others an advantage. But what time is today? The war is in full swing. Burning the ships now is during wartime. If you order the burning of the deck ships before noon, it can only be regarded as improper command before the battle. But then again, this battle was won under your command, Dong Wang. What's wrong with ordering the burning of enemy ships during a war? What about the supplies on the ships? Of course, unload them and then burn the ships. Okay, come on. Pass the order down and order Lin Tianhai, the co-director of the Navy, to immediately transport all the property on the 7 ships that were seized. Then, set fire to the 7 ships before noon. After a pause, Wang Hong said again, in addition, tell Lin Tianhai privately that the 380,000 taels of gold, silver and copper coins on the ship must be shipped back without a penny less. This is the hush money Wang Hong gave to Lin Tianhai. 10,000 taels of silver is enough to shut Lin Tianhai's mouth. You know, this is not the end of the Ming dynasty when maritime trade was popular. At this time, in the Ming dynasty, 10,000 taels of silver is definitely a huge sum of money. Only a powerful eunuch like Lu Jin can receive bribes of this amount. Lin Tianhai eats empty salaries and drinks the blood of soldiers. It is scary to have 1 or 2,000 taels a year. After all, he is just a battalion officer of Nantu Water Fortress, and his oil and water are limited. But Wang Hong didn't know that Lin Tianhai had embezzled 10,000 taels before. Giving Lin Tianhai another 10,000, Lin Tianhai made a fortune this time. And in this era, a small courtyard house in the capital is only worth a few dozen taels. Lin Tianhai got 20,000 taels at once, and he could buy hundreds of small courtyard houses in the capital. If Lu Jin was still in power, these 20,000 taels could be sent over to exchange for a general soldier. However, Lin Tianhai would definitely not take the 20,000 taels of silver alone, and he would definitely give some to his subordinates as hush money. And Wang Hong specially approved him to embezzle 10,000 taels, and he would at least give Wang Hong 2,000 taels as a kickback. Sure enough, with the stimulation of money, Lin Tianhai had the supplies on the 7 Portuguese warships, including artillery and ammunition, unloaded and transported ashore before noon. Then, he ordered a fire to burn the 7 ships. It was not until then that Lin Tianhai officially ordered the troops to be withdrawn. And the withdrawal of troops also means that the battle is officially over. In this way, no one will be able to trouble Wang Hong about this matter in the future. Because the burning of the ship was done before the sound of the gong, it was not a violation. Moreover, the experienced Lin Tianhai really took 2,000 taels from the 10,000 taels of silver that the internet celebrity specially approved him to embezzle, and quietly gave it to Wang Hong. When the silver arrived, Wang Hong said nothing, and even didn't look at the silver ingots, but stared at the desk. But Lu Feng took it very tactfully, and then asked Wang Hong's reliable servant to put the silver ingots into the book box, and the servant personally looked after it. When Lin Tianhai's personal soldiers were about to leave, Wang Hong slowly said, Lin Tongji has commanded well this time, and his merits will definitely be seen in the memorial. Let him prepare for promotion. Lin Tianhai's personal soldiers left with a happy face. Military generals like Lin Tianhai were no longer popular in the Ming dynasty, where civil officials had already begun to rule. Although it was not to the point in the late Ming dynasty that high-ranking military generals had to kneel and salute when they saw low-ranking civil officials, they were also suppressed in various aspects. For example, although this battle was specifically commanded by Lin Tianhai. However, in the Ming dynasty, which valued civil officials over military officials, court officials often attributed the main credit to Wang Hong, who planned and strategized. How much merit Lin Tianhai had was purely determined by what Wang Hong wrote in his memorial. If Wang Hong wrote more about Lin Tianhai's merits in his memorial, the greater the benefit Lin Tianhai would get. Although Wang Hong would still take the lion's share of the merits in the end, as an unpopular general, it was considered lucky to follow Wang Hong and drink some soup. When Wang Hong was writing the memorial at night, he frowned, and Lu Feng hurriedly asked why. Wang Hong sighed and said, Iji, I said in the memorial that the Portuguese had strong ships and powerful artillery, but all my ships have been burned. How can I make the court believe that the Portuguese have strong ships? Lu Feng thought for a while and said, Sir, I think you'd better change strong ships and powerful artillery to powerful artillery. In this way, His Majesty will not pursue the issue of ships after reading it. In addition, the results of the human fort in repelling enemy ships will not be exaggerated in the memorial. Then, Your Majesty can also suggest setting up more forts in important coastal and river towns to resist the pirate ships. In this way, neither His Majesty or the court officials will pay attention to the issue of ships. But setting up forts in important coastal towns will cost a lot. Isn't it almost the same as Your Majesty building large ships to sail to the west? Lu Feng shook his head and said, "It's different, sir. Whether or not we build big ships, important coastal towns, such as Fuzhou, Quanzhou, Hangzhou, etc., must be protected. Now that Westerners have discovered this place, the Portuguese came today, who knows who will come tomorrow? I heard from Dongfan Island that there are hundreds of countries in the west. Except for the North Sea Kingdom, which is relatively submissive to the Ming dynasty, most of the other countries are pirates and like to plunder. There are several countries in the west that are good at maritime plundering like the Portuguese. The Portuguese came today, who knows who will come tomorrow? Moreover, Japanese pirates from the east may also come to plunder. Therefore, it is necessary to set up artillery batteries in important coastal towns. Although it is a waste of national treasury, it is also a helpless move. And building large ships to sail to the west is unnecessary." Lu Feng's words are very consistent with the Confucian idea of moderation and preservation. Wang Hong was also very satisfied after hearing this, so he specially erased the "ships are strong" in "ships are strong and guns are powerful." Then, only "guns are powerful" was left in the memorial.